Halloween 2. Harry Crow. Can anyone tell me what's the point behind posting someone else's work as your own? I don't post my work anywhere else but here, and certainly not under any other name than Robst. When a reader PM'd me with a link to my work posted elsewhere, under a different name, I immediately checked it out. This author had 24 stories posted, most of which I recognized. At least half a dozen are on my favorites list. I only managed to report 3 before the ops had him shut down. Kudos to Wattpad. The right action taken with a response time measured in minutes is very impressive. I make no claim to own Harry Potter, but Harry Crow, and my 11 other stories, were all written by me. Chapter 42. September gave way to October as the school year marched on relentlessly. Adding the 4 older boys to their Sunday training was paying dividends all round. The 4th years were getting sick of ending up on the floor every time they fought and continually pushed themselves harder to put a stop to this occurrence. Their efforts kept the 4 friends on their toes, and also working harder to maintain the current 100% record. As they were leaving the room of requirements, Harry had a question for the older wizards. How would you 4 like to give us a hand with the Marauders on Tuesday night? We're planning on trying to teach them how to cast a shield charm, and the smaller the group we can work with, the better it will be for them. Cedric was astonished at this. You're teaching first years the Protego charm. Padma seemed to think the teaching methods were being questioned here. What's wrong with that? We learned it last year when we were their age. Easy Padma, Cedric didn't mean anything. Hermione then went on to explain their reasoning to the 4th years. The shield charm is one of the most important we learn at Hogwarts. We just don't see any reason to wait until 3rd or 4th year before tackling it. Professor Weasley taught it to us earlier than this last year. Harry confirmed what his girlfriend had just said. Hermione's right, it makes no sense. Yes, they will need to be older to cast a powerful shield, but learning it now should make that part easier. We're only aiming for a shield that will stop a stinging hex cast by a fellow first year. It was a thoughtful Roger who replied. That actually is so logical I can't fault it. Starting them off now will mean they've already mastered the spell for when they're older. Why isn't it taught earlier? It was the twins who jumped in with an answer to that. Hey, we've got Lockhart, remember? Yeah, does anyone here think that Pratt can actually cast a shield? You'll get no takers for that. See you guys at lunch. Neville gave Padma's arm a reassuring squeeze before he and the twins headed into their dorm. Padma then took the opportunity to apologize. Sorry for snapping at you, Cedric. The Marauders is about the only thing in my life that's going well at the moment. I thought you were criticizing the club. No problem, Padma, and I'll be delighted to help out any time you'll let me. As the 2 witches headed up the stairs, a shower and change of clothes being required before lunch, Hermione broached what she knew would be a touchy subject. Have you made your mind up yet? The slump in Padma's shoulders indicated how hard this was for the girl. Mum wrote back and advised me to go. I haven't been able to discuss it with Parvati since she barely speaks to me now. Lavender says she also rarely sees Parvati now. She thinks my sister is hanging about with Blaze. Why wouldn't she tell me that she had a boyfriend? Blaze seems a nice enough guy, a bit stuck up but still nice. Hermione now had her arm around her best friend. Padma enjoyed the comfort before voicing her decision. I've decided just to go. Staying here without you 3 and Parv not talking to me would just be too much. We're going to be some bunch, between the 3 of you worried about your parents and me my sister, it'll be some Halloween celebration. This drew faint smiles from both girls before Hermione's thoughts turned to someone else. I think Luna will miss us too. She's offered to watch Moonlight for me. Since I won't be going home, I said yes. She's as attached to that cat as you are. Perhaps we should think about getting her one for her birthday. Hermione was now shaking her head at Padma's suggestion. Don't mention that around Harry. He's practically adopted the girl, and Moonlight would be so jealous of another cat sharing Luna's affections. Both knew what Harry was like with birthdays. He just loved seeing someone's face light up when they opened the gift they'd just been given. Neville felt he'd been given a gift when Padma confirmed she'd be spending the Halloween weekend with them. None of her 3 friends had wanted to put any pressure on her since all would have loved to have a sibling. That's brilliant. My gran says Mum is making steady progress, with my dad a bit slower. I have no idea what that means and can't wait to see for myself. Professor Weasley will take us straight to Gringotts after our defense lesson on Friday. We'll see my mum and dad, and then visit Harry's parents on the Saturday. Padma felt it was wrong to feel excited when her relationship with her twin sister had deteriorated so badly, but Neville's enthusiasm was infectious. My gran also wanted to see our training, so Professor Weasley will be giving us a lesson on the Sunday morning. I get the feeling she is up to something, but I don't know what. My father hasn't mentioned anything, but that means nothing. Goblins are unreadable, except to Hermione here. Padma made an effort to tease. Oh, I think it's just a specific goblin our Hermione can read. The witch in question now snaked her arm around Harry's waist. Trying to understand one goblin is more than enough for me. Minerva had decided she needed to check out the first-year defense club, otherwise known as Crow's Marauders. It was soon easy to see why they had that name. Henrika quickly welcomed them, taking time to introduce the quartet of 4th years who would be helping them tonight, before handing the club over to Harry and then standing next to Minerva as a spectator. The first-year students hung on Harry's every word as he clearly and concisely laid out exactly what would be happening during tonight's lesson. Minerva thought he was being hugely ambitious with his aims but decided to keep that to herself. She would observe and make any comments after the lesson finished. The first years were then split into 4 groups. Minerva couldn't miss that they had deliberately avoided splitting them along house lines. Watching Fred Weasley work alongside Harry with his group was certainly an eye-opener for his head of house. Here was a seriousness and willingness to help that totally surprised Minerva. That it was matched by his twin working with Hermione was nothing short of astonishing. If these 2 weren't careful, they could find themselves in the running for a prefect badge at the summer. Now there was something Minerva couldn't have imagined, even this time last year. She also noticed Miss Patil working seamlessly with Mr. Diggory. While most of the younger witches in Hogwarts might wish for the wizarding company she kept, Padma paid that part no notice and just got on with the job in hand. She was so focused that Mr. Diggory followed her orders without question, which would probably only widen the rift between her and Parvati when this got out. The pairing that pleased Minerva the most though was Neville and Mr. Davies. It was obvious that her lion was in charge, and again the older boy obeyed his instructions. The first years too were quick to obey any instructions given. Two would be called forward, practice the spell a few times and then return to the group, with words of encouragement ringing in their ears. Minerva was one of the few aware of what was happening with his parents. She had signed the forms allowing these four to leave the school for the Halloween weekend. Minerva swore if they returned to Hogwarts with good news, she would gladly raise a wee dram herself in celebration. A student working with George Weasley was the first to complete a shield. It was so weak, a sneeze would have brought it down. The girl though received a round of applause from the entire class, and you could see the determination growing amongst the rest. Harry stopped the lesson early and the first years appeared to know what was coming next. They all sat on the floor in a big circle as mugs of hot chocolate appeared for each of them. So very well done tonight, and those who didn't quite manage it, don't worry because we'll be keeping at it. In Hogwarts, the shield charm is taught at the end of third year, so we're already 2.5 years ahead of schedule. For those who managed it, fantastic. We will continue to practice that spell every week. It's easily one of the most important that you will learn at Hogwarts. Shields are like muscles, the more you use them, the stronger they will get. Before Christmas break, we plan to have everyone not only casting shields but using them in a fight. Any questions? A few were asked and handled by different members of the team. Harry then called time and they got ready to leave. The older boys escorted the first years back to the dorms, leaving the four friends time to talk with both professors. I have to say that is one of the most effective defense lessons I've seen taught at Hogwarts for many a year. Neville was left blushing at the unaccustomed, and he felt undeserved praise from his head of house. Professor, we're just passing on what we were taught. This is how Professor Weasley teaches us every weekend. He and Professor Hobson even help us prepare each lesson. Minerva was even more pleased to hear that. Any other second-year students in their position would be lording it over their classmates, but not these four. I have been teaching here for many years, Mr. Longbottom, and I could easily see the adult hands that had guided your lesson. It was you four though that stood in front of students you're barely a year older than yourselves, and pulled that lesson off in a fashion that would have Lockhart writing another book about how he tamed the marauding horde of vicious pygmies. Henrika was the first to crack, her musical laughter reverberating around the now nearly empty room and making it okay for the others to laugh. Padma though had an apt title for this new publication. Liar Lockhart and the Phony Pygmies, it has a nice ring to it. Even McGonagall laughed at that, though she would probably deny it if the feat was mentioned outside this room. Padma had tried all week to talk to Parvati but her twin either ignored her or couldn't be found. She was tempted to ask Harry for a loan of his map but that would have felt too much like spying on her sister, something there was no recovering from. She had to settle for sending a letter by a Hogwarts owl. Henrika was waiting on the four friends when the second-year defense class finished. She was going to accompany them and Bill to Gringotts. Padma had clothes for her and Hermione inside the bag Harry gave her while Harry's own bag held a few changes for himself. Neville was staying in his own home so didn't really need anything. He practically ran out of the Hogwarts gates and was impatient for everyone else to catch up. Neville had never wanted to be somewhere else so much in his entire life. Standing in front of the door, Neville felt his courage falter. His gran had greeted them with tears in her eyes before directing the quartet here. Neville had never seen her like that before. Those tears could mean anything. Padma's hand slipping into his steadied the nervousness that threatened to run away with him. That's how Neville entered the room, holding Padma's hand with his two friends right behind him. With that support, Neville felt as if he could face anything. The emotional spike he felt after walking through that door was unprecedented. Neville felt as if his heart was going to explode right out of his chest. His mother recognized him, there was no doubt of that in his mind. She then smiled at him. Here was physical proof he'd been right, she did recognize him. When his mother slowly opened her arms and held him out toward him, Neville stopped breathing. Padma's hand slipped out of his and provided a gentle push in the back. That was all Neville needed. He couldn't for the life of him remember how he got there, but Neville would remember to his dying day the sensation of his mother's arms closing around him in a hug. It took him a moment to realize that the sobs he heard were his own, but Neville didn't care. His mother's hand moving up and stroking his head started to calm him down. It was only then that Neville remembered the other person he'd come to see. Again, his father was looking straight at him, and again, Neville would swear there was recognition in his eyes too. The hug with his dad may not have been returned, but Neville now felt like the luckiest wizard on the planet. Then his manners kicked in. He returned to his mother and wondered how to handle the introductions. It came to him with a smile. Mum, this is Harry, your godson. Harry was almost as emotional as Neville had been when Alice hugged him, only Hermione then being introduced as his girlfriend held him together. As Hermione joined Harry, Neville noticed Padma hanging back. That wasn't happening today. He reached for her hand and brought her forward with him. Mum, Dad, this is Padma. Alice reached out and placed her hand on their joined ones. Her smile was wide as she attempted to speak. Boo, fool. Neville's heart soared as he answered his mother. Yes, she is. He would swear his father was nodding in agreement. In the next room, there was hardly a dry eye there either. The large one-way wall allowed him to see and hear everything that went on in the room. Augusta's smile was beaming as the tears slowly ran down her cheeks. I need to get them out of there soon. Frank and Alice can only take excitement in small doses, otherwise it might affect their treatment. The room's occupants watched as Augusta left and entered the other room to explain this to the youngsters. Neville, your mum and dad have been looking forward to your visit all week. We need to keep it short though, too much excitement can set their treatment back. We will return tomorrow, and again on Sunday before you leave for the castle. Neville wanted to stay with his mum and dad all night, but not if it hindered their recovery. He also got to hug them goodnight. They made it out the door and Neville grabbed Harry by the shoulders. Harry, I. Harry was soon returning the gesture. Neville, I got to hug my godmother. There are no words, and certainly no thanks needed. We're family, remember. All four of them were very close so couldn't fail to be affected by the emotional scene they'd just been a part of. Both witches gently took a wizard by the arm and led them through the door where Augusta had just gone, only to discover a surprise waiting on them too. When Hermione saw her parents waiting for her in the room, she was actually frozen in place. Padma, shooting past her into Smitter's arms, soon saw Hermione repeating those actions as she almost bowled her parents over with the force of her desperate hug. A tearful Henrika soon had both boys wrapped in a hug too. Neville, I am so happy for you. That was without a doubt the most heartwarming thing I have ever seen. Augusta then moved both boys over to the wall that allowed them to see into the room. We can't go in there too often, or for too long, but Barchoke arranged this so I can visit whenever I want. Neville couldn't take his eyes off his parents. Just watching his mum sitting holding his dad's hand was like witnessing a miracle. Sirius and Henrika came up behind them. I've booked a room at the Leaky Cauldron again so we can all eat dinner together. There's no hurry though, I could watch this all night. Padma was crying in her mother's arms. Parvati won't even speak to me now, I don't know what else to do, mum. I would have stayed in the castle if I thought it would help. Smita had Padma wrapped in a hug. Her daughters had little spats before but nothing on a scale like this. I wrote to her and asked if she wanted to come home for the weekend, and even hinted that there were other things going on she wouldn't want to miss. She said she was happy to stay in the castle and enjoy the celebrations there. I got the distinct impression I wasn't being told the whole truth. Her date for the ball was Blaise Zabini, a Slytherin but a gentleman too. I don't know if she's still seeing him, we have hardly spoken since that night. Her dad then had some advice. It's only 7 weeks until the holidays, and Parvati will certainly be coming home in December. We will sit down and discuss what's going on then, I promise we will get to the bottom of this. The Patels headed over to join their friends watching Frank and Alice. Hermione was also in tears, attempting to apologize to her father. Emma left the two for a moment, heading over to Harry and Neville. Harry felt the arms wrap around him from behind and knew instantly who it was. Emma then kissed him on the cheek. Are you okay, Harry? I've rarely felt better, Emma. I have a godfather and a godmother. She then hugged Neville. There was no need to ask the same question though. The boy was practically floating with happiness. Augusta was suffering from the same condition. She had some startling news for them though. That's the first word your mother has spoken. I didn't expect that today. This got Neville's attention, especially what that word was, and who it was aimed at. His hand almost automatically reaching out for Padma's. They were then joined by Hermione and her dad, though it was Dan who spoke. Harry, can I have a quiet word? Harry didn't answer, just nodding his head and moving over to a quiet bit of the room, all without taking his eyes off his godmother. This clearly wasn't the best of times, but Dan needed to get this off his chest. Harry, what I saw here tonight redefines what family means, and why that should be so important to all of us. I want to apologize for my actions that night. I certainly never intended to hurt you, or Hermione. I would like to do now what I should have done that night and welcome you to the family, that is if you want to join. Harry now gave Dan his full attention. His expression didn't change though as he was already sporting a wide grin. I would like that, Dan, I would like that a lot. His hand was out and Dan shook it, before leading Harry back over to where everyone was still standing. It was Augusta who finally called time. We need to go and eat. Neville, we will be back tomorrow. They left the room to find Barchoke waiting on them. Neville approached the goblin immediately. Ambassador Barchoke, anything you wish from the Longbottom family is yours for the asking. Neville, your friendship with my son is more than enough for me. Watching your parents slowly emerge from their cocoons is a wondrous thing for us too. Our healers are learning so much, and Dan has arranged more scans over the December holidays. A beaming Harry stepped forward and saluted. Well met, father. I am really pleased to see you again. Hermione also stepped beside Harry and greeted Barchoke in his own language. Well met, father. Your daughter is also delighted to see you once more. Barchoke had deliberately not been present when Harry met his godmother. It wasn't seemly for a goblin of his standing to have tears in his eyes. His daughter almost undid all those preparations with her greeting. Well met, my children. He then switched to English. Shall we go eat? It was only after leaving that room they all realized just how hungry they were. No one had eaten since lunch, so Barchoke's suggestion got a resounding yes. Hermione was of course on Harry's arm but pushed him forward so they were walking next to Barchoke. She needed a word with him. Sir, my wonderful mate gifted me one of Rowena Ravenclaw's workbooks for my birthday. I have been studying the charm that allows your language to be understood and think I can cast it. Do I need permission from the nation before attempting it? The goblin almost stumbled as the implications of that hit home. Master Flitwick had sworn on his honor to the Lady Ravenclaw he would cast the spell only once, and never pass it on to anyone else. Now his daughter not only had knowledge of the spell but could cast it. The implications of this would have to be taken to the director, though it would be prudent to ensure she was correct first. Who did you plan on testing this on? Padma, Neville, Henrika, Sirius and Professor Weasley. I would like to add my mum and dad to that list but don't know if it would work on people without magic. Those names were what Barchoke would have predicted, and could easily justify them to the director as test cases. Henrika and my assistant ambassador would certainly benefit from understanding our language. I also see no problem with Sirius being included too. It would certainly give you four a tactical advantage if you could all speak a language your opponents couldn't. I would leave your parents until we could try it under test conditions, much like we'll need to do with Harry's exhaustion from magically enhancing his armor. Hermione didn't disagree with any of that, and Barchoke's final suggestion made sense too. I will need to approach the director to discuss the implications of this, but I would advise you not to let anyone else know of that spell, and certainly not how to cast it. Remus had been well warned that anything he heard here today was not for repeating outside the family. As Remus listened to Harry telling James and Lily what he'd been up to, the marauder felt that Sirius's warning was unnecessary. No one would ever believe him. Harry introducing Hermione as his mate was the first body blow, and saw the werewolf looking around for confirmation. Barchoke and the Grangers were standing with smiles on their faces, his first hint this was all true. Sirius had his arm wrapped around Henrika, taking comfort from his girlfriend at this bittersweet scene. The last two members of the family present today were Neville and Padma, leaving Remus to assume their parents and guardians didn't know the half of this. That Remus himself was included left him feeling really honored. As Harry chatted to his parents, Remus swore to James and Lily he would do anything and everything in his power to help their son and his family. The marauder suspected Sirius was silently doing the same too. Neville was holding onto Padma's hand like a drowning man grasps a lifeline. Harry was so animated and upbeat, yet Neville felt a great sense of loss just watching his friend. As bad as things had been for him personally, he always had his gran and could at least see his parents. All Harry had were some names carved into a slab of marble. Realizing this was also his godmother too, saw Neville step forward. With Padma holding his hand, he was able to say hello to his godmother and talk a bit about himself and his 3 friends. Barchoke observed the scene with a hint of melancholy, thinking back to when it would be just him and Harry spending a few hours here. He much preferred this arrangement though, knowing his son always wanted a family. The goblin couldn't help but think his son was building himself a good one here, with siblings, favorite uncles and parents being drafted in. Emma may be smiling on the outside, but Barchoke thought he knew her well enough to see past that mask. Inside, Emma was hurting for her children. Augusta's party tonight would be a welcome break, and something everyone was looking forward to. As an avid observer of people, Barchoke had watched as the barriers between their extended group had slowly eroded over time. Even the petals had changed and become more relaxed around the company. Augusta herself had lost a lot of her straight-laced mannerisms when amongst this group. She'd been more animated and louder than serious at their dinner last night, a feat that was worthy of a celebration all to itself. Neville's second short visit with his parents acted as confirmation that his first hadn't been just a wonderful dream. Again, his gran had let the 4 friends visit by themselves, keeping the number of visitors down to a minimum. He was getting ready for tonight's party when there was a knock on his bedroom door. Answering found his 3 friends standing there. "Can we talk for a few minutes, Neville? Hermione has something that she wants to keep just between the 4 of us at the moment." Neville stood back to let them in, a quick glance at Padma telling him that she didn't know what Harry was talking about either. Hermione didn't keep them waiting for long. "I've been studying Rona's workbook, especially the charm that translates the goblin language. It's complicated wand work but doesn't require a massive amount of power. I'm pretty sure I can cast it and wondered if you two wanted the ability to understand and speak Goblin too." Padma caught on quickest. "Is that why you were chatting to Barchoke in Goblin? I don't know if it's just my nosy side showing, but the idea of being able to understand what's being said by the goblins appeals to me." Neville approached the thing from a whole different angle. "Professor Weasley says when we're older, we'll learn silent casting so the opposition doesn't know what spells we cast. What if we cast them in Goblin? Will that even work?" This led Hermione and Harry to look at one another, leading to a simultaneous shrugging of shoulders. Harry drew his knife and cast Lumos, first in English, Latin then his own language. The charm worked equally for both. Hermione was biting her bottom lip in deep though before offering an explanation. "Professor Weasley is always telling us our magic is intent-based. Harry's magic obviously understands what he's trying to cast, so just does it. We could cast our spells and no one would have a clue what was coming at them. This will seriously piss off our sparring partners next weekend. Hermione, I certainly want to have a go at this." Padma was putting her name at the top of the very short queue. Neville quickly agreed to join it too. It was a nervous Hermione who then got her book and wand out. It was now time to see if she could live up to her claim. Padma wasn't nervous in the least, knowing her friend would never have offered if she wasn't certain of success. A tense few moments was then followed by Harry asking Padma how she felt, in Goblin. That she answered in the same language saw each witch's feet suddenly being lifted off the ground, Harry letting out a loud whoop as he twirled Hermione in the air. Hermione glanced down at the love and pride reflected back from Harry, before she noticed their 2 friends. Neville had Padma in a similar position and the two were gazing happily at each other. The spell seemed to break and Neville lowered her gently to the ground before turning to Hermione in an effort to hide his blush from Padma. "I'm ready when you are, Hermione." She took a moment to center herself again. This was not a spell you could do in a hurry. It was only minutes later though that all 4 were chatting excitedly in Goblin. "Oh, I can't wait to use this on Fred and George. This is better than a prank." The thought of getting one over on the biggest pranksters in the school had Neville almost drooling at the thought. Padma though had bigger fish to fry. Why settle for the copies when we'll have the 2 originals here tomorrow? Everyone is staying after the party and tomorrow would be a fabulous opportunity for Robin, Dove, Owl and Swift of Crow's Marauders to match up to Padfoot and Moony. This idea made Hermione nervous. "Hey, Padma, you do know that Remus is a master in defense, and Sirius is no slouch either. It's like Harry and Slughorn, Hermione, there's no way they will be using anything too powerful against us, embarrassing most definitely. We need a better measure of where we are. It actually wouldn't be a bad thing if we got our asses kicked. That's the result everyone will expect anyway, so we've nothing to lose." Harry agreed with Padma. "You have to fight people better than you to improve. Roger, Cedric and the twins are just beginning to get the idea of fighting against us as a team. Sirius and Remus will have that down pat. Casting our spells in Goblin might give us a bit of a shock advantage, but we would have to take it quickly." It was Neville who brought up another problem. How do we con them into fighting us in the first place? That saw the 4 of them put their heads together. Running around the Longbottom estate was a pleasant change for Harry and Hermione. Last night's party had been great, but just the 2 of them running alongside the estate's boundaries on a sharp November morning was wonderful in a whole different way. "I take it you noticed how much closer Neville and Padma are getting." Hermione knew Harry missed very little. Her mate confirmed that view. "I also noticed the big grins Augusta and Smeeta were wearing too. I can't believe Parvati is jealous over this. I thought she'd sorted that over the holidays. You don't see Susan or Hannah throwing a strop because those 2 are getting closer. Both those witches have known Neville a lot longer and might have fancied stepping in there themselves. Yeah, I now wonder how much she did change, or did we just see what we wanted?" Harry was shaking his head at that. Padma wouldn't be so upset if she didn't think Parvati had changed. Whatever it is, the problem will only get worse if Neville asks Padma to be his girlfriend. Hermione shuddered at the idea of it getting worse. She knew how much their friend was hurting now. They decided on one more lap before breakfast. Their training would be followed by lunch and then heading off to Gringotts, one last visit with Alice and Frank before returning to Hogwarts for dinner. It had been an emotional roller coaster of a weekend. For Hermione, getting to dance with her father last night had finally drawn a line under the nightmare her bonding with Harry had caused. She felt her family would eventually be stronger after this. For Harry, getting a hug from his godmother put him on cloud 9, and he hadn't come down all weekend. The four soon forgot their audience as training required their undivided attention. Bill worked them hard, giving them 2 new spells to master, a shot with the dueling dummies and then shield drills. As they were taking a breather, Padma asked a question. Professor Weasley, can we get some of our audience to help us, since the boys aren't here? Bill's eyebrow rose at this. He was after all the twins' older brother. What did you have in mind? Well, my dad is there, Remus, Sirius and Henrika. We've gotten used to the workout of a 4-on-4 fight to finish our Sunday session. Ramrao jumped in right away, as Padma had predicted he would. Sorry, I could never raise my wand against my daughter. I'm going to have to decline. Henrika was next with her answer. It took those 4 wizards a month to be fit enough to come back down to lunch after a Sunday session with you lot, and they're all Quidditch players on their house teams. I'm going to pass this kind invitation. The 4 then turned their attention onto the Marauders. Sirius was certainly up for the challenge. Well, Moony, do you think we can teach these pups a lesson? I get the feeling that was their intention all along. Don't take this too lightly. Sirius, getting your ass kicked by your godson and his friends is not something you can live down. The 6 then squared off as Barchoke was offering odds on the 4 winning. Henrika felt on a bound to take that bet. The audience were all looking forward to a show. They wouldn't be disappointed. When Bill counted them in, the quartet executed their plan flawlessly. Harry had his armor activated. His job was to keep Remus occupied. The other 3 all targeted Sirius in a blitzkrieg of spells cast in Goblin. They were also constantly on the move and trying to outflank their opponent. Right from the off, Sirius knew he was in trouble. These 3 weren't allowing him to get any spells off. All his efforts were having to be channeled into surviving this onslaught. He also had no idea what they were so accurately casting at him, which was pretty disconcerting. When Padma got around his shield, Sirius was forced to roll away from her spell, straight into Neville. Sirius was out of the fight. Remus was using his werewolf reflexes to stay just ahead of Harry, but even then it was very close. When the other 3 turned their attention to him, Remus thought it was only a matter of time. Barchoke was laughing until he saw Sirius get back up, and noticed their tutor putting his wand away. Dan had also seen this and was not amused. That's cheating. The goblin understood what was happening here and put his hand on the angry father's arm. In a fight, there's no such thing. Better they learn that lesson here, than in a real fight. Death Eaters and their master don't know the meaning of fair, and will use every dirty trick they can. Neville going down to a stunner from behind was the first clue they had that Sirius was back in the fight. Hermione's armor saved her from being the second to be taken out by the sneak attack. Harry shouted orders in his own language and the girls instantly obeyed. Hermione drew her sword and charged Sirius, her wand still spitting curses as she raced toward him. Sirius was shielding and dodging, especially from that blade. Her charge took Hermione past Sirius and he cast one of the Marauder's speciality curses at her hopefully unprotected legs. She was now dangling in the air by her ankle. He quickly turned to face Padma and made the same mistake the kids had earlier. Sirius forgot all about the wizard on the ground. Padma had revived Neville but he'd played possum and bided his time. As the witch allowed Sirius to push her back, in the direction Padma wanted to go, Neville had a free shot at the Marauder's unprotected back. Neville grabbed a stunned Sirius wand while Padma got Hermione down. All 3 raced to help Harry before he overtaxed himself. Barchoke was concerned about the same thing and considered shouting time until the 4 rounded on Remus once more. Harry had been struggling to contain Remus. Here was an opponent that was miles better than Slughorn, and throwing things at him that the Centurion certainly wanted to learn. When it was once more 4 against 1, Harry wanted to end it. Trusting the people here, he cast an overpowered disarming spell with his sword. With the battering Remus' shield was taking, the unexpected spell blasted right through and flung him back about 10 feet, with his wand heading in the other direction. Padma had him trussed up seconds after he hit the ground, to loud cheering from the people watching. Henrika revived her boyfriend and Sirius released a groan. He wasn't in pain though. They beat us, didn't they? Yes, and I should know better than to bet against a goblin. I lost 10 galleons on you Black, and I'm back to Hogwarts later so I can't even make you pay for it. There were congratulations being handed out and the ribbing had already started against the Marauders but Bill's lesson wasn't over yet. Okay you 4, where did we go wrong? Neville was first to hold his hand up. I should have taken Sirius wand off him the first time, then it wouldn't have mattered if he'd been revived. Bill then turned his attention to Harry. He had no idea what their tutor was after though. It was soon spelled out to the Centurion by the angry redhead. What the hell was that all about? Using Hermione as some kind of sacrificial goat so Sirius wouldn't see what Padma was up to. I thought better of you than that, risking one of your own to win a fight. In a real fight, you could have gotten her killed. It was his job to push Harry into being ready to face Voldemort. For an instant, Bill thought he'd pushed too far. Harry appeared ready to attack him. That was our godfather she was up against, someone we knew would never hurt her. If you think I would try that in a real fight then we need a new tutor. This was an elaborate ruse to take down the Marauders. We worked out our tactics last night. Yes, we counted heavily on 'em holding back, but so were we. At that, Harry drew his sword in one smooth motion and a powerful curse left the blade. They had been practicing in a walled area of garden behind Longbottom Manor. Harry had fired at the most distant wall, over 30 yards away, and his spell obliterated a section about 15 feet across. In the shocked silence that followed the loud blast, Dan's words were easily heard, though barely understood. Shit, that's not a rifle, it's a bloody cannon. The sword of Gryffindor returned to its sheath as Harry spoke again. I know what I have to do, which is why Halloween is the only day of the year I don't train. Balls and parties are nice but, if they affected my training I wouldn't be there. These 3 have known the danger being my friend brought since the first week we met. They not only accepted it but wanted to train alongside me. I swear to everyone here that I will do everything I can to keep them safe. Anyone trying to get to them is going to have to kill me first. Having just got their family back together, Harry didn't want there to be the slightest doubt in anyone's mind that he deliberately endangered Hermione. Emma and Dan smiling at him showed they understood that, only one more thing to do. I'm really sorry about your wall, Augusta, I shouldn't have lost my temper. The old witch was much more interested in what she'd seen here today. Walls can be repaired, Harry. I know you four will look out for each other, that's the important thing here. Can I just say I'm so proud of you, all four of you. This was a sentiment shared by the extended family. Bill had taught them to own up to their shortcomings and mistakes, it was time for the tutor to do the same. Harry, guys, I'm sorry too. I saw tactics there that were reckless and downright callous. What I should have seen were calculated risks in an encounter that had set boundaries. This was my idea from the start, Professor Weasley. I thought it would be fun to get one over on the Marauders. We knew exactly what we were doing from the moment you counted us off. He should have figured Padma would be the one to instigate a stunt like this. Bill had one more question though. Quote ellipsis. And just when did you lot learn to cast spells in Goblin? He'd known what language they were using, but not what they were casting. The praise practically gushed from Padma as she answered that one. Oh, that was Neville's brilliant idea. We don't know how to cast silently, but using Goblin has the same effect. Neither Sirius or Remus knew what we were casting at them. It was a disgruntled Sirius who had the last words on the matter. Moony, we were stitched up. After their final visit to Neville's parents, their spirits were soaring again as Henrika led them back to Hogwarts. That all changed when they saw the spirit waiting on them at the main doors. The Lady Ravenclaw appeared worried. Harry, you need to go to the infirmary at once. This time Harry was accompanied in his mad dash to the infirmary by Hermione running at his side, these two leaving the other three trailing. They burst into the infirmary to see the furthest away bed with screens around it. Helena appearing through the floor beside them confirmed this was where they were meant to go. Pulling back the screen saw both of them gasp in shock. Luna was sitting up on the bed, her legs curled under her and Moonlight resting comfortably on her lap. Both were looking away from them, but the pair also appeared to have been transfigured into stone. Thanks for reading. Elvis has left the building. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I do not own Harry Potter, and have never claimed to do so. Since JKR is the only person who can possibly write Harry Potter as canon, my work should of course be considered AU. Chapter 43. Amelia was used to late-night flucals. It unfortunately went with the job, but the one from Arthur Weasley certainly surprised her. What can have gone wrong with our goblin friends that would see you contacting me at this time of night? We have a problem, Amelia, a really big problem. Did you know a first-year student was attacked inside Hogwarts on Halloween? The witch was attacked in such a way that left her, and the cat she was holding, petrified. No, I bloody didn't. What happened and how does it involve the goblins? Amelia could clearly see the despair on Arthur's green features in her fireplace. Nobody knows what happened and the student was attending Hogwarts on a Potter scholarship. It was Luna Lovegood. Harry apparently hit the roof when he returned to the castle, mainly at the fact no one appeared to be doing anything about it. He sent an emergency call to his father and now the castle is crawling with goblins. Barchoke wants a meeting as soon as possible, in the Ministry or Gringotts. Luna is now in the Goblin Medical Facility. They had no treatment for her at Hogwarts. That last statement confused Amelia. If Hogwarts couldn't treat her, why wasn't she sent to St. Mungo's? That's not quite true. Hogwarts would be able to cure her, but not until May or June. What? That's 7 or 8 months away. Yes, I know. I think it was then that Harry hit the roof. Dumbledore appears to be trying to keep the whole incident quiet. His excuse was that this information getting out might lead to a panic. Amelia wasn't buying that. What he means is news of this getting out could cost him his job. I intend to see it does. I'll head for Gringotts and meet you there. I better alert the minister we might have a problem before I leave. Amelia was led through some winding corridors to the medical facility, discovering that Arthur and Bill Weasley had arrived before her. She also soon discovered why Harry had blown his top. Luna Lovegood was as stiff as any statue with Hermione's cat petrified on her knee. Barchoke didn't waste any time on preliminaries, but got right to the point. Luna and Moonlight were discovered like this after the Halloween feast. They had been sitting in a windowed alcove, probably looking out at the world. Have you any idea what's wrong with them? The goblin conceded that Hogwarts had gotten the diagnosis correct. Barchoke made no attempt to hide his anger at the headmaster's inaction. They've been petrified. Mandrake restorative draft will reverse the effects. Hogwarts have mandrakes in the greenhouses. The second years are working with them, but they won't be mature enough for potion use until the summer. Dumbledore thought it was acceptable to leave Miss Lovegood in this state until then. I certainly didn't. He then explained his involvement in this situation. As her father was planning a long expedition of several Nordic countries, he temporarily signed Luna's care over to me. I am responsible to the Grangers, Lovegoods and Creevies for the safety of their children. Unlike Dumbledore, I take my responsibilities seriously. We currently have armed guards outside every dorm and patrols in the Hogwarts corridors. If we can't reach some kind of agreement here tonight, I shall be withdrawing my charges right after breakfast, and would advise you to get Susan out of there too. Arthur could see the confusion Amelia was suffering and realized Barchoke had missed telling her a vital piece of information. Amelia, what Ambassador Barchoke forgot to mention was the message written on the corridor wall, in blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir beware. We have checked Gringotts records to see who Slytherin's heir is. Tom Marvolo Riddle was his last direct descendant. Bill let that sink in before offering a translation. The writing then means Voldemort's enemies beware. Amelia didn't actually say, oh shit, but she certainly thought it. What was Dumbledore's reaction? I can't imagine he would approve goblin guards inside Hogwarts. The goblin's anger was tinged with disgust this time. That old fool's answer was to have everyone go around in large groups, accompanied by prefects. The Lady Ravenclaw had to point out that prefects were students too, and shouldn't be endangered in this manner by a Hogwarts headmaster. The implications of this tactic took the breath from Amelia. That would just provide a bigger target for whatever is doing this. That was exactly the point I made. Hogwarts agreed with me. The goblin presence though can only be temporary, really only there as a stopgap measure. Amelia understood at once what Barchoke was saying. When the news got out, and it would, that the goblins were guarding Hogwarts, the ministry would be sorted for not protecting the country's children. If the ministry could impose on our goblin friends to protect the castle until lunchtime, I will have squads of auras there to take over those duties. Barchoke quickly agreed, leaving Amelia to ask if they had any idea what had caused the petrification. He had no answers at the moment, only theories. There is no spell known to the nation that can cause this, leaving us looking for other methods. Since both seem to have been petrified instantaneously, that would rule out administering a potion. Good luck with trying to pour a potion down a Kneasel's throat. Moonlight certainly wouldn't be lying calmly on Luna's lap. The Chamber of Secrets refers to Salazar Slytherin, making us think of snakes. Our best guess at the moment is a Medusa-like creature. Amelia could see the sense in that theory. She certainly didn't even want to think what could happen if a group of students walked into something like that. Barchoke had more to offer. We currently have alerts going out to all Gringotts branches, stating that we require mature mandrake for the potion. We hope to have Miss Lovegood restored by the end of the week. She will prove to be our best chance at information. The meeting was breaking up, but Arthur had one last question for Barchoke. Ambassador, I notice you didn't mention your son amongst those you would remove from Hogwarts. My son is a Centurion, one of 3 that are currently deployed to guard Hogwarts. He has patrols until midnight before resuming at 6 a.m. With his knowledge of the castle and status as Hogwarts champion, he will be invaluable to the force we have there. Please understand, Mr. Weasley, his status as a Centurion makes him an adult in our society. My son will listen to his father's advice but make his own decisions. Harry was currently handing over his duties, and the Marauder's map to his fellow Centurion, Splitnose. The map shows the position of everyone in the castle, even us. If you need me, speak to one of the ghosts or portraits, they will soon get a message through. Rather than being annoyed with the age of the Centurion offering advice, Splitnose gratefully accepted the magnificent gift he'd just been offered. This is a work of art, and offers a great strategic advantage to whoever holds it. Who made this? The Marauders were a group of students that included my dad, Godfather and Remus Lupin. My father is working on the idea of getting the 2 remaining Marauders involved with Master Flitwick to produce something similar for Gringotts. This will see right through invisibility cloaks, disguises and even Polyjuice potion. That would indeed be a welcome addition to Gringotts security. Good night, Centurion, I shall see you at 6. Harry entered the Ravenclaw common room to find 3 witches had waited up for him. Hermione and Padma he'd half expected, an upset Penny was a complete surprise. The prefect immediately offered an apology. I'm so sorry, Harry. We're all so used to seeing Luna with you guys that I never noticed she was missing. It's okay, Penny, you are at least concerned for her. Dumbledore's lack of the same response was sickening. Imagine thinking it would be acceptable to leave Luna like that until summer. Harry slumped down on the sofa in the space Hermione and Padma had left for him. It had been a long day, and Harry had been on duty since they had returned to Hogwarts. Seeing him in his tunic as he patrolled the castle with a squad of goblin warriors would certainly reinforce the idea he was a Centurion first, and a Hogwarts student second. Hermione gave him a moment before asking the question they were all dying to know the answer to. Did you find out any more? The Chamber of Secrets was apparently built by Salazar Slytherin, and rumored to contain something that would cleanse the school. I don't think we're talking about a new mop and bucket for Filch here. Penny listened to this with horror. Knowing the Slytherins, cleanse would mean getting rid of those whose blood was supposedly tainted. Isn't Luna a pureblood though? A nod from Harry told her she was right, there was also more to come. That chamber was supposedly opened before, funnily enough when Tom Riddle was a student here. That time though a student died, we know her as Moaning Myrtle. She died in her toilet after hearing a boy's voice. She strode out to complain he shouldn't be there, and a big pair of golden eyes is the last thing she remembers. Padma was trying to work out the implications of that. So Luna being a pureblood and still alive means we could be dealing with something completely different here. While her question was a valid one, Harry didn't think so. Voldemort boasted he was descended from Slytherin. If that's true, then any friend of mine would certainly be considered an enemy of his. We currently think Luna and Moonlight may have only caught a reflection of whatever it was that petrified them. Anything that can sneak up on a Kneasel scares the shit out of me. Hermione snuggled into his shoulder, comforting them both. Can't Hogwarts tell you where this chamber is? It's as if the knowledge has been hidden from the castle. This was done 1,000 years ago. The Marauder's map is tied into the Hogwarts wards, and the chamber doesn't show up on it either. With the feast in full swing and all the ghosts at Nick's death day party, that was a perfect time to strike. Harry then turned his attention specifically to Hermione. We'll have to miss our training tomorrow. I'm back on patrol at 6. I'll need to head up and write a report for my father. Master Pitsley will certainly bring the latest news with him tomorrow. She didn't expect they would be training tomorrow, but Hermione had one more question for him. Will you be taking potions? That depends on what news Master Pitsley brings. I'll be on duty until we're relieved, or have to withdraw. At that point you all need to get yourselves out the castle. I trust Dumbledore about as far as Colin could throw Hagrid. Hermione felt a rush of pride run through her as she walked with Padma and their friends down to breakfast. Harry, no. Centurion Crow led Ravenclaw House down to the Great Hall. The Lady Helena was by his side and the squad of 6 goblin warriors under his command appeared ready for anything. Knowing his mate and friends were depending on him, Harry appeared to have left nothing to chance. There were warriors posted at every junction they passed, warriors that would then join the train of students as they wound their way down to the Great Hall. Harry had also told her that Centurion Splitnose had a command post close by where Luna and Moonlight had been discovered. With the Marauder's map and 10 goblin warriors, Splitnose was monitoring everyone as they headed for breakfast, and ready to respond at the first sign of trouble. She was seeing Harry in his natural environment, and so was the rest of Ravenclaw. He was at least as tall as the goblins under his command, and probably the broadest across the shoulders. His youth suddenly didn't seem so important, and every goblin under his command knew their Centurion would hold his own in any battle they were forced to fight. They made the Great Hall without incident and, while apprehension was certainly in the air, every student felt safer knowing the goblins were around. Albus didn't seem to think so, and complained loudly to his deputy. This was why I wanted the incident kept quiet. Frightened children do not make good students. Minerva came right back at him. Neither do petrified ones, headmaster. I much prefer seeing the students safe than stiff. Their safety is our responsibility after all. The castle is perfectly safe. Miss Lovegood would have been fine if she'd attended the feast like she was supposed to. This time it was Phileas who rounded on Albus. An 11-year-old girl was probably missing home, and certainly her friends. Your theory that students are safe because you say so has more holes in it than a sieve. Were you aware that Mr. Creevey had sneaked out of Gryffindor to visit his friend in the infirmary? What about the 3 separate couples that were found frequenting various broom closets throughout the castle? That was why Harry had to put guards at each house entrance, as much to keep the students in as to stop anything gaining entry. As I said, if they did what they were told, all of this could be avoided. Henrika couldn't think of anyone she'd ever known who had the ability to infuriate her the way Dumbledore could. That is because they are like you, headmaster. They are sure they know better than those doing the telling, and have no concept of their own mortality. Thankfully, they will grow out of it and gain some maturity. You though are a hopeless case. Phileas couldn't contain his chuckle as the youngest professor so successfully lampooned Hogwarts' oldest. Harry approached Hermione with a proposal. I really need to eat with the warriors. My mate though would certainly be welcome to join me. Padma made Hermione's mind up for her. Go, I want to see how Parvati is, and have breakfast with Neville. Hermione was soon back on Harry's arm, heading over to the table Hogwarts had provided for her goblin guards. That hardly rated a mention at the Ravenclaw table. They were too busy trying to work out when Padma had learned to speak goblin. On the arm of her centurion mate, Hermione was treated with the utmost respect by the goblin warriors. Her esteem rose even higher when Master Pitsley arrived and spoke with both of them. The guards left before the students, taking up positions at predetermined strategic points throughout the castle, leaving the professors to collect their students and lead them to their classroom. All the oral classrooms were empty. Amelia had rounded them up for some on-the-job training. The trainees' eyes and ears would be just as useful as the older auras they would be assigned to work alongside. It was more about flooding Hogwarts with uniforms, and having the numbers available to deal with any threat. Her plan was a simple one: keep the children safe until Christmas and then empty the castle. Barchoke had promised Goblin aid in pulling Hogwarts apart to find this famous chamber. Amelia hoped she would be busy this Christmas again. Her reason for that was simple: it would mean all the children were safely at home, and not petrified or in the morgue. She led 50 auras into the Great Hall at lunchtime, with a Goblin ambassador on one side and the Minister of Magic on the other. The trio in front approached the staff table as Dumbledore stood to greet them. Cornelius, is this really necessary? Amelia cut right across him. Headmaster Dumbledore, did you knowingly fail in your duty to inform a parent or guardian that their child was injured? No. This rocked Amelia back for a second. You didn't inform Miss Lovegood's parent or guardian that she had been attacked. Technically, Miss Lovegood hadn't been harmed. She would have made a complete recovery when we administered the mandrake potion. Barchoke then proved that a goblin's sense of humor was an acquired taste. Technically, Headmaster, should I plunge my knife through your ribcage, you would suffer a heart attack and die. The point being though, whatever term you call it, you would still be dead. This saw Harry and the rest of the goblins roaring with laughter, while Hermione just looked skyward for some divine intervention. Nothing else had helped her with goblin humor. The minister then proved he wasn't here because he enjoyed visiting the Scottish Highlands in November. I think the point is that you clearly failed in your duty of care to this young girl. While your actions before the attack could be excused, your total lack of action afterwards borders on being considered criminal. It is well within my powers to suspend you until the school board can meet. I have every intention of doing so. This saw Albus sit back down as the minister turned his attention to Minerva. Professor McGonagall, can you assume control of Hogwarts? The ministry will assume responsibility for the castle's security, and I can't thank our goblin friends enough for their aid in protecting the students until we could respond. This comment saw some of those same students begin to applaud the goblin protectors, a move that soon spread to all 4 house tables. Amelia asked Harry if he could work with her until dinner time, Professor Sprout instantly giving her consent for him to skip his herbology class. This would allow the handover to go much more smoothly, and give Barchoke more time to spend with his son. He had a meeting tonight that was unavoidable, though he certainly hoped another meltdown would be. The Goblin ambassador used his diplomacy by including Sirius in his visit to Crawley. Barchoke needed all the help he could get. This became apparent the instant Dan answered the door to them. What's happened? We just saw them yesterday. Dan's loud outburst saw Emma come running as Barchoke offered both his reassurance. Dan, Emma, I saw them just before they sat down to eat dinner together. They are all fine, but we think the danger Dobby attempted to warn Harry about has made an appearance. Dan so wanted to shout about why Hermione was still in the castle but had learned his lesson from the last time he did that. Knowing that these two would face down the devil to protect their family saw him hold his tongue for now. He would listen to what was happening and then make sure his point of view would be included too, before they all jointly decided on the next move. The 4 went through to the lounge and had a seat before Barchoke attempted to explain what was going on. Something attacked Luna and Moonlight at Halloween, leaving both of them petrified. There is a potion that will have them as good as new in the space of a few hours, and Gringotts are currently scouring their branches around the world to obtain the main ingredient. On hearing that Dumbledore intended to do nothing about the situation, Harry sent an emergency message to me. Nothing inside Hogwarts moved last night without the squads of goblin warriors I had posted there knowing all about it. Dan felt his heartbeat returning to something approaching normal since the first instant he laid eyes on their 2 visitors. Emma's hand slipping into his confirmed she was feeling the same way. Barchoke had even more good news for the concerned parents. Last night I met with Amelia and explained what needed to happen, otherwise I would be withdrawing the students I was responsible for. She arrived in Hogwarts with about 50 auras at lunchtime. She also brought along the Minister of Magic, who seemed to take great delight in suspending Albus Dumbledore. McGonagall is in charge of the school while a large auror presence will deal with the castle's security. The plan is to prevent any more incidents and then rip the castle apart to find whatever is doing this over the December holidays. Emma had picked up on an omission, and was sure she knew why it had been omitted. You didn't mention Harry, am I to assume he will be staying in the castle? Sirius wasn't happy about this part and let his displeasure be known. Harry was actually leading patrols around the castle last night and, like the goblins, will be heavily involved in any search of Hogwarts over Christmas. Barchoke understood that point of view, even somewhat sympathized with it, but he knew Harry better than anyone, though Hermione was catching up fast. Harry is a centurion and, as I have said many times, his position was earned. Last night he led warriors for the first time and I have heard nothing but good reports back. My son performed his duties admirably. You all suffer from seeing him as a 12-year-old boy. My son is like no boy you will ever have met. For years he's trained his body and mind to be weapons. This is who Harry is. You have to trust he knows what he's doing. Emma sensed Barchoke's last comment was aimed as much at himself as it was them. She cut the goblin some slack. Well, I think we all know Hermione's not going to be pleased if she's to spend Christmas apart from Harry. Just to be clear here, there is no way I want our daughter anywhere near Hogwarts when they're actively searching for whatever did this. This got a definite nod of agreement from her husband before Dan then added his own tuppence worth. While not exactly happy with the situation at the moment, I understand the lengths you have gone to for their safety. I also want it understood that if whatever this is attacks again, then Hermione is out of there. This drew a sigh of relief from Barchoke, relief at how well both parents were accepting this. Amelia has already passed orders that, should there be another attack, the castle will be evacuated and Hogwarts closed until the problem is solved. She is no happier with this situation than any of us. Susan is in that castle too. Those plans may change if Luna can give us more information after we get our hands on some mature mandrake. If the situation proves more dangerous than we thought, she'll close the school at once. While the idea of getting Hermione out of there earlier initially appealed to Dan and Emma, the thought that the daughter might be in real danger was not a pleasant one. Their daughter had just finished her dinner and was telling her mate what they should do next. Harry, we need to head to the library. This generated a blank look until she explained. Somewhere in there might be information that will help us identify what's doing this. I want to help stop it, and get a bit of revenge for Luna and Moonlight. Roger hated bursting her bubble of enthusiasm, but he attempted to convey the scale of the problem they would be tackling. Hermione, while I agree the library could have that information, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Well, we know it wasn't a spell or a potion that caused them to be petrified. That leaves the most logical explanation as a magical creature. Add in Salazar Slytherin's involvement and a snake-like creature would seem the most obvious choice. We now have a snake-like creature whose gaze from its golden eyes kills, though seeing a reflection appears to petrify its victims. I would say that information makes our search more like looking for a pretty large needle in a rather small haystack, wouldn't you? Roger, like the rest of Ravenclaw that was within hearing distance, couldn't answer. He just stared at Hermione with his jaw slack. She hadn't spouted any information that was new. Hermione had just neatly assembled the known knowledge to form a theory that was hard to refute. It was a proud Harry who offered Hermione his arm as the two of them set off for the library, leaving Roger shaking his head and muttering to himself, those two are something else. Padma had been sitting quietly, preoccupied with staring at her twin. Parvati appeared as if she hadn't slept for a week and was as skittish as a kitten. Padma then shifted her gaze to Blaise, silently promising to use some of the nastier curses she had learned on the wizard if he caused this with Parvati. The Slytherin didn't look in either Patal's direction, leaving Padma even more confused. Hearing Roger mutter, she gave him an answer he wasn't expecting. Roger, you don't know the half of it. She left to join her friends in the library, knowing Neville wouldn't be letting Colin out of his sight. She wasn't doing any good sitting here and a research project might be exactly what she needed to take her mind of her troubles. Lucius didn't have his troubles to seek, and absolutely furious Narcissa was all the trouble he could handle. His wife had just thrown today's prophet at him, ruining any appetite for breakfast. There was no comfort to be had in seeing he'd achieved one of his goals. Dumbledore was finished at Hogwarts. Tell me you didn't have a hand in this. Lucius had no answer for his wife. Our son is in that castle. Tell me he's in no danger. Again he didn't know how to answer Narcissa. Stop this. I demand you put a stop to whatever this is at once. This time he did have an answer for his wife. Unfortunately it was one Lucius knew she wasn't going to like. I can't. It's out of my control now. Believe me, I've tried, but it can't be done. It was now Narcissa that had nothing more to say. She just headed out the room. Where are you going? We can't say or do anything. I could end up in Azkaban, and the Malfoys would be left without a Canute. The furious witch spun around to face her husband. Do you think I give a shit about any of that when Draco's life could be at stake? Understand this, Lucius. I gave birth to that boy and will protect him with my life. Even if it means crossing you, I won't hesitate. Do you want to try and stop me heading to Hogwarts? The fury displayed in her eyes, and the wand now in her hand, convinced Lucius that this was a situation where discretion was the better part of valor. He just shook his head, which was probably the smartest answer he'd given all morning. Minerva stood after breakfast to talk with the students, her first time as acting headmistress. While we certainly find ourselves in unusual circumstances, I think it's important that, while observing the new safety measures, Hogwarts continues to run as normally as possible. With this in mind, I decided that the first-year defense club will take place as usual tonight. Minerva was forced to pause as all the first years had broken into cheering at that news. She let it die down before continuing. While Professor Lockhart made a very generous offer to take tonight's club, thus guaranteeing everyone's safety, I decided that an Auror escort and Professor Flitwick assisting Professor Hobson should be more than enough security for tonight's club. Gilderoy sat there almost preening himself as he heard his name mentioned, totally missing the sarcasm McGonagall had aimed in his direction. The students didn't though, and sniggering could be heard throughout the hall. Everyone in Hogwarts, except a still grinning Gilderoy, knew Crow's marauders would be far safer in the company of the 4 second years who ran the club than in Lyra Lockhart's care. A pair of Aurors will collect the first years from each house and lead them up to the 7th floor. There will be no wandering away. Are we clear on that, Mr. Creevy? Colin may have had his head down, but everyone heard him say, "Yes, Professor." Minerva returned her steely gaze to include the entire hall. This is not a game. It's beginning to appear that only good fortune saw Miss Lovegood survive relatively unscathed. These Aurors are here inside Hogwarts by order of the Minister of Magic himself. They're putting their very lives at risk for our protection. Anyone disobeying their orders will find themselves heading home as quickly as I can arrange it. Does everyone here understand that? A chorus of, yes, Professor, saw Minerva return to her seat. Her posterior had hardly dented the cushion of Minerva's new chair when the pink-haired Auror led Narcissa Malfoy into the Great Hall. It didn't escape anyone's notice that another two Auras had taken up position behind the Malfoy matriarch. Well, Narcissa would certainly have missed it. Her eyes had immediately swept to the Slytherin table, her entire being focused on a frantic visual search for Draco. Seeing her son sitting there unscathed appeared to take some of the obvious tension out of the blonde witch. She continued walking toward the staff table. Mrs. Malfoy, this is an unexpected pleasure. What can Hogwarts do for you? Minerva was polite, though knowing any Malfoy involvement would not bode well for the school. Narcissa wanted to get both Draco and herself out of the castle as quickly as possible. There was no time to waste on social politeness. My apologies for interrupting your breakfast, Professor, but today's profit ruined mine. Placing our children in danger may be acceptable to you, but I have no intention of leaving my son inside a castle where attacks of this nature are taking place. I intend to take Draco home with me at once. That is your right, Mrs. Malfoy, after you have signed the appropriate parchment. I resent your implication, though, that I am placing my students in danger. The Ministry have taken responsibility for the castle's security, and I think they are doing an excellent job. Minerva was already bristling with indignation. This certainly was not helped when Narcissa cut right across her. I'm afraid I have no faith in the Ministry, and certainly have no intention of entrusting my son's safety to the likes of this. Narcissa made certain everyone knew she was talking about the pink-haired Auror who had never left her side since she approached the castle. Tonks, though, was not about to stand there and docilely accept these insults. She also knew just how to hit back. Why, Aunt, I didn't know you recognized me. Did you hear Sirius restored my mother to the Black family? He kicked both of her sisters out too. Didn't like the choices they had made. Don't worry though, Aunt Sissy, I'll still talk to you. Narcissa was left fuming that family business was divulged in front of so many people. She turned her attention to her son. Come, Draco, it's time to go home. Quote ellipsis. But mother, do I need to? What about my things? Yes, Draco, you need to. Dobby will collect your things. That was like an explosion in Padma's head as her keen mind was busily connecting the dots. Dobby being the Malfoy's house elf presented. Her gasp of astonishment died in her throat though, well before it could pass her lips. Padma was suddenly far more concerned with the strong hand that had just clamped down on her thigh. Looking to see that hand belonged to Harry rebooted her brain as Padma realized she was about to give vital information away. She nodded her head slightly, indicating to Harry she was back in control. As Harry's hand was removed, Padma drew some comfort from seeing Harry's other hand had also clamped around Hermione's thigh. Draco was also beginning to decipher what his mother was not actually saying. He didn't like it one bit. Quote ellipsis. What about Pansy, can she come too? Narcissa felt she was giving more information away here than she'd intended. There was nothing else for it though. Draco, only her parents can sign the necessary parchment. Now let's go complete this process and head home. The message that Draco's body language conveyed to Pansy was read by all of Slytherin, and a good portion of the rest of the school. Her slight nod meant that no one would be surprised when the Parkinsons arrived to collect the daughter, when would depend on how soon Pansy could get to the Owlery. As McGonagall led the Malfoys to her new office, the rest of the students were getting ready for their first period class. As the Ravenclaw trio were preparing to follow their head of house to Charms, they were joined by Neville. Harry, making a move on Padma too. Parvati certainly spotted what was going on, so you'll be the talk of the school by lunchtime. Sorry about that, I needed some way of distracting these two from blurting out things we don't want anyone else to know. It certainly worked, and if people are talking about that, it will take their minds of other things. Oh, so now I'm just a distraction, Crow. I feel so used. Neville, I think you should challenge this scoundrel to a duel. My honor is at stake here. Padma, he beats both of us together, along with Hermione, every week. I think I'll give that a miss. All three of her friends appreciated Padma's attempts at humor, and her determination to stay positive, as her relationship with her twin crashed and burned. Neville had some news that might raise a chuckle. Well, Malfoy leaving destroyed Ron's theory that Draco was the heir of Slytherin, and the one causing the attacks. This left Hermione shaking her head. I think hearing he actually had a theory is more shocking than what that theory was. This raised a laugh amongst the group, but Neville had more for them. Oh, he had a lot more than a theory. Ron had an entire plan worked out to prove he was right. Noticing he had his friend's attention now, Neville told them the rest. He had somehow heard rumors that Harry possessed an invisibility cloak. I was supposed to ask if Ron could borrow it. He was sure getting into the Slytherin common room would see Malfoy revealing all, proving his theory. Hermione poured scorn all over that idea. Quote ellipsis. And did he think an invisibility cloak was going to protect him from whatever was attacking the students? Actually, he did. Ron argued that, if this thing couldn't see you then its eyes couldn't possibly affect you. Neville presented the argument evenly, he himself not knowing the truth of the matter. This left Hermione floundering. That's either the most idiotic thing I've ever heard, or sheer genius. She looked toward Harry for help in making her mind up. He could only shrug his shoulders. I'll pass it along to my father with the rest of the news. We always hang behind in defense class anyway. You have news. The hope in Susan's voice hurt that they couldn't really tell her more. Sorry Susan, it's just anything we hear gets passed on to my father. I'm certain anything important will soon make its way to your aunt. She was nodding at that. It's just hard, feeling so helpless. Padma had a suggestion for Susan and Hannah. We've got the marauders tonight, but tomorrow we're back to researching in the library. We're trying to discover what could be causing this. You're both welcome to join us. The two girls quickly accepted that invitation before Hannah asked another question. Is there any more news on Luna? They all could see the barely contained fury that Harry displayed at the mention of the young girl's name. We'll find out the latest in defense. Last I heard, my father was still hopeful that Luna would join us by the weekend. Hermione slipped her arm around Harry to offer some comfort, knowing how much the attack on Luna had affected him. She herself was now facing a miserable Christmas without him. She wouldn't complain though, this is who Harry was. With Padma already in the doldrums, and both Smeeta and Ramrao determined to get their twin daughters together to discover just what was wrong, this could be a miserable Christmas all round. Albus Dumbledore stood outside the village of Hogsmeade and gazed up at the majesty that was Hogwarts Castle. It was exactly 100 years ago this September that an 11-year-old Albus first set foot in its hallowed halls, an anniversary that was marked by the release of that book of Skeeters that started all his troubles. That wasn't strictly true though, his troubles had really started the year before, with Harry's arrival at the castle. Now that Albus had left Hogwarts, he found himself able to look back at his final year and identify the glaring mistakes he'd made. The biggest was underestimating the caliber of the opponents he faced, a mistake he never really recovered from. Albus knew without a doubt that the Hogwarts board would dismiss him as headmaster as soon as they convened. He had no intention of hanging about to give them that pleasure. His reputation might be in tatters, and his decision-making had lately been questionable at best. He was still Albus Dumbledore though, one of the most powerful and knowledgeable wizards in the world. It was time to make a new future for himself. Albus understood better than anyone that his destiny was irrevocably intertwined with that of Hogwarts and her chosen champion, Harry Crow and E. Potter. That would of course have to be factored into any future plans that would hopefully see him make a triumphant return to Britain and Hogwarts. With one last longing look at the castle, Albus proclaimed, "I'll be back," before he dissipated away to whatever the future held for him. Thanks for reading. 2 While looking ahead, I've hit a bit of a conundrum. How do you physically alter something that isn't physically there? Specifically, how did the Basilisk affect Sir Nicholas and how the hell do you administer the Mandrake potion to a ghost? Any good ideas might find their way into the story, credited of course. The writings on the wall. Harry Crow. A massive thank you to all the readers who took the time to send me their solutions for the conundrum I had hit. I read every single one and they all played their part in developing the answer I finally used. To name everyone who responded here would take at least half a chapter. I was simply overwhelmed with the awesome response. I am placing a cliffhanger warning right at the start of this chapter. To be honest, the chapter would need to be about 20,000 words to avoid leaving a cliffhanger. I could do that, but you wouldn't get a chapter for about 3 weeks. Instead, I've placed a warning here. You can choose whether to read it now, or wait for the next few chapters to be written and posted. Chapter 44. Like students the world over, those of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry quickly adapted to the new situation they found themselves in. While they may wish to spend time in a broom closet with their boyfriend-girlfriend, none of the students thought it was worth risking death for. McGonagall had also pulled a master stroke by inviting the press into Hogwarts. This was a success on 2 fronts. It reassured the parents their children were safe and showed Hogwarts had nothing to hide. Madam Bones explaining their plan to tear the castle apart at the Christmas holidays also settled nerves. Those holidays were only 6 weeks away. Whether it was the pictures of auras accompanying students around the castle or the mere fact that the ministry actually had a plan, the expected flood of students leaving Hogwarts never progressed much past a trickle. Pansy Parkinson was one of the few whose parents arrived in Hogwarts and demanded she return home with them. The study group was making steady progress in the library. That meant they were working their way through a mountain of books with no positive results so far. The 4 were looking forward to their Saturday morning classes. Hermione had an experiment she wanted to try, in the hope she could disprove Ron Weasley's invisibility quailed invulnerability theory. Neville found himself being the unfortunate, and certainly uncomfortable guinea pig since Hermione hadn't been able to let go of this conundrum since he mentioned the redhead's theory earlier in the week. Bill was genuinely interested in the experiment too, as even he was unsure what the result might be. Hermione asked the room for a hoop on the floor, and then had Neville stand inside it while donning Harry's invisibility cloak. As the lights in the room dimmed, Hermione began her explanation. An invisibility cloak works by bending light around its wearer, making him undetectable to the human eye. She then cast a lumos to prove her point, and it did. There was no sign of Neville, not even a shadow. Now, while the cloak can bend light around its wearer, the question is whether it can bend magic. Hermione then cast red sparks at the space the hoop told her Neville was. They seemed to bounce off thin air. The witch let out a whoop of triumph before casting a stinging hex at the same space. Ouch, and Neville removing the cloak's hood left his irked head floating in midair. Was that stinger really necessary, Hermione? Oh, don't be such a baby, you could hardly have felt that through your dueling robes. We needed to see if magic could penetrate the cloak. Now, whatever petrified Luna and Moonlight was certainly magical, agreed. She got nods all around for that conclusion as Hermione then rounded off her reasoning. We have just witnessed that an invisibility cloak is no defense against magic, therefore no defense against whatever is attacking and petrifying. Ron could have been petrified or dead and no one would have known, not until someone literally tripped over him. What? Oh, sorry Professor Weasley, it was just a theory Ron had. Hermione decided to quickly change the subject. Now, after I successfully used Rowena Ravenclaw's goblin translation spell on Neville and Padma, Barchoke approached Director Ragnick about the other people I wanted to use it on. The director agreed, providing we can keep the spell a secret. So, would you like the ability to speak goblin? Bill almost exclaimed. What? Again, while realizing he was being sidetracked here. The ability to communicate in goblin though would be a tremendous boon to his career, and he could always wring the truth out of Ron at lunchtime. Hermione, that would be brilliant. She cast the spell and then they got down to work, with Bill now shouting at them in goblin. Barchoke missed the days when he could shout at people. He was now having to talk nice to get what he wanted. It was probably going to cost him gold as well. It would certainly be worth it to get his enemy's head mounted on his wall. He would never send someone into danger unprepared though. She deserved to know exactly what this task entailed. Miss Skeeter, you are well aware of our target's reputation, and know how dangerous this mission could be. I can provide you with an emergency portkey that will punch its way through the heaviest wards and deposit you here. As the name implies, it would be for use only in an emergency. Your target would certainly know if it was used. Rita certainly understood the danger, and the portkey would be a godsend if she was discovered, but it was now time to talk business. As you rightly said, I would be putting myself in great danger. This leads us to the question, what's in it for me? With only her ambition matching Rita's greed, Barchoke was sure they could come to some arrangement. When it came to his family's safety, money was no object as far as Barchoke was concerned. Lucius Malfoy had certainly endangered his family, and the goblin was willing to part with gold to ensure the bastard paid for it. We have quite a few options available, depending on which you preferred. You could work for a fee, with a generous bonus if we achieve our ultimate aims. Any story you wish to write after that would of course be yours to sell, providing you kept any goblin involvement out of it. You may also wish to write another book. We would certainly offer very favorable terms for publishing it. Testing the waters, Rita posed a question. What sort of fee would we be talking about for this? Barchoke laid it out for the ex-reporter. If you can provide me with the information that sees Lucius Malfoy shipped off to Azkaban, my delight and gratitude would be in the region of 10,000 galleons. The number mentioned almost had Rita swooning, but she asked for clarification. Lucius Malfoy is as slippery as they come. What happens if I get the information yet he manages to talk his way out of it? Will I still get paid? You get the information and the rest will be up to me. Malfoy has previously used his position and money to avoid justice. He now has neither of those options available to him. As an ambassador, I have a direct line into the ministry. I also have the ear of Madame Bones, and the gratitude of the minister for assisting with guarding Hogwarts. We just need enough proof to get Malfoy arrested and fed truth serum. The rest will be easy. Rita was never going to say no to a deal like that, though left her final financial options open for the moment. There was always the prospect of a better deal if she got the goods on good old Lucius. The Ravenclaw table were not alone in wondering what the deal was with the quartet of second years who arrived for lunch, still dressed in dragon skin. Hermione provided what was a quiet simple answer. Professor Weasley wants us to wear them all the time until this problem is solved. He didn't see the point of our dueling robes lying in our rooms when there was something dangerous sulking around the castle. We didn't really have an answer to refute that, so the robes stay. It was Harry who saw her first, the little blonde nervously holding onto Siria's arm as they entered the Great Hall together. His wide smile of welcome saw a tearful Luna start to run toward him. Harry shot up, soon having her wrapped in his arms and Luna's feet swinging off the floor as he spun her around. The delight in both their faces was clearly displayed for all to see. That was before everyone else crowded around, desperate to check that Luna was indeed all right. Hermione had Luna wrapped in a hug by the time Sirius squeezed his way through the crowd with another returnee, this one in a wicker carrying case. There's someone else here that wants to say hello. Moonlight. Hermione had been managing to hold back the tears as she greeted Luna, but there was something about her pet being returned that saw her resolve break. The Kneazle purred in satisfaction at being once more in his witch's arms. Sirius had a warning for all those crowding around the little blonde. Luna's already had a meeting with the head of the DMLE and answered all Madame Bones' question. She doesn't need to be interrogated again. Lay off the questions, people. Harry led Luna to the Ravenclaw table before turning to her friends who had followed her there. Colin, Ginny, don't let Luna out of your sight until we get back. Hermione then approached, with her familiar cradled in her arms. Luna, could you take care of Moonlight for me? The little blonde's eyes seemed to get even wider at that request. Are you sure, Hermione? Her smile said it all. Yes, I'm sure, Luna. The four left with Sirius and Henrika, but not before noticing their friends had gathered around Luna to make sure Sirius's instructions would be obeyed. No one was going to hassle her today. Sirius meanwhile gave the group the bad news. Luna remembered even less than Myrtle. The golden eyes she did remember though confirmed their suspicion. Both she and Moonlight were lucky to survive. It was really the next morning while exercising before Hermione had a chance to talk with Harry alone. It wasn't your fault, Harry. Luna was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He didn't answer for a moment, but when he did, Harry's reasoning surprised his mate. This is a massive castle, Hermione, and Luna was stationary. What are the chances of this creature just happening to pick that particular window Luna was sitting in? There must be over 100 little windowed alcoves like that spread around Hogwarts. I remember spending a lovely afternoon with you sitting in one about this time last year. Odds like that make me think this was no coincidence, but a deliberate attack on someone close to me. It was now Hermione's turn for quiet contemplation as they ran around the track Hogwarts had provided them within her oh-so-special room. I never thought of looking at it from that angle. You make a pretty compelling case. What do we do now? Keep everyone close and safe for the next 36 days, and then I can go hunting. The instant the Hogwarts school board officially kicked Dumbledore out, Father will approach McGonagall about rebuilding the wards around Hogwarts during the holidays too. That will also give us more warriors on site, just in case we need them. The search teams needing to call for reinforcements was not something Hermione even wanted to think about, knowing full well Harry would be right in the thick of it. We need to research more, so you will have at least some idea what you will be up against. Hermione, at the rate we're going, we'll have covered every book on creatures the library has within the next 2 weeks. It's better to keep the research at the pace we've set, rather than speed it up and maybe miss something. Again, Hermione couldn't fault his logic, so changed the subject slightly. You really like Luna, don't you? For any other young man, that question being asked by the girlfriend would result in an instant answer of hell no. Their blood bond meant Harry could answer with total honesty, safe in the knowledge that Hermione knew exactly how he felt about her being his mate. This was certainly a good thing. The smile her question generated would have earned at least a slap from any normal girlfriend. Luna is just so Luna. She looks at me and sees Harry, not Centurion Crow, Lord Potter or any boy who lived rubbish. She just sees me. You of all people must know how refreshingly different that is for me. Padma and Neville are the same, but they took a little while to get there. Harry's smile waned as he continued. At the ministry ball, Emma said I'd had a hard life. I disagreed. Looking at Luna, I have no right to complain. Her mother died in a magical accident at home. Luna was 8 and alone in the house with her mother when it happened. Her dad apparently didn't take his wife's death too well. Father called him eccentric, which has me wondering what would have happened to Luna if we hadn't stepped in with the scholarship and our friendship. They ran for another lap before Harry spoke again. I know we haven't mentioned the holidays. Neither of us wants to think about being apart again. We both know I need to be here though, just as we both know your mum and dad won't want you anywhere near Hogwarts while the search is underway. What I wanted to ask was if you could include Luna in any plans for the holidays. Padma's going to have to go home to get the problem with Parvati sorted, at least this way you won't be on your own. Hermione stopped running, making Harry wonder if he'd said something wrong. Those fears were soon proved groundless as Hermione pulled him in for a sweet kiss. That's my Harry, always thinking of others. Why do I feel like our little family just acquired a new sister? He actually blushed at how well Hermione could read him. That wasn't supposed to be possible. Well, she's a nice kid, and another kiss removed the need for words. After leaving him bewitched and bewildered, Hermione shot away. 2 more laps to go, last one finishing is a rotten egg. Tonks stood at the door, totally forgotten by the young couple. Sirius had asked if a guard could be provided to escort them to and from their morning exercise. After he'd made her mum's dream of once more being a member of the Black family become a reality, Tonks had no intention of passing this duty on to anyone else. She had overheard Harry's reasoning on the attack and, like Hermione, couldn't fault his conclusions. Tonks didn't think she would be breaking any confidences if she passed that information on to Madam Bones. These two appeared more clued up about what was happening in the castle than most of the adults. It was a rather irked Roger who sat down to lunch that Sunday, leading to some gentle jibes from around the Ravenclaw table. Did you get beaten again by our big, bad second years? I thought you said it was their turn to taste defeat today. What happened? The sniggers building up around the table saw Roger's complexion becoming redder and redder. Finally, he could hold it no longer. I would like to see anyone else at this table stand up to people casting spells at them in Goblin. It was bloody terrifying, not knowing what was coming at you. This may have stopped the sniggers, as wizards and witches contemplated just how scary that would be. There was no sympathy heading in the 4th year's direction though. Cho summed up what most of them were thinking. Suck it up, Davies, at least you're getting extra tuition. The Weasley twins don't seem too upset about it. That's because they thought it was a brilliant prank. When they heard it was Neville's idea, only the fact they were knackered stopped them carrying him on their shoulders to Gryffindor Tower. The second years in question entered the Great Hall, with their trio of first-year shadows beside them. They all headed for the Ravenclaw table to eat lunch. Morag was the first to attempt teasing information out this group. So, Padma, we're hearing you're quite the linguist. Padma answered in Hindi, Goblin and then English. Like Harry, English is not my native tongue. That certainly makes it easier to pick up another language. That seemed a bit too glib for Lisa. Quote ellipsis. And what's Neville's excuse? This didn't even warrant a blink from Padma as she answered right back. Oh, Neville is just a natural. Either that, or he likes my reward method of teaching. This may have had Neville blushing, but Padma easily achieved her goal. No one was too interested in how they could speak Goblin after that. The state of her relationship with Neville was a far juicier tidbit for them to sink their teeth into. Hermione took this opportunity to have a quiet word with Luna. What are you doing for the Christmas holidays? Oh, Daddy's trip is paying dividends. I was going to stay in the castle. I'll have to write to him and say he needs to come home now. The castle's going to be closed. Hermione felt her heart go out to this girl a little more. Harry was right again. Do you want to write and ask if you could spend Christmas with me? With Harry going to be inside Hogwarts, and Padma having to go home, you would be doing me a big favor. I've gotten used to having my friends around me. I would love to spend Christmas with at least one of them. Do you really mean that? Seeing the hope in those pleading eyes left Hermione wanting to cry. Instead, she smiled at Luna and answered honestly. Every word of it, Luna. Her wide smile would melt hearts a lot harder than Hermione's. The brunette was surprised though when Urgit swooped into the hall. The snowy owl landed in front of the two witches and held her leg out. There may have been nothing tied there, but Urgit's message was clearly understood. Write your letter, Luna. Urgit's just offered to carry it for you. The owl returned its foot to the table and nodded its head in agreement. This drew a cry of exasperation from Roger. Or for Merlin's sake, even the bloody owl's not normal. How many languages does it speak? Harry interrupted before anyone else could answer. Urgit is a classy owl. She's above using things like language. That the owl chose that exact moment to emit a little bark was either one hell of a coincidence or bloody scary. See, Urgit doesn't need to speak to get her message across. Not one person who just witnessed that scene could disagree with Harry over that. With Urgit now destined to be flying off to pastures unknown in search of Luna's father, Hermione would have a quick word with Sirius so he could speak with her mum and dad. She wasn't expecting any problems in clearing Luna coming home with her at Christmas. With Luna's return, the atmosphere inside the castle was certainly on the up. They had the auras for protection and the only victim of the attack was back as good as new. Crow's Marauders were certainly back having fun at their weekly class. They were working in the usual mixed teams of 4 to accurately hit the torso of their assigned dueling dummy 10 times, preferably before the team they were competing against managed the feat. As the dummies were currently programmed to dodge spells, the competition was fierce, with the rest of the students shouting encouragement to those firing off spells. Their round-robin tournament produced the top 4 teams who then battled it out for the final, and tonight's eventual champions. Henrika had spent most of the evening watching the accompanying Auror guards as they stared in amazement at what these first years were learning. That was before they even considered that the class was being run by 4 second years. She spotted a chance here to build the current spirit inside Hogwarts even higher, and maybe get some payback for those 10 galleons she lost betting on her boyfriend. As Hermione and Padma were presenting the winning team with their slabs of chocolate, Professor Hobson let her mischievous side out to play. Very well done everybody, and I know we normally spend this time reviewing what we've just learned, but I was wondering if we could do something a bit different tonight. Our Auror guests appeared fascinated with tonight's lesson. I was wondering if they wanted to put a team forward, against our instructors here. The roar of approval from the first years displayed the unanimous support for that idea, and the 4 instructors were clearly up for it. Tonks had again volunteered for this duty tonight, and found herself the most senior Auror present. She asked 4 of the trainees if they wanted to accept the challenge. They too quickly agreed. Harry set both dummies to require 20 hits before coming to a stop and Henrika counted them in. The quartet of Auror trainees were soon left red-faced as 4 second years wiped the floor with them, and the audience of first years went mental in celebration. The rules had been set at best of 3, so Tonks had some stern words with the Auror team before the next round. They practiced together all the time and used these dummies as part of their training. You lot thought you were facing off against some kids and got comprehensively beaten. This exercise was being attempted by first years. That should tell you it's not about how powerfully you can cast a spell. The whole point of this is to improve speed and accuracy, something I want to see from you now. The Marauder tutors were ready to go again, their concentration total. This time the result was so close, neither Tonks or Henrika could call it one way or the other. A tie was declared, again to much cheering from the jubilant first years. The deciding leg saw 4 tense Aurors trying to pull this out the fire. If anything, the teams were even closer this time, leading both judges ready to announce another tie before Harry reacted. He began shaking the Aurors' hands and thanking them for taking part, claiming they were delighted to sneak a draw against such stiff competition. The other 3 followed Harry's example and everyone left the class on a high. Padma waited until they were back in the Ravenclaw common room, and just about to run through a final revision of their potion for tomorrow morning, before asking Harry why he did that. We took the first bout fair and square, with the other 2 being drawn. That made us the winners. Padma, those Aurors are here to keep us safe. The last thing we need is to hit their morale. Can you imagine the ribbing they would take if the 4 of us claimed a victory? They can now rightfully say we surprised them in the first match, but they pulled it back over the next 2. I think Henrika was trying to pay us back for taking down Sirius and Remus at Halloween. She expected us to lose and got as big a shock as those Aurors. She hasn't seen us practice much this year. Morag was left shaking her head. I can't believe you took on 4 Aurors, and held your own. It was Hermione who tried to nip that kind of talk in the bud. They were Auror trainees, not qualified Aurors. We were also running a speed and accuracy drill, something we have been practicing for over a year. That gave us a massive advantage, one we certainly used. It was a thoughtful Morag who responded to that. I so want to be jealous at your extra defense lessons, then I remember we get Professor Weasley twice a week. The rest of the castle are already jealous of us because of that. Lisa had the final word on the matter. Can you blame them? Imagine being stuck with Lockhart as a defense teacher. The first years have at least got you every Tuesday night. It was Friday night as the study group worked their way through more books on beasts in the library. Colin, Ginny and Luna were getting caught up in the excitement of tomorrow's Quidditch match, the first they would see. That Ginny had 2 brothers playing in the game against Slytherin had her almost hyperventilating in anticipation. There would be no studying coming from that quarter tonight. Susan and Hannah were also Quidditch fans, though tended only to get excited when Hufflepuff, or was it Cedric, was playing. The quartet would again miss the game, their training coming first. Padma was trying to convince them that they needed to attend the Gryffindor, Ravenclaw game, since so many of their friends would be involved in that match. Harry and Hermione were adopting a wait-and-see policy, while Neville wasn't too bothered either way, he would just go along with whatever the others decided. Hermione audibly taking a deep breath was their first clue she was onto something. The color draining from her face as those brown eyes scanned the page was certainly not a good sign. What have you found, Hermione? Does it fit what we're looking for? I really hope not, Padma. Just reading about this is terrifying me, but it certainly matches the profile of the creature we're looking for. She turned the large book around so the others could get a better look at it. Since the entire group still couldn't see the page, Padma began reading the description out loud. Of the many fearsome beasts and monsters that roam our land, there is none more curious or more deadly than the basilisk, known also as the king of serpents. This snake, which may reach gigantic size and live many hundreds of years, is born from a chicken's egg, hatched beneath a toad. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly and venomous fangs, the basilisk has a murderous stare, and all who are fixed with the beam of its eye shall suffer instant death. Spiders flee before the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy, and the basilisk flees only from the crowing of the rooster, which is fatal to it. Luna burst out laughing at that, drawing all eyes to her. That last bit is an old wives' tale. Roosters crow when the sun comes up, it's daylight therefore the danger must be gone. My father is an expert on weird and wonderful creatures, our house is full of books on them. Basilisks are real scary monsters, and you don't want to face one with just a rooster in your hand. Padma resisted the temptation to tease with that piece of information. There were about 3 cockerel versus sword or wand jokes that jumped into her head. This was a really serious situation. Lives for hundreds of years certainly fits the profile. How is a giant snake getting about the school though? Someone is leading it. Just like Luna a moment ago, Harry now had every eye on him, waiting on an explanation. This may be the king of snakes, but tell me, Luna, did any of those books in your home say a basilisk could read or write? Hermione was getting over the shock of her discovery and caught on to what Harry was implying at once. The writing on the wall, it would need someone to do that. Wait, there's more here. Padma read out the small paragraph tucked under a drawing of the basilisk. This thing had so many fangs that great white sharks would turn green with envy. Basilisk breeding has been outlawed for over a millennium. This law has rarely been broken even by the darkest of wizards, since only a Parselmouth can control a basilisk. So there is a Parselmouth inside Hogwarts who's controlling a basilisk. Not good, this is so not good. Harry tried to calm the girl down. Easy, Susan, all we've got at the moment is a theory. It might seem a good theory, but that's all it is for now. I'll pass a message on to my father with Assistant Ambassador Weasley first thing tomorrow. You might want to do the same with a letter to your aunt. We haven't one shred of proof at the moment. Let's pass on our research and they can have some experts look at it for flaws. Neville tended to be the quiet one in the group, only speaking when he really had something to say. This meant though that when he did speak, they all listened. I agree with Harry. We may think we're right, but saying anything about this would probably start a panic. We can trust Amelia, Barchoke and McGonagall to make the right decisions. That doesn't mean we don't keep our eyes open. Neville's calm demeanor helped them see this was the only thing they could do for now. Most of Hogwarts students would be out of the castle tomorrow anyway, with the Quidditch match taking place. That would give those adults involved time to check their research and take whatever action they thought necessary. No one felt like continuing their research after that. They left the library intent on seeing everyone to their houses. Hannah though proved just what you could learn from keeping your eyes open. Guys, you need to see this. They all looked to where Hannah had indicated, and saw a strange sight. A long line of spiders were crawling along the wall before disappearing through a crack in the ancient window fitting. It reminded Hermione of people queuing to get on a bus, and that's when exactly what she was seeing here hit her. Spiders flee before the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy. The getting out of the castle. This was such strange behavior for arachnids that it was hard to refute Hermione's claim. It was cold enough inside the castle in November, these spiders were risking death by leaving the protection of Hogwarts, but not one hesitated. Some primeval need seemed to be controlling their behavior. Susan, this is more proof we need to add to our messages home. We'll drop you two off at Hufflepuff and then head up to Gryffindor. When Harry used his Centurion command voice, not one of them thought to question him. Susan and Hannah were actually delighted at the escort to their house. Hermione, Padma and Neville also knew Harry wouldn't sleep tonight without seeing Colin safely inside Gryffindor Tower. Those spiders had just added physical proof to what was already a terrifying theory, a theory that was now playing on all their minds. As they approached Gryffindor Tower, the group spotted a gaunt Parvati approaching from the other direction. This proved too much for an already stressed Padma. She raced toward her twin and soon had her tightly entrapped in her arms. Oh Parv, you shouldn't be walking around the castle by yourself, it's just too dangerous. We think we know what did that to Luna, we also know someone must be leading the basilisk. Padma felt her twin stiffen in her arms and tried to offer some reassurance. Don't worry Parv, we're sending word to Barchoke and Amelia, this will soon be over. Will you meet us for breakfast? We don't want to let anyone out of our sight. Whatever's wrong, we're still family. Neville was by Padma's side and taking Parvati by the arm. Don't worry, Padma, I'll look after her. The auras are here now and the prefects will soon be doing the head count. You lot need to get back to Ravenclaw before that. The prefects were no longer performing patrols of the corridors, instead they were charged with ensuring everyone was present in their own house, and informing the auras each evening of their head count. Once the auras had arrived, no student was allowed out until morning, hence Harry and Hermione needing a guard as they exercised. Padma watched Neville lead her frightened twin into Gryffindor House with unshed tears gathering at the corner of her eyes, promising herself they would get this sorted soon. Hermione's voice pulled her back from her musings. Padma, we need to move. If we're even a minute late, Penny will push the panic button and have squads of auras searching the castle for us. It was Luna though who took Padma by the arm and began leading her in the direction of Ravenclaw. Harry was having trouble sleeping and called for the Lady Helena, deciding that she would be a good sounding board to bounce their theory off. She would soon tell him if their ideas were a mile out. There was a part of Harry that hoped they were. Unfortunately, the Ravenclaw ghost just gave credence to their theory. Helena confirmed that Salazar was indeed a Parselmouth, and a basilisk was just the kind of creature he would leave behind in his chamber, knowing one day his heir would use it to cleanse Hogwarts. She promised to pass this news around to the other ghosts and portraits. Having an inkling of what they were dealing with meant they could at least begin to formulate some kind of contingency plan of how the castle would respond to another attack. As Harry and Hermione were just about to finish their fencing practice the next morning, they got their first taste of those plans. Hogwarts' bell rang out a loud warning, a warning that reached every nook and cranny of the ancient castle. Hermione was moving her sword scabbard from her back to her hip as they raced over to where they'd left their bottles of water and her dueling robe. As Harry helped her on with it, Tonks stood at the door with her arms spread wide, deliberately blocking the way. Neither of you are leaving this room until I get word that it's safe to do so. Tonks found herself staring straight into a sparking pair of green eyes. She was really having trouble believing that the owner of these eyes had yet to become a teenager. Or Tonks, I outrank you and am ordering you to step aside, please. I don't want to hurt you, I would much rather you saw Hermione safely back to Ravenclaw Tower than you force me to ask the castle to remove you. I promised Sirius I would look after you and we have no idea what's out there. Unfortunately, we do. Harry was interrupted by the Lady Helena passing through the door, and Tonks. Champion, you were right. We caught the attack in time and the evacuation of the castle has already begun. Myrtle actually saw who was controlling the beast but refuses to speak with anyone but you. I left her with the Baron while I came here. Hermione was first to answer. If the danger has passed, I can come too. Tonks was right behind the young witch with her own answer. You two aren't leaving my sight, let's go. Having an Auror guard was certainly useful as Tonks' presence allowed them to follow wherever the Lady Helena led, while the rest of the students were being escorted toward the entrance hall. They turned a corner and came upon a scene of utter carnage. Stiff bodies of students and even a few auras littered the corridor floor. The group must have walked right into the basilisk. They were being carefully removed by a squad of very nervous auras, with the space above their heads occupied by a multitude of ghosts floating, lifelessly, and aimlessly. They didn't want to meet anything that could do that to a ghost. Hermione didn't recognize most of the ghosts, there were even a few ghostly horses mixed in there too. What happened here? The lady had an answer for them. Sir Nicholas was distraught that his Death Day party allowed that attack to occur. When I heard from our champion what might be responsible for these attacks, he contacted members of the Headless Hunt and offered them some sport. They received just enough warning to get here in time, and we managed to direct everyone else away from the danger. It was time to ask the question Tonks wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer to. Are they dead? Yes, Auror, that's why the ghosts, throwing themselves between the basilisk and its intended victims, saw them absorb enough of the basilisk magic to ensure these people are merely petrified, and not dead. As they pushed through this macabre scene, Hermione noticed Sir Nicholas and the friar. Like the other ghosts, both appeared to be filled with smoke, almost as if they had been burned. How could the basilisk affect them? They're already dead, Hermione, so can't die again. We all absorb a trickle of magic just from being in the castle. We need that trickle of magic to maintain our forms. That amount of concentrated magic all at once will overload their forms, making them lose what you would consider consciousness, until the foreign magic can slowly leak back out of them. Most should be fine by the time Christmas comes around. A matter of weeks is nothing to a ghost. Helena trailed off, noticing Harry had knelt beside a pair of stiff bodies. Harry was extremely relieved to see that Hannah and Susan were petrified, and not dead. He stood with his anger tightly controlled though silently promising that someone was going to pay for this. The Aurors who approached to move the two students also knew who this young witch was, and were certain the wrath of their boss would soon descend on Hogwarts. The Hufflepuff students had been making their way down to breakfast, excited about today's game, when the attack happened. 9 students and 3 Aurors would have certainly died, if not for the swift actions of the ghosts. The message on the wall, again written in blood, had halted both Hermione and Tonks in their tracks. Harry came up behind them, reading the macabre message too. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. They needed more information before they could hope to make any sense of that. We need to talk with Myrtle right away, and find out what she knows. On entering her bathroom, Harry would swear he saw relief on the ghostly face of the Slytherin house ghost. He didn't think the Baron was exactly comfortable dealing with the emotional spirit that was once a crying teenage witch. Helena's voice was a lot more soothing. Myrtle, Harry has raced through the castle to talk with you. He's here now, won't you come out? Harry kept his features composed when faced with the sight of a crying Myrtle slowly emerging from the toilet bowl. Hermione squeezing his arm was the only sign she felt as creeped out as he was. Neither would look upon a visit to the loo in quite the same way ever again. Oh, Harry, it was horrible, simply horrible. This declaration was followed by more sobbing from the distraught spirit. I understand it will be hard for you, Myrtle, but I really need to know what we're facing here. Harry offered the young ghost his most enigmatic smile. It seemed to be working. I don't know, Harry, I'm frightened. You may hate me once I tell you, and I don't think I could cope with that. You might not have noticed, but I don't exactly have a lot of friends. More crying followed that declaration. Hiding his bemusement in favor of a smile, Harry gave the ghost the answer he hoped would get them some answers of their own. Myrtle, I promise whatever you tell me here, I will still be your friend. Myrtle was considering this when the door barged open and Henrika rushed in. Harry, Hermione, the school is being evacuated. The portraits told us where you were, I need to get the 4 of you out of here. As Neville and Padma filed in behind Henrika, a tortured shriek came from Myrtle. It's her, she's the one. They all followed the direction Myrtle was indicating, her ghostly finger was pointing straight at a bemused Padma. Thanks for reading. Enter the Basilisk. Harry Crow. This is now the longest chapter of Harry Crow, and possibly my longest ever. I simply didn't want to end with a cliffhanger 2 weeks in a row, so kept on writing until I could safely finish the chapter without one. I would like to dedicate this chapter to Richard Griffiths OBE, who sadly died this week after complications set in following heart surgery. An immense acting talent who managed to infuse humanity into a character who didn't possess any. Vernon Dursley. Chapter 45. The stately elegance and sheer opulence of the room the young witch was inviting the wizard into was currently being totally ignored by the couple. This was more about the subject matter they were discussing claiming all of their attention, rather than any form of indifference or complacency. I was beginning to think you weren't going to be allowed to flew over. I really miss seeing you every day. I'm really glad of a break from the manor, things are pretty intense at home right now. Mother and father are both furious at each other, kinda makes me wish I was back at Hogwarts too. Pansy was shaking her head at that idea as she led Draco to the sofa. Not if it could get us killed. My mother and father are furious that this thing can attack the Bloods, and the fact your father never warned anyone of what he was doing. The same rules still apply, Pansy. If my father gets caught, anyone who knew about whatever scheme he's up to will find at the very least the Gringotts vaults closed. Trust me, you wouldn't want to be in the same situation as us. So, you still don't know what he's done? Draco remained adamant in his opinion. No, and I don't want to either. Even Mother doesn't know what he'd been up to, just that we were in the same danger as everyone else. That's why she came to Hogwarts and dragged me out of there. I think my parents are frightened that, if your father gets caught, he might pull others down with him. I will of course truthfully claim I simply didn't want to be at Hogwarts without you. That's why I sent a letter home asking my parents to collect me. It was then Draco dropped the bombshell. My father had no intention of getting me out of there. Mother had to draw her wand so he wouldn't stop her heading for Hogwarts. He's absolutely livid that she might have pointed the ministry in his direction, while she is furious that he put me in such danger. It's quite a shock to discover your father places some form of revenge over the value of his only child's life. Pansy didn't know how to answer that, who would? Draco took her silence as a sign to continue. He was speaking his recent thoughts out loud for the first time, showing just how concerned Draco was at the current situation. I am starting to question everything my father has taught me. He claims Malfoy's bow to no one, yet he then sullied our ancestry by calling a man with a muggle father his master. He projects an image of power, yet last year an 11-year-old Harry Crow destroyed him before his goblin father finished the job. He preaches nothing is more important than family, then leaves his own son in a deadly situation, a situation which he deliberately created. I just don't know which way is up at the moment, Pansy. She laid Draco's head on her lap and encouraged him to stretch out on the sofa. As Pansy ran her fingers through Draco's hair, he closed his eyes and considered the other side of the coin. Crow is supposed to be my enemy yet he confuses the hell out of me. That day in the Great Hall when I called him a thieving goblin bastard, he had me. Reporting that to his father would have seen me barred from Gringotts, and we both know what that would mean. I got the impression Crow understood exactly what that would mean too, yet he gave me an easy out. We both also know we would only need to ask and defense lessons from Professor Weasley would be available too. It was our choice to give it a miss. Then there was the Merlin Ball. Pansy held her silence, knowing Draco needed to get this off his chest. We both know I wouldn't have stood an earthly of receiving any new dress robes from home, while Ron Weasley would probably been able to afford a set now. Crow provided tailoring for all of us so everyone was the same, and must have paid out a fortune to do so. Pansy, that was one of the best parties I've ever attended, everyone had a great time. Blaze even managed to bag a seat at Crow's table, and he was welcomed there. All the Slytherins had noticed the changes in the castle this year, and not all of them were against those changes. Draco appeared to be slowly coming around to that point of view. Everyone who has gone up against Crow has come off worse. My father, Slughorn, that massive goblin with the axe, even Dumbledore has seen his reputation destroyed. Kicked out of the Wizengamot and now Hogwarts. Crow has an untouchable power base and could easily lord it over Hogwarts, yet he seems to have no interest in doing so. All he does is train, and that worries me. He needed a moment to consider how far he wanted to take this. Since he'd started unburdening his soul, Draco was actually feeling better. This step though was tantamount to blasphemy, the kind of sin that could see you burned at the stake, or tortured to death. We have been taught that the Dark Lord is all-powerful. All the evidence we've learned lately points to that not being true. It's now an established fact his father was a muggle, and not even my father disputes a 15-month-old Harry Potter defeated Voldemort. The confused wizard needed a moment before continuing. Crow can do things with those blades of his that scares the shit out of me, and I certainly believe him when he says the goblins and the ministry will back him in his fight against the Dark Lord. What if he wins? I don't understand, Draco. If he defeats the Dark Lord for a second time, they will probably make him king or something. Whatever they do, he would certainly not be someone you wanted as an enemy. Father thinks he's being so clever, yet the people Crow has behind him destroyed Dumbledore, something neither Voldemort or Grindelwald were able to do at the height of their powers. This just confused Pansy even more. I still don't understand what you're getting at, Draco. Whatever father has done, I believe he's going to be caught. Between the more efficient ministry and this new alliance with the goblins, everything points to that outcome, with only my father not being able to recognize this. I also think Mother and I have to give him the same support he gave me at Hogwarts over this scheme of his. None. He left me to face whatever he's unleashed in that castle. We'll need to leave him to face the backlash of those actions alone. I just hope Mother and I can survive it, and then choose the right side. Rita had followed her instincts, as well as Draco through the flu. Those instincts were now paying dividends. With the two senior Malfoys barely speaking to each other, there was nothing for her to overhear. Today had been a pure mine of information, just not a rich enough seam yet to supply her with those 10,000 golden galleons. Rita was confident though there would be a break in this story soon. It was an angry Neville who broke the silence in Myrtle's toilet, stoutly springing to Padma's defense. That's impossible. When Luna was petrified, Padma wasn't even in Scotland. She spent Halloween dancing with me at Longbottom Manor. We were all there, even Professor Hobson. I don't know who you saw, but it certainly wasn't Padma. Myrtle didn't take too kindly to her word being questioned, especially in her own patch, and in front of Harry too. I know exactly what I saw. She hissed at that sink and it opened, then she and the ruddy giant snake went down the hole. This saw the ghost pause at the glaring inconsistency in her story. Quote ellipsis. But then, how could she be standing here if she's down there? The obvious solution hit all of them at the same time. With a scream of "Parv!" Padma dived at the construction and attempted to rip a sink off the stone structure with her bare hands. After having no success, she was reaching for her wand when Neville and Harry grabbed her arms and pulled her back. Let me go, my sister is down there. Hermione tried to reason with her. We know, Padma, but what does Professor Weasley always say is our most powerful weapon? Our minds. We're going to need all our weapons if we're to get Parvati out of there. Padma looked at her friends and asked the question. You're going to help? Harry was deadly serious. I count you as family, Padma, and Parvati is your sister. That makes her family too. Whatever or whoever is controlling her has also attacked Luna, Susan and Hannah. They're not getting away with it. The auror in Tonks made her ask the next question. Harry, how do you know someone is controlling this girl? It was just as well both Harry and Neville still had hold of Padma. She was ready to spring at the auror. She settled for sending a verbal blast in her direction. My sister is not a Parselmouth, which is why there was hissing at the sink. You also need that skill to control the basilisk. Both Tonks and Henrika were shocked at that revelation, leaving Harry to regret not approaching the Vila last night with their theory. Okay, time to send for help. Harry removed his dagger and sent the come-running signal to his father. Auror Tonks, how much help can we expect from the auras? Quite a few of the auras in the castle are trainees. I noticed at least one of the trainees petrified in the corridor. If this situation should arise, our very specific orders left no room for any misunderstandings. The castle has to be evacuated, and everyone escorted down to Hogsmeade. That will be the Auror force's top priority. Only after that has been accomplished are they allowed to do any investigating. Henrika chipped in with her take on the evacuation. I told McGonagall I would get you 4 out of here, so they will only be missing 1 student. Tonks then gave her professional opinion of the current situation. They won't halt the evacuation for 1 missing student, rather get everyone else to Hogsmeade and then send a squad back to search for her. It will take my father the best part of an hour to gather squads and then get to Hogwarts. Parv might not have that long, Harry. We're not going to be standing about doing nothing, Padma. It was Henrika who interrupted. Harry, we need to wait until the others get here. We need to get this thing open. Until we do, there's no point in arguing over anything else at the moment. Everyone could see the merit in Harry's argument, but it was Hermione who pointed out the obvious. You're right, but how do we get it open? None of us speak Parseltongue. The Lady Helena then provided Hermione with an answer. Harry is Hogwarts champion, all doors should open for him, even ancient ones. Deciding to give it a try, Harry placed his hands on the nearest sink before issuing a demand. Hogwarts, your champion commands this door to open. They all heard the screech of stone straining to move against stone, but the sinks didn't budge an inch. Harry again commanded the door to open, again the screeching but no opening. Harry drew his sword and held it vertically in front of him, almost as a badge of office. Hogwarts, your champion commands this door to open. This time magic sparked from the sword to battle the ancient Parseltongue magic that was denying access. Brilliant colorful flashes of magic continually jumped between the sword and the stone structure containing the sinks. It slowly crept open as the maelstrom of wild magic lit up the entire toilet. Every hair on Tonk's body was standing to attention from the amount of magic that was in the air. She'd never even heard of such power before, far less witnessed it. Harry, what kind of spell was that? I've never seen anything like it. That wasn't a spell, and it wasn't me. Hogwarts just channeled magic through Godric's blade to overpower the Parselmouth enchantment that secured the opening. Now, I need everyone to cast the strongest shields. The Auror was about to ask why when she noticed that everyone else just obeyed Harry's order, she followed suit. As the last piece of the structure was about to sink into the floor, a surge of magic from Harry's sword blasted it to pieces. Pieces of stone that rained down on the shields they had erected, his three friends ensuring their shields overlapped to cover Harry too. That should stop it closing, and now we can argue about what comes next. Harry hardly had the words out his mouth before Padma butted in. That's my sister down there, no one is stopping me going down after her. No one is trying to stop you, Padma. What we need though is a plan that's more evolved than jumping in there and shouting for Parvati at the top of your voice. If we don't have one, then we need to wait for reinforcements. Padma was smart enough to understand Harry's reasoning, she still didn't like it though. Tonks didn't like this idea of entering the chamber at all, and tried to dissuade Harry. We don't know what's down there, or have any idea of what we'll face. It's madness to go any further without reinforcements. My sister might not have that time to wait, we saw the message written on the corridor wall. Just whose skeleton do you think that message was referring to? Or Tonks, we will need someone to stay behind and lead the others to us. My father will bring every blade he can while Amelia will want a piece of whatever did that to Susan. Harry's words hit Tonks where it hurt. If you think this Auror is going to stand here while 4 kids go down there without her, then you're crazier than a drunk Peeves. Henrika tried to reason with him. Harry, the parents are going to hit the roof if you pull this stunt. It will make that incident this summer seem like a picnic. She was focusing on his mate, and trying to make him see the consequences of this. His mate though had not been idle. Hermione was working on a viable solution to their basilisk problem. She transfigured one of the stones Harry had shattered into something they all recognized from their holidays over the summer. The witch in question slipped on the pair of mirror sunglasses she'd just transfigured. If we can create a strong enough light to temporarily blind it, that should also disrupt the magical focus of its eyes. We all studied and practiced that spell Slughorn cast on you, that should certainly disrupt it for a moment or two. Then, it's a speed and accuracy drill as we aim for its eyes. Harry so wanted to hug his mate, but Padma beat him to it. Hermione, that's so bloody crazy it just might work. Hermione's attention though was still focused on Harry. You need me down there, Harry. Apart from its eyes, this thing will be practically impervious to magic. We're gonna need our swords to fight this thing, and I'm never passing mine off to anyone else. With a nod, Harry turned his attention to Neville. The Gryffindor had his answer already. I would rather face what's down there than be left up here to tell Barchoke and Amelia you 3 jumped into that. Henrika didn't even give Harry time to attempt to sideline her. This is Hogwarts and I am a professor, technically in charge of you lot. I may not be able to stop you going, but I can at least go with you to help keep you 4 out of trouble, down there and when we come back up. All 4 appreciated that. They knew the trouble that would await when their parents caught up with the group. The Lady Ravenclaw solved their other problem. The Baron will lead the rescue parties here, while I will accompany you. Since the Basilisk cannot kill me, I shall take the lead and hope to supply you with at least a warning. Hermione was dishing out the pairs of mirror sunglasses she transfigured and, as they got ready to slide down the chute, even Tonks had to admit they had a plan of action that was better than anything she could come up with on the spur of the moment. With the Ravenclaw ghost taking the lead, Tonks was going to bring up the rear, hoping to ensure they didn't get ambushed from behind. She understood what Henrika was doing by talking about the trouble they would be in when they came back up. Personally, the Auror thought it would be a miracle if they all came out of this alive. She really wished they would wait for the reinforcements to get here, but Tonks was under no illusion she could actually stop them. She'd watched Harry and Hermione train with those blades or magic every morning, add in their 2 friends and Henrika and Tonks knew she would be quickly overpowered. The best she could do was try and keep them safe, and hope the help got here as quickly as possible. The mass goblin arrival outside Hogwarts was actually greeted with cheers from the students who were being led down to Hogsmeade. The 70 goblins Barchoke had brought with him were in full armor, and ready for battle. They were indeed a stirring sight. The sight that stopped this force in their tracks was the petrified children being levitated toward the village. Barchoke couldn't fail to notice Susan and Hannah amongst the victims. Amelia storming toward him with a dozen auras in tow was pretty unmissable too. She appeared ready, willing and able to tackle a dragon with her bare hands. Stopping only to confirm the victims were indeed petrified, and therefore still alive, she and her auras headed straight for Barchoke's force. The goblin ambassador bowed to the lady warrior. Madam Bones, Amelia, I want you to know we are desperately sorry for what happened here and stand ready to help in any way we can. The nation also has a slight stock of the mandrake potion, enough to see all the children back to normal before this day is out. Your auras may have to wait a day or 2 until we can acquire some more mature mandrake. On behalf of all the parents, and the ministry, you have my thanks. Amelia had learned enough about Barchoke during the summer to know the thanks of the parents would mean a lot more to him than any words the ministry had. Looking at the force he had assembled, she had to ask the obvious. Have you any idea what caused this? Sorry, but no. Harry transmitted our strongest emergency signal. It basically means, grab as many warriors as you can and get here quickly. I can only assume he knows what we'll be facing, but see no sign of him or the others. Both knew where Harry went, the other 3 wouldn't be far behind. Amelia made the only decision she could. I can't take any auras away from escorting the students to Hogsmeade. This squad was all I could muster from the ministry at short notice. The minister is gathering a larger force and will be here in an hour or so. We are merely an advance party and would certainly be prepared to follow your lead in this matter. They resumed marching toward the castle, both knowing they would need more information before making further plans. Minerva McGonagall was bringing up the rear of the train of students winding their way down to Hogsmeade, the clearly agitated witch rushed toward them. Barchoke, I think Harry and his friends are still in the castle. The alarm sounded when they would have been exercising. Padma and Neville made sure Luna and Colin got down to the hall before leaving with Henrika to search for them. All 3 point blank refused to leave the castle without Harry and Hermione. This was not a shock to the goblin, he'd been expecting his son to be in the thick of it. Harry would never have sent that level of distress call otherwise. Professor, Sirius arranged with Auror Tonks that she would accompany the pair to and from their morning training. Wherever they are, they have Henrika and the Auror for company. Is there anyone else missing? Miss Brown reported Parvati Patil was feeling under the weather this morning and rushed into a bathroom as they made their way down from the Great Hall. She's unaccounted for and a message was left on the corridor wall, again in blood. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber for eternity. Since she is the only student unaccounted for, I fear she has been taken. Harry will be going after her, I just hope he can talk his friends out of accompanying him. I fear though that Padma will never accept that, and the other two will be just as stubborn. Both Minerva and Amelia now stared at the goblin as if he was crazy. Barchoke though knew his son. His message was our highest priority call for help, it makes sense now. We'll have to hurry and just hope we're not too late. Where is this bathroom? It's the one that Myrtle haunts, it's on. It's okay, Professor, I know exactly where it is. I can lead us straight there. Bill had been heading to the castle for his usual Saturday morning lesson when he came upon the evacuation. Seeing Percy riding herd on his 4 younger siblings meant the prefect was going to be receiving an extra special Christmas gift from his eldest brother this year. Now that his heart was once more beating normally, Bill had rushed toward the castle, coming upon the present group just as Barchoke was speculating Harry had went after the lost girl. He also thought that was the most likely outcome, and agreed with Barchoke that the other 3 wouldn't let him go alone. With Bill now beside his boss and Amelia, they raced for the castle gates. The bones crunching under their feet meant that any attempt at stealth was doomed to failure. Harry though was pleased with this, explaining to the group that this effect worked both ways. He was a lot more worried about a basilisk sneaking up on them than making a noise as they made their way down the tunnel. Tonks was bringing up the rear and drew comfort from that remark. She was forced to acknowledge to herself that Harry was in command here, from the simple fact that the rest of them followed his orders without question. She would have been pelted with rocks from the explosion in the bathroom if she'd wasted time questioning his order. Tonks was relieved to see though that Harry took to command as if born to it. That relief vanished when Helena let out a shriek, closely followed by her assurance that she was all right. When Tonks finally came upon the shed skin of the beast, the Auror though it was easily scary enough to frighten a ghost, it scared the shit out of her. Harry had his sword out, examining the skin closely. His swipe easily cut through the skin, and then he invited Hermione to do the same. This is an old skin, so the actual basilisk will be bigger than this. Once we take out its eyes, we need to stay away from its head, one scratch from those fangs and it's all over. This is going to be brutal, we'll need to take this down a piece at a time. Attack and withdraw until blood loss slows it down enough and allows us the opportunity to administer a killing stroke. Hermione knew Harry was basically asking her if she had the stomach for this. She took out her blade and sliced at the skin. It certainly took more effort than practicing with the dummies, and she was sure this would give her nightmares for years, but she had every intention of fighting at Harry's side today. This was why Hermione trained so hard. She never wanted to stand there helpless again while Harry was forced to fight for their lives. I can do this, Harry. Padma then added her 2 nuts worth. We can act as decoys, get it chasing after us and then you can attack it. That's too dangerous, Padma. This thing is a killing machine. Quote ellipsis. Which is going to forget all about annoying little old me the moment one of you 2 sticks their sword into its gut. You will then need us again to pull it off you, before the other one stabs the bugger again. Like Hermione said, we can do this, Harry. Harry's nod of agreement to Padma saw Tonks lose her temper. This is bloody crazy. It's one thing to cut up a chunk of dead skin, you're going to be taking on a deadly creature in its own home. We know that, or Tonks. We are also aware a plan rarely survives past the initial contact. It is always better though to have a plan you can adapt, rather than step into the unknown with nothing. Do you have any better suggestions, other than stand here and hope help arrives soon enough to save Parvati? Tonks had no answer for Harry, he didn't think she would have. This is purely a rescue mission, or if we can grab Parvati and get the hell out of here without fighting anything, that's exactly what we'll do. Let whoever likes deal with the bloody thing. As a centurion, I have to plan for all foreseeable eventualities. That's what we're doing here. Tonks looked toward Henrika for support but found none. I am in the process of writing a book on goblin culture and their civilization. Harry is a centurion and in command of this situation. I know he'll do everything in his power to get us all out of here in one piece. I also know he'll do a more capable job of that task than I could. With that matter decided, they pushed on once more. It wasn't long before they were faced with a massive circular door, a door that was covered in carved snakes, and of course securely locked. This is just like the sinks in the bathroom, Harry. It's not only been locked by a parcel mouth, I can't pass through it either. It was strange for Helena to meet something solid, but that's exactly what this door and the surrounding walls felt like. Harry again called on Hogwarts assistance and this time the wild magic swirled around the tunnel. All could see it was taking a lot more effort to open this door. The wump behind them had all eyes and wands focused in that direction, all except Harry's. That's a cave-in. These tunnels haven't been maintained for a millennium and I was worried about that. As the door finally swung open, Harry transfigured some bones into iron bars, using them to jam the door mechanism. I didn't want to blast this door, that just might bring the entire roof down on us. Could you take a quick look, or Tonks, just to see how far away the cave-in is, and how bad? Tonks was back in under 2 minutes. It's just around the corner, we should be able to move some of it, enough for us to squeeze through anyway. That will only hold my father up by a matter of minutes, are we ready to do this? Each person nodded to Harry as they then entered the fabled Chamber of Secrets. As they entered the castle, the rescue group found a ghostly guide waiting on them. Sir, your son discovered the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. They entered in the hope of saving the young Patil witch taken down there. He jammed the entrance open so you could follow him down, and asked me to warn you the creature attacking Hogwarts students is a basilisk. There was no face palming, whining or even questioning that information, there was though a noticeable speeding up as they raced to the entrance. As they passed the afflicted ghosts, the Baron gave the company a bit more hope. The Lady Helena accompanied them into the chamber, she intended to lead the way, offering some protection and at least a warning to the group. I hope you will allow me to do the same for you. Barchoke quickly agreed, before coming to a stop as they shot into the bathroom. Hermione had stuck a pair of mirror sunglasses to the wall nearest the sink, and the Baron quickly explained their plan for dealing with the creature. Amelia was most impressed, agreeing they should do the same. If we meet this creature, we will attempt to blind it and then provide cover while your blades bring it down. That was the type of cooperation Barchoke liked, each playing to their strengths. They would struggle to deal with the creature's deathly gaze, while the auras wouldn't be able to penetrate the basilisk's hide with magic. They were soon sliding down the chute and forming ranks inside the tunnel. They proceeded cautiously until discovering the shed skin. At that point, Barchoke broke into a full run, right up until he found the cave-in. They were busily clearing a path through the rubble when a primal scream chilled everyone who heard it to the very bones. The only shred of comfort available to the worried goblin father was that no human throat could possibly produce that sound. He scrambled through the instant the hole was big enough to allow him passage, and soon discovered Harry had jammed the next door open too. Before Barchoke could enter the chamber properly, another scream reverberated off the stone walls. Unfortunately, this one was human. The chamber was long and dimly lit, with massive stone columns supporting a ceiling that was so high, it became lost in the darkness. These columns had snakes carved all around them. Harry though was far more interested in the cover they should hopefully provide to the rescuers, rather than any decorative function. A shiver of dread ran up his spine at the thought of playing a deadly bout of hide and seek here, weaving their way through these dimly lit columns, with a giant basilisk in lethal pursuit. Their footsteps echoed for all to hear as they carefully progressed through these supports, eventually revealing a statue as high as the dim and dank chamber against the back wall. Craning his neck, Harry was able to make out an ancient and almost monkeyish face. The mystery of why there were no portraits of Salazar Slytherin was now solved as far as Harry was concerned. Who the hell would want to paint this ugly bugger? It was only when he spotted what was lying between the statue's massive stone feet that he knew for certain they were in serious trouble. With a cry of "Pav," Padma sprinted toward her sister, dropping to her knees beside the prone figure. Henrika went with Padma as Harry directed the rest of the group to form a protective perimeter around the trio of witches while Parvati's condition was being assessed. "Pav, don't be dead. Please don't be dead." Padma grabbed her twin's shoulders and turned her over. Her face was pale and cold, yet her eyes were closed. If she wasn't petrified, then she must be. "Pav, please wake up." Muttering desperately, panic saw Padma shaking her twin. Parvati's head lolled hopelessly from side to side. Henrika began casting the few general health diagnostic spells she knew. "Parvati's alive but very weak. I can't find any reason for her being unconscious, so suggest we get her to a healer as quickly as possible." "She won't wake," said a soft voice. Tonks almost jumped out her skin. She was watching this area, yet the dark-haired Slytherin student had appeared out of nowhere. The prefect badge made him at least fifth year, though he looked somewhat older. He also looked as if he wasn't quite solid. His identity was soon confirmed in the most unusual manner possible. Tonks could only equate the sound of one ghost slapping another as being similar to her wet bathing costume hitting a stone floor while she changed after swimming. Helena was absolutely livid. "Tom Riddle, you utter bastard. What have you done to that poor girl?" Harry knew at once who had been controlling Parvati. He switched to Goblin and began shouting instructions, thankful that Henrika received the charm from Hermione last weekend. "Henrika, Padma, only a Horcrux could be responsible for this. He's trying to drain Parvati's soul and restore his own. She must have it on her. We need to find it, and then destroy the bloody thing. Looking at Riddle, and with how weak Parvati is, we don't have much time." Tom was actually laughing at Helena's tirade. The daughter of the great Rowena Ravenclaw, just as gullible as the little tramp lying over there. She wanted to be smart like her sister, also she could get a boyfriend, pathetic creature. It was then Tom noticed they were searching the unconscious girl, and they appeared to know what they were looking for. Get away from her, leave her alone. He had drawn Parvati's wand, and that was the signal for Harry to spring into action. "Stupid boy, your sword can't hurt me, Potter." Harry's blade swished through the air, and proved Tom right. Tom though wasn't the blade's intended target. Parvati would be requiring a new wand as Harry just cut straight through hers. He privately swore to replace it, but they would all need to come through this in one piece first. A shout from Padma alerted him they'd found something. "We have an old black book here that certainly didn't belong to Parv." Both she and Henrika cast spells at it, without doing any damage. "This must be it, not a bloody scratch on the thing. How are we going to destroy it?" Hermione offered a frightening solution. "Basilisk venom is one of the most deadly substances known. It will kill anything." Tom could clearly see what they were attempting to do, but couldn't understand a word they were saying. He threw the now useless bit of wand away. The heir of Slytherin had intended to gloat for a while yet, inform these people of his brilliance before watching them die. They left him no choice though, but to proceed directly to the main event. "Now, Harry, just for that, I'm going to teach you a little lesson. Let's match the powers of Lord Voldemort, heir of Salazar Slytherin, against famous Harry Potter Crow, and the best weapon Hogwarts can give its mischosen champion." Helena attempted to stop him, but the best she could do was slow Tom down a touch. He was soon standing in front of the ugly statue and hissing away. Harry meanwhile was rallying his troops. "Get Parvati up against the wall, she should be safe there. Tom won't want anything happening to her, that would certainly screw up his ritual. Remember the plan and good luck, we're going to need it." Neville lifted Parvati and placed her as close to the wall as he could. Henrika conjured a small wall in front of the unconscious girl for added protection. Changing to English, he shouted to Tonks. Or, if you have any improvements to our ideas, now would be a good time to tell us." Looking at how solid Tom Riddle was becoming, Tonks now realized waiting on reinforcements would have cost the girl her life, and left them facing a restored Lord Voldemort. "We three take the left, the other three have the right. Aim true, hit hard, and good luck." That made sense to Harry as Hermione joined him. A quick kiss and they were ready to face this together. As Padma, Neville and Henrika prepared to fire on the basilisk's right eye, Padma grabbed Neville and kissed him too, whispering, "For luck." Both knew how dangerous the next few minutes would be. They could talk about what the kiss meant later, hopefully. All were wearing their mirror sunglasses, but under no illusion that the situation wasn't now much more dangerous than they first perceived. Should they fail to take out these eyes and end up petrified, a revitalized Lord Voldemort would soon be joining them in the chamber. None of them would be leaving here alive if that happened. Harry at least had the consolation of knowing his father was on his way here, and would certainly make a concerted effort to avenge him. As the stone mouth of the ugly statue creaked open, they could hear the creature making its way out of its lair. Harry steadied his troops. Hold on, people, we're only going to get one shot at this. Wait for my command. Wait, now. Just as its snout began to appear from the mouth, 6 starburst charms exploded right in front of the basilisk's face. That part of their plan worked to perfection, the rest of it though quickly fell apart. The basilisk was thrashing about in agony, throwing its head about far quicker than any dummy they had ever practiced on. With more luck than skill, the group managed to burst the left eye. They could all see the basilisk recovering though and rather hopefully cast more starburst spells. Henrika decided it was time for a different approach. She just hoped her protective mirror sunglasses transfigured along with her. She transformed into her velar avian form and shot toward the basilisk, her scaly wings soon bringing her level with the basilisk's head. Using her claws to latch on to the giant creature, a fireball left her clawed hand directly into the as yet undamaged eye. Unfortunately, having to be this close meant Henrika couldn't avoid looking into the large yellow eye. She lost consciousness, and her grip as the now blinded basilisk violently thrashed its head from side to side in severe pain. Harry barely had time to scream, "Ceasefire," as Henrika in her velar form launched herself at the basilisk, and Tonks was reacting before anyone needed to tell her. She caught Henrika before the still transformed velar could hit the stone floor, and quickly levitated her over beside Parvati. Tom was incensed, and Helena wasn't slow to push his buttons. "Your powers don't seem that great now, do they, Tom? I think our chosen champion and his friends have just acquitted themselves rather well." An enraged Tom Riddle began screaming at the basilisk, and you didn't need to speak Parseltongue to understand the message being sent. Kill them. The 4 friends received a jolt of positive emotion when Tonks shouted her discovery across the chamber. Henrika's petrified, but alive. Harry shouted reply also contained an order. Auror Tonks, stay there and protect those 2. We'll handle the rest. You are our new plan B for Tom. Hoping the Auror was quick enough to decipher his cryptic message, he then switched to Goblin. Padma, you're with me. Neville, your job is to pull the basilisk off Hermione. Harry hated handing his mate's safety over to anyone else but was left with no other choice. They needed to work as a team now more than ever. The 4 made a lot of noise as they entered the pillars, making sure the creature knew where they were and would follow them. Helena was doing her best to antagonize Riddle, distracting him from offering any directions or instructions to the beast. Their first trap was almost their last. This creature was amazingly quick. Only Harry's armor-enhanced speed saw his blade bite into the creature's side before its jaws would have snapped on Neville. He then melted into the maze of columns as Padma started shouting and firing curses at the beast from a different angle. As the enraged creature followed its natural instincts and lunged in the direction where it perceived this latest threat to be, Hermione emerged from behind another pillar to inflict a wound on the creature's other side. Neville then took over, drawing the deadly creature's attention away from Hermione and positioning the beast where Harry was ready to strike again. Padma would then play her part as the cycle repeated itself. They were leading the basilisk by the nose, like matadors working a bull and gradually reducing a magnificent animal to nothing more than meat for butchering. Their hit-and-run tactics were working perfectly. The basilisk was beginning to slow down from severe loss of blood. This factor actually proved to be their undoing though as Hermione opened another deep wound in the creature before slipping on the now bloody stone floor. The great fanged head turned around to face her and neither Padma nor Neville could convince it to change direction once the ancient creature had locked onto its now vulnerable prey. Hermione was rather inelegantly parked on her bum, trying to push herself backwards and away from the approaching basilisk with her flailing legs and arms finding little purchase on the now slippery floor. Harry was forced to act. He raced forward and embedded the sword of Gryffindor into the beast right up to the blade's hilt. He then used this fabled sword to cast his most powerful blasting curse. The basilisk may have skin that was incredibly resistant to magic, but the sword was actually inside its body. A horrible scream was emitted from the beast as internal organs were reduced to mush, but Harry didn't hear it. When he used this attack on the dummies, by bracing himself it was the dummies that ended up flying across the room. Here, the sheer mass of the basilisk meant it was always going to be Harry who received the backlash from his spell. This backlash blew a large hole in the creature and saw him thrown right along the chamber. He smacked into the floor with an almighty clatter, his body being twisted into unnatural shapes as it skimmed and skidded along. Only crashing heavily into the wall finally halted his momentum. The blast that killed the basilisk saw its head shoot forward in its death throes, unfortunately landing on the still prone Hermione's legs, crushing both and pinning her under the creature. Tom was jubilant. The basilisk may be dead but he had still won, and that was all that mattered. He walked over as Harry fought a losing battle to remain conscious. "I'm going to stand here and watch you die, Harry Potter. Take your time, I'm in no hurry. Your last thought will be that I, as we all knew I would, have won. You and all your friends will soon be dead. Hey Tom, you don't half talk a load of shit." Tom spun around to see the Longbottom boy had used that little witch's sword to hack a fang out of the basilisk's jaw, and was now removing a certain black book from his pocket. "You should know that Harry doesn't stand alone against you, his friends always have his back covered. This one's for both of our parents, stay dead you murdering bastard." Tom managed to shout, "Stop," but Neville paid him no mind, slamming the point of the basilisk fang into the diary. There was a long, dreadful, piercing scream. Ink spurted out of the diary in torrents, running all over Neville's hands, and forming a large puddle on the floor. Tom was writhing and twisting, screaming and flailing and then, silence. Neville dropped the fang and raced over to Harry. He was kneeling beside his friend as he muttered the question Neville knew was coming. "Hermione." The basilisk landed on her legs, probably breaking both of them. "Padma's with her now and Hermione's far more worried about you." Harry managed an, "I'm fine," before passing out. Helena couldn't miss the worry on Neville's face and offered up some reassurance. "That magnificent armor our champion possesses has just saved his life. He'll certainly need to visit the infirmary, but both he and his mate will be ready to dance again by this time next week." Knowing both girls would be desperate to hear from him, Neville shouted the news over since the body of the basilisk was hiding them from his line of sight. Harry's battered and bruised, possibly a few broken bones, but his armor protected him from more serious injury. "He's just passed out." Hermione's head was now being gently cradled on Padma's lap as her friend also held onto her hand. While Padma was doing her best to offer some comfort, Hermione understood that not knowing her sister's fate must be eating away at the witch. Go and check on Parvati, I'll still be here when you get back. Hey Granger, I do the jokes, you slice up the massive deadly beasts, that's the deal, remember. Tonk's voice then rang around the chamber. Parvati's beginning to wake up, I think she's going to be okay. This proved to be the trigger for both girls to release their tears. Hermione might be in a lot of pain, but the tears flowing down her cheeks were those of relief. They may not all be walking out of here, but they were all alive. None of them really believed that outcome was likely, or even if it was remotely possible. She found her other hand now being held by Barchoke, the goblin making no attempt to hide his own tears. Well met, father, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you again. Please check on our Harry, I can't see him from here and it's driving me crazy. With extreme care, the goblin very gently traded places with Padma, releasing her to race over and check on her twin. I'm staying right here, my oh so brave daughter, there are 2 healers currently checking on him. Amelia is also here with her auras, so everyone will be okay. The healers will be with you soon, we just need to work out the best way to get this thing off of you first. Harry was then carried over on a stretcher by 4 centurions and placed beside his still trapped mate. This was a heartfelt tribute of respect by their comrades, saluting their courage for tackling and then defeating a beast such as this. Both the centurion and his mate were covered in the residue of what must have been a titanic battle, and the bloody swords were respectfully positioned between them. The looks of appreciation and even awe heading in the direction of the father and his 2 children from those in the chamber was something that should have been savored. Barchoke though never took his gaze from his son and daughter as solutions were being feverishly discussed on how to move the biggest bloody basilisk in recorded history off Hermione. Harry was still unconscious, but just seeing he was alive settled Hermione. None of the people urgently milling around them mattered now. Harry was back where he belonged, beside her. Their father had brought enough goblins along to physically lift this bloody thing off her if they had to. Now all she and Harry needed to worry about was telling their mum and dad. Thanks for reading. Heroes of Hogwarts. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I would like to think that Harry Potter belongs to all of us who spend our time keeping the boy who lived alive. Providing we're not making any money from Jo Rowling's creation, her lawyers would appear to be quite happy indulging us in this fantasy. I wouldn't want to upset those lawyers, especially since I can't afford to hire one of my own. Chapter 46. A pleasant Saturday morning spent shopping was instantly forgotten about as the Grangers entered their home, only to find Sirius impatiently waiting on them. Where the hell have you been? Seeing how distressed Sirius was immediately alerted both parents something had to be seriously wrong. Dan didn't mess about with any pleasantries either. Has there been another attack? Yes, between the attack and the aftermath, Hermione, Harry and Henrika are all in the Hogwarts infirmary. None of them are critical and the problem has been dealt with. That's all the information I was given, and I've been going nuts waiting on you 2 arriving home. We need to head to Hogwarts right away. Emma was too shocked at that news to say anything, she actually felt her head beginning to spin. Dan soon had an arm around his wife, offering his support as their shopping now lay forgotten around them. We both obviously want to go, but how are we supposed to do that? I thought we couldn't even see Hogwarts. Sirius was already slipping a bracelet onto Emma's wrist before handing one to Dan. These will neutralize the muggle-repelling wards and allow you inside the castle. I also have a portkey here that will take us to the edge of the wards. Bill Weasley passed me these through the flue, along with telling me to get you 2 to Hogwarts as quickly as possible. Apparently it was pandemonium there when he called. Bill didn't have time to tell me any more. Are you ready? Since they hadn't even taken their coats off, both Grangers quickly agreed. It seemed only a moment later that they were picking themselves up off the grass on a Scottish hillside, and staring at a magnificent castle that could only be Hogwarts. A small silvery dog-shaped wisp left Sirius' wand and shot toward the castle. That was a message spell. Barchoke wanted to know the moment we arrived. Sirius noticed the place was crawling with auras, and even saw a squad of fully armored goblins in the courtyard as they entered the castle gates. Whatever the trouble was appears to really be over. If the amount of people now guarding Hogwarts is any indication, whatever happened must have been really big. Would you like to bet that our lot were right in the bloody middle of whatever happened? Dan got no takers for that. Both Sirius and Emma thought he was probably right. They entered the main doors to find Barchoke heading toward them. How are they? Can we see them? Emma, they're all going to be fine and will probably be back training by next weekend. We need to have a quick private chat before you go in to see them. You need to know what you'll be walking into. Dan wanted to see Hermione, and he wanted to see her now. Can't we just see them first, and talk later? There are things you really need to know first. You are all just going to have to trust me for now. We can and will go through what happened in much greater detail later, but there are changes you need to be aware of before entering the infirmary. Directing them to the nearest classroom, Barchoke had the worried trio sit before starting the story. There was an attack this morning. I think the final count was 3 auras and 9 students petrified. Susan and Hannah were amongst them. Our group had been researching what might be doing the attacking. Last night they came up with a probable answer that has since been proven correct, a basilisk. This saw Sirius drop his head into his hands. Please don't tell me they were involved with a basilisk. That's not the half of it, Sirius. A Horcrux belonging to Tom Riddle had possessed a student to control the beast. They had to deal with that too. Barchoke then had to offer an explanation to the Grangers just what a basilisk was. Both Dan and Emma now understood the goblin, insisting they sat down. The message left on the wall this time read, "Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever." That skeleton would have belonged to Parvati Patil. Emma was now openly weeping for the poor girl as Barchoke continued the story. They had discovered the entrance to the chamber as the castle was being evacuated. Harry had sent a signal to me that they were in trouble and knew I'd be along as quickly as I could. They didn't know if that would be quick enough to save Parvati. Turns out we probably wouldn't have gotten here in time. Dan was now trying to console his sobbing wife. They obviously knew Padma better but were still more than acquainted with her twin. He was also beginning to appreciate the bind their kids had been in. They had a plan, a bloody good one, an Auror, the Ravenclaw ghost and Henrika too for company. They obviously decided to try and rescue Parvati. The goblin then turned his attention specifically to the marauder. You have to see this basilisk to believe the bloody size of the thing. Sirius, their plan managed to safely take out one of its deadly eyes. Henrika transformed into her avian velar form and attacked the other eye, putting her life on the line to buy them a chance. She's currently petrified, but you should have her back in the next few hours. Sirius, Henrika Hobson is a lady you wouldn't want to get away from you. The marauder could only nod in agreement, words currently failed him. It was to the Grangers that Barchoke addressed the rest of the story. With Auror Tonks having to protect an unconscious Parvati and a petrified Henrika, the four then led the blinded basilisk on a not-so-merry dance. Harry and Hermione were slowly bringing it down with repeated wounds from their swords when their luck ran out. Hermione was retreating when she slipped on a patch of its blood they'd spilled earlier. Seeing her in trouble forced Harry to finish the creature off. He jammed his sword into the beast and cast a blasting curse. Sirius understood immediately what the consequences of that would be. I take it he got hit with the spell backlash. Blew him straight across the chamber like one of those dueling dummies he's so fond of wrecking. It also saw the beast's head land on Hermione. Thankfully its fangs came nowhere near our girl, but it still managed to crush both her legs. Dan was on his feet before even realizing he'd moved. What? You told us she was okay. Having both legs crushed certainly isn't classified as okay in my book. There was steel in Barchoke's voice now. You're forgetting, Dan, we're working from different books here. The shattered bones have already been vanished from her legs and a potion is currently repairing the soft tissue damage. Tonight, she'll drink another potion that will regrow all the bones in her legs. Hermione will be up and walking within 48 hours. This took the wind out of Dan's sails and he sat back down. Barchoke never let up though. I raced into that chamber to find Neville kneeling over our unmoving son, while Padma cradled our trapped daughter's head in her lap. Both our children were literally covered in blood and I feared the very worst. I had 70 fully armed goblins behind me. Amelia brought along a dozen auras. If we'd had to fight that thing, neither of us would have expected to do so without taking casualties. That they not only defeated the beast, with Neville destroying the Horcrux for good measure, and they all made it out of there alive is a major cause for celebration. Now came the news that the goblin was unsure how the Grangers would react to. They are being hailed as heroes, and rightly so. The Hogwarts infirmary is under goblin control and nothing will get anywhere near our family while they are in there. My nation places great value on bravery and honor, and they have taken our courageous daughter to their hearts. So much so that she currently has a Centurion Guard of Honor in the infirmary, guards who will react instantly to any form of threat. Something about the way Barchoke said that last sentence bothered Dan. While I am delighted Hermione is protected, what exactly did you mean by that last remark? The Goblin Ambassador left no room for ambiguity. Dan needed to understand exactly what was being said here. Should anyone begin shouting at Hermione, they will treat that as at least insulting, and at worst threatening. She is the mate of a Centurion, a friend of our nation and a heroine in her own right. Harry's fellow Centurions will protect her until he is once more able to do so himself. As Barchoke expected, Dan appeared shocked by that. Better shocked though than having a goblin blade at his throat. Emma nodded to Barchoke that she understood, and would have a tight rein on Dan. There was also something she wanted to ask. How is Harry? It may actually be easier to list the bones he hasn't broken. He's still unconscious but should awaken shortly. He too should be healed within 48 hours. Barchoke then offered Dan an olive branch. The Minister of Magic is already in the castle, with the Director making his way here later. There will be a party going down to the chamber to see exactly what happened. I'm inviting you and Sirius to be part of that party. Perhaps seeing it for yourself will give you a better appreciation of exactly what our children have gone through. Dan then turned sheepishly to his wife. Am I really that bad? Reaching for her husband's hand, Emma tried her best to allay Dan's fears of being a poor father. Bad is totally the wrong word to use here, Dan. Our daughter is now part of a different world. Adjust how you express your genuine concern for her safety and you'll be fine. With Parvati already down there and in grave danger, nothing short of physical restraints would have stopped Padma trying to save her sister. We all know Harry wouldn't have wanted to take any of them into the chamber with him, just as we know Hermione would have pushed to be included. No one could disagree with Emma's assessment, though the mother wasn't finished displaying her insight quite yet. Hermione will be lying up there, worried about Harry and our reaction to this. I say we wait until everyone has had a chance to cool down, and they've had a chance to heal, before we sit down as a family and discuss exactly what happened. They're all still with us and I'll settle for that at the moment, I just want to see them now. This outcome delighted Barchoke. While it could be considered cruel to keep a father apart from his daughter, an enraged Dan couldn't be allowed anywhere near Hermione under the current situation. He rose to lead them to the infirmary. Neville and Padma are being treated for battle fatigue while our mind healers are working with Parvati, mainly to ensure that Horcrux left no permanent damage. Ramrao, Smeeta and Augusta are already here. Their reactions to this are pretty similar to our own. We may want to include them in our family discussion. Sirius, I already count Henrika as family, she more than earned that right today. A final decision has yet to be reached but the ministry will have to prove Hogwarts is safe before students can return. That won't happen today. Once these two are fit to travel they will be heading home. All knew they would discuss exactly where home was later. Dan noticed the stares from everyone they passed, be they Auror or Goblin. He asked Barchoke about it. They all know who you are, the pictures in the Prophet of the Ministry's ball made sure of that. They also now know what 4 second-year students accomplished, that is why they stare. The increased security told them they were approaching the infirmary, and the stares were now accompanied by respectful nods or salutes. Emma felt as if she was taking a step back into the health service of the 50s. The infirmary so reminded her of an NHS hospital ward from that period, especially the proliferation of portable screens that cordoned areas off. It was to one of these areas, guarded by a pair of Centurions, Barchoke led them. Laying eyes on her daughter saw everything else pushed to the back of her mind as she dived to Hermione's bed. Dan was left to stand and watch as both his girls were in floods of tears while holding each other tightly. He couldn't go around to the other side of his daughter's bed for the simple reason that Harry's was jammed tightly up against it. Hermione had been holding his hand as they entered the infirmary. Any residual anger Dan had toward Harry for placing his daughter in danger vanished with his first glance at the unconscious boy. Harry appeared as if he'd been run over by a bus in his efforts to save Hermione. If magical medicine could get Harry back on his feet in 48 hours, then Dan would be really impressed. Barchoke nudged Sirius. Henrika is in the next section to this. Hermione's going to be busy for a while and Harry's still out. She needs to see a friendly face when she becomes unpetrified. The last thing she saw wouldn't have been exactly pleasant. Nodding, Sirius left. Neville couldn't stand the silence any longer. Gran, if you want to shout at me then go ahead. I knew I would be in trouble but went anyway. They needed me down there. Neville, part of me wants to rant, rave and ground you until you're of age. Another part of me wants to stand proud and shout your achievements to the entire world. I'll make that stupid brother of mine eat those squib comments. Algae will not be the only one swallowing their words now. The biggest part of me though is simply terrified with the thought I could have lost you. We're slowly getting your mum and dad back. To lose you now would kill me. Watching the tears run down his Gran's cheeks as she sat beside his bed saw Neville rise and take his grandmother in his arms. Augusta felt as if she was cast adrift in the sea of uncertainty. The fixed points she'd steered their lives by were shifting to different orbits. Every safe harbor of familiarity and truth had been dragged below the waves by cataclysmic events in the lives of the Longbottoms. Ever since her grandson had boarded the Hogwarts Express, their lives had been undergoing dramatic changes. Amelia had spoken to her before she'd entered the infirmary, having received a report from her Auror who'd been down there fighting alongside her grandson. Part of that information was so unbelievable to Augusta, it was eating away at the old witch, so she just had to ask if it was true. Neville, did you really face down you know who, and then destroy him? His name is Tom Riddle, Gran, and that's who was responsible for all this. He was standing over Harry and gloating, forgetting all about the rest of us. He'll remember the Longbottom name from now on. The stoic Augusta Longbottom broke at that. She was sobbing in a mixture of relief and pride as she clung to her godson. Frank and Alice though would need to be a lot further on in their recovery before this incident would ever be mentioned in their presence. Ramrao was sitting beside his daughter's bed, chatting with Padma about nonsensical and inconsequential things. This was a clear case of talking about anything, rather than mention the elephant in the room, or, in this situation, on the other side of the privacy screens. The goblin mind healers were checking Parvati over to ensure there was no lasting damage from her possession by the Horcrux. Smita was in there with her, with both father and twin sister anxiously awaiting Parvati's results. Smita entered with tears in her eyes. Neither drew any meaning from that. Smita had been in tears since arriving in the infirmary. The healers say she'll be fine. All we need to do now is get her to open up about the whole experience. That was Padma's cue. She was out her bed and out of there before either parent could say another word. Ramrao drew his wife into his arms. Let her go. If anyone can handle Parvati in this situation, it's Padma. We'll just have to listen in. She found her sister curled up in the fetal position and facing away from her. Parv, stop being a bed hog and bunch over. This floor is bloody freezing, and you know where I'll put my feet to heat 'em up. She budged over but still kept her back turned, even when Padma tried to provoke a reaction by running her cold feet down the back of Parvati's legs. She settled for snuggling into her twin, waiting on Parvati speaking first. After all, Padma was supposed to be the quiet one. It took a few minutes but there was finally a response. How can you stand to be close to me, after what I've done? You didn't do anything, it was the bastard Tom Riddle. Anyway, before I hit the shower earlier, no one would have been in the same room as me. I can give you some beauty tips for a change. Basilisk blood does absolutely nothing for your hair or complexion. Don't worry about Riddle though. Neville settled that score. He slammed a basilisk fang right through that stupid book. Where did you get it anyway? I know it was from Harry. Harry. Remember on the express, he was handing out that pile of Dumbledore books. I was sticking them in my pockets and left with an armful too. I kept one in my pocket for myself, and found that book in there as well. It was blank so I decided to use it as a diary, then it started answering me back. Parvati could feel her sister stiffen at that news. I know, bloody stupid or what? How to prove I wasn't Ravenclaw material? I thought it was some kind of goblin teaching aid. I asked a question, it provided the right answer. I thought this might be one of the reasons why Harry was so smart, and all the good wizards seemed to be drooling over the smart witches. I didn't realize I was soon answering more questions than I asked. It was just like gossiping to a friend who would keep your secrets. It seemed very interested in Harry though, now I know why. After a few moments of silence, Padma prompted her sister to continue. What happened next, Parv? I wanted to be smart like you. The book said it could help and began teaching me meditation. I started losing hours at a time though, hours I had no memory of, and falling behind on my homework too, so I stopped using it. Hermione's party being cancelled had me so angry I needed to meditate again. I was almost sick with nerves but had actually approached a boy and asked him for a date to that party. A comforting squeeze from her twin gave Parvati the courage to continue her tale. Fortunately, Blaise was very good about it and asked me to the Merlin Ball as his date. We both know how that night ended. When you left at Halloween I meditated for most of the day, and later discovered what happened to Luna. I felt ill and had my suspicions, but by that time though it was as if I was under some sort of incredibly strong compulsion charm, I just couldn't put the book down. I know exactly how that feels, Parv, I've come across one of them before. This saw Parvati turn around and stare right into her twin's eyes. You wouldn't lie to me, Padma, not about this, please. Last year, the four of us, with Professor Weasley and Henrika, went searching for one we knew was inside Hogwarts. It was Ravenclaw's diadem. The instant I saw it, I wanted to rush forward and put it on. Neville had to drag me away while Professor Weasley put it in a container and took the thing to Gringotts. They have a way to kill the Horcrux that doesn't involve fighting a bloody basilisk. I can't believe you came down there after me. You're my sister, of course I was coming after you. Harry simply said you were family. I think we both know you never, ever want to mess with any of his family. How am I going to face them after what happened? Again, Parv, I know exactly how you feel. We were waiting on that basilisk making an appearance, and I didn't know if I would ever get another chance, so I just grabbed Neville and kissed his socks off. You didn't. Well, I never actually checked to see if his socks were still on his feet, but I certainly kissed him. A moment's silence followed before the inevitable question was asked. What was it like? At that, Smita pulled Ramrao away. She was overjoyed to hear her girls chatting about normal things like boys. Anything was better than Dark Lord possessions and basilisks. Here was the first hopeful sign that their family could come through this ordeal and be whole again. Sirius was sitting by a petrified Henrika's bed and trying to forge a safe path for himself through the emotional turmoil he was currently experiencing, a task that was proving to be far easier said than done. The three most important people in the world to Sirius Black had all courted death in this morning's battle, and escaped her final fatal embrace by the skin of their teeth. That was enough to scramble anyone's emotions and toss them in a pan to cook. The marauder then attempted to look at each of the three cases individually and see if that helped focus his thoughts on the matter. He found the first part was relatively easy. He had loved Harry James Potter from the instant the baby was placed in his arms. Sirius had literally felt something inside him shift. At that moment, his outlook on the world had just been radically altered. Up until then, babies were something witches giggled about to each other, and being parentally involved in the manufacturing of one was something to be avoided at all costs. Practicing the fabrication method with a willing partner though was fine. Holding his godson in his arms radically changed those views. With the right witch, this particular result was now something to actually be desired, not feared. That his godson had already found the right witch for himself was no longer in any doubt, and the love Sirius had for Harry had easily expanded to include his beautiful and brilliant mate, Hermione Granger. Watching that young couple grow really was one of the few highlights of his life. Being 2 for 2, Sirius now turned his attention to the Veela lying on the bed. With Henrika petrified in her avian form, here was all the visual proof you could ever want of her Veela heritage. It was only after discovering that his hand had unknowingly slipped into her claw that Sirius smiled at this subconscious confirmation of what he was only now beginning to realize. Irrespective of her form, Sirius Black was head over heels in love with Henrika Hobson. It was hard to put any kind of measurement on how much you would miss someone, but, by a simple comparison, Sirius knew he would have mourned the passing of this witch at least as much as the other two people he could so easily admit to loving. Shit, even the bloody goblin could see what was right in front of Sirius' eyes. At that, Henrika literally began to change right in front of Sirius' eyes. As the potion in her body slowly battled the petrification, it also allowed that same body to revert back to its original form. As arms and legs straightened out from their unnaturally frozen positions, they also transformed until Sirius was once more holding his girlfriend's beautifully manicured hand. When Henrika had entirely regained her own form, she once more began to breathe and Sirius reached out to remove her sunglasses. Careful with those, love, I really want to keep them. They seem to have saved my life. At that, Sirius leaned forward and gently kissed her lips. Quote ellipsis. And you saved everyone else's. Henrika released a small sob of relief at hearing that news. Oh, thank goodness for that. You looked so serious, I was afraid to ask. It was a measure of how serious Sirius was treating the situation that he never even reacted to his favorite pun. I was so serious because I was too afraid to ask. Nearly losing you showed me a far greater fear. I can't lose you again. Henrika, will you marry me? For a moment, Sirius thought the petrification curse had returned. Henrika didn't move a muscle. Then her face broke into the most beautiful smile the marauder had ever seen. Only if you're ready, Sirius. I will wait, you know. I think I've always been ready, I just needed to find the right person to be ready with. Quote ellipsis. And all I had to do was fight a basilisk to make me the right person. Sirius loved how Henrika could be playful, even at a time like this. It was just one of the many things he was finding to love about this witch. I was suddenly given a glimpse of what my life would be without you in it. It was not a pretty picture. I'm sorry, Sirius, I did try to talk them out of going down there. I would have needed to stun Padma to stop her, that would never work with those two boys there, protective doesn't quite cover it. That godson of yours also has a way of making the impossible seem probable, I think it's because he keeps making the impossible bloody happen. So you went with them, and kept them all safe, I am so proud of you. This was punctuated with another kiss before Sirius continued. Last year, Christmas was rubbish as usual but Boxing Day was very good to me. I think celebrating the anniversary of when my new life began with an engagement party would really be fitting. I know you have a lot of commitments next summer, but could you fit a wedding in there somewhere? Sirius, I haven't said yes yet. Well, hurry up, woman, and stop leaving me hanging here. What's your hurry? We have the rest of our lives together. As Henrika pulled him down for a kiss, Sirius just took that as a Veela's way of saying yes. Harry slowly regained consciousness, his eyes were still closed but his ears picked up Hermione and her mother chatting. He also felt Hermione's hand in his, he gave it a slight squeeze. Harry. Not so loud, Hermione, my head is thumping. Feeling the awkward way she moved toward him for a kiss saw Harry's eyes spring open, and look directly into a tearful pair of brown ones. I'm fine, Harry, at least I will be. My legs were crushed and I'll need to regrow the bones tonight. He attempted to lift his hand and touch her face, only to find it wouldn't move. Emma had moved around to the other side of Harry and leant down to kiss him on the forehead. You have some bone growing to do yourself, Harry, just take it easy for now. Is everyone else okay, Henrika, Parvati? Hermione had rested her head gently on Harry's chest while Emma stroked her fingers through his hair. You two are the worst injured, everyone else will be going home tonight. We're hoping both of you will make it out of here tomorrow. Harry recognized the Hogwarts infirmary but had no recollection of coming here. Now that he knew everyone was okay, it was time to get some more answers. How did we get here and how much trouble are we in? I hope Dan's not too upset, a toddler could get the better of me at the moment. Hermione gave Harry's hand that still had bones in it a comforting squeeze before answering. The basilisk's skin was so resistant to magic, they couldn't levitate it off me. It took about 30 goblins with transfigured iron levers to move it enough for our father to slip me out from under it. I passed out at that point and woke up here. Her mother then took over. Nobody will be saying anything until you are both recovered and the whole family are there. How much trouble you're in will depend on what happened today. Everyone bar Smita and me are currently down in the chamber, along with a load of press too. The getting a look at this creature and then the aura's memory is going to be played on a goblin viewer. This earned a loud and long groan from Harry, and an answer from his mate. Quote ellipsis. I know, we're totally screwed. Dan almost passed out just seeing the shed skin, even this though didn't prepare him for seeing the real thing. He was able to draw some comfort after noticing neither Sirius or Ramrau seemed to be dealing with this any better than he was. Barchok had to lead Augusta away and transfigure a chair for the game old witch. Knowing their kids were actually all safe in the infirmary was the only thing currently holding Dan together. He certainly didn't envy Barchok bursting in here with no idea what he would find. There had been so much blood spilled that the metallic taste was actually tainting the dank air. He now agreed 100% with the wise goblin's assessment. That their kids had survived this was certainly a cause for celebration. Dan fully intended to have a few glasses of single malt later. He noticed Minerva McGonagall transfigure a chair for herself, right next to Augusta's as Amelia set up a table with a viewer on it. She was joined by the Minister of Magic, Ragnick, Barchok and both Weasleys. It was show time. Amelia called the assembled crowd forward. Just about every Auror or Goblin who wasn't required to guard Hogwarts at the moment had also invited themselves along to the chamber. Since the minister had decided nothing would be hidden from the public regarding this situation, it was a case of the more the merrier. You have now all seen the Basilisk for yourselves, and the all too obvious signs of the epic struggle that played out in this chamber. What we are going to do now is watch Auror Tonk's memory of the entire event replayed on a Goblin memory viewer. It will only show things from the perspective of the person whose memory is being displayed but has the distinct advantage of being able to be viewed by a large group. Please save any questions until the end. We will try and answer them if we can. The memory started while Harry and Hermione were training, just before the alarm went off. They could all see the Auror trying to do her job and protect the two students. Helena's arrival changed that. Watching as the school was evacuated and then almost stumbling upon the scene of the attack had every eye riveted to the viewer. Amelia was sorry to see Susan and Hannah lying there, drawing comfort from the knowledge Barchok had already sent what supplies they had of the Mandrake potion to St. Mungo's. She could also take pride that her Aurors were lying at the front, and had gone down trying to protect the students. Ramrau was in tears as Padma tried to rip the sink off the wall with her bare hands. There were gasps of awe at the magical power pouring off Harry's sword. When Hermione put forward her idea for blinding the Basilisk, Dan felt Sirius grip his shoulder before whispering. Those glasses saved Henrika's life. Your daughter is in for one hell of a Christmas present. They all looked on as they forged a plan of action to deal with the Basilisk, impressing the hell out of everyone who had seen the result of that plan currently lying dead on the chamber floor. Both Dan and Sirius had to grab Ramrau as they watched Padma shake her sister and plead for her not to be dead. The poor man's legs practically gave out on him, and then Tom Riddle made an appearance. The four switching to Goblin immediately drew a murmur from the crowd. That would certainly be a question that would be getting asked later. With the appearance of the Basilisk, and Henrika's heroics, it was now Sirius who needed a supportive arm to steady himself. After shouting instructions to Tonks, the four made a lot of noise and even fired a few curses at the now blind creature to get the giant snake to follow them. From Tonks' position, she only caught about half the battle amongst the pillars. It was more than enough to give everyone watching a flavor of what was actually happening. As Padma and Neville led the creature through the columns, Harry or Hermione would appear and wound the beast. Tonks did have a perfect view of the final moments of the battle. They all saw Hermione slice into the Basilisk's side, only for her retreat to be spoiled by the pool of blood her escape path led her into. Padma reacted at once, rushing to help Neville turn the beast away from their friend. The Basilisk though wasn't for turning, and then the golden blur that was Harry slammed into it. He was once more a blur as a blast then saw him shooting right across the chamber. Tonks' view shifted between Riddle crowing over Harry and what was happening at the Basilisk. Padma was attempting to comfort Hermione while Neville lifted her sword and ran around to the other side of the Basilisk's head. He re-emerged with a bloody Basilisk fang in his hand and then shouted to Riddle. When Neville claimed this was for their parents and slammed the fang into the diary, Augusta was on her feet, her victory cry matching Tom Riddle's scream for volume and intensity. Neville had just reached Harry when Barchok came racing into the chamber. Hearing his son was unconscious, he issued orders to those goblins who were right behind him before making his way over to Hermione. The memory ended with a bloody Padma staggering as quickly as her tired legs would allow toward the Auror. The moment of silence that followed was soon broken by tumultuous cheering, applause and weapons being banged off shields. Amelia finally got them quietened down enough where she could be heard. This is the first time anyone has watched a memory of this event, so I hope you will understand if we don't have answers to all your questions. We are in no way being evasive, it simply means we don't have all the answers ourselves, yet. We also have the family of those young people here in the chamber with us. Please keep those questions respectful. The first question was predictable and easily dealt with by Amelia. Yes, that was Tom Riddle, who likes to call himself Lord Voldemort. As to the importance of the book, I would defer to Ambassador Barchok's expertise on the matter. The goblin's authoritative voice spread his knowledge around the chamber. The book was a Horcrux, one of the darkest and foulest pieces of magic known, and something we have been searching for the past decade to destroy. Part of Voldemort's soul was embedded into its very pages, controlling the young witch who had the misfortune to write in it. Voldemort has controlled those a lot more knowledgeable and powerful than Miss Patil, though I am delighted to say our healers have confirmed no trace of the soul fragment remains. Mr. Longbottom very effectively killed that portion of the Dark Lord. Can you tell us where they learned to fight like that, and what language they were speaking during the battle? Again Amelia deferred to Barchok. My son arrived in Hogwarts as a warrior, and has since attained the rank of Centurion. After witnessing the Aura's memory, I think everyone here would agree my son earned that rank. This was greeted by cheers and sword banging from the goblins present. The four work hard at their extra defense tuition every Saturday and Sunday. They receive this tuition from Assistant Ambassador Weasley here, and have done so since the beginning of their first year. They now speak Goblin so their opponents can't understand their communications. The advantage of this was ably demonstrated in this morning's battle. As young Neville Longbottom so succinctly put it, his friends have been determined to watch my son's back since the four met last September. As a father, I can't tell you how humble and yet proud that makes me. The ministry contingent neatly sidestepped questions on awards and Basilisk carcass ownership, saying those were discussions that would have to involve more people than those currently present in the chamber. The one question that caused a stir was aimed at Tonks. Could the Auror please tell us what this mysterious Plan B was? Tonks had been standing with her fellow Auras watching her memory replayed. Amelia nodded toward Tonks to answer the question. She tried to look anywhere but in Mr. Pattle's direction as she answered. I was closely monitoring Miss Pattle's condition. Should she pass away, that would mean Tom had regained his body, and also be my signal to attack him with everything I had. Voldemort had no wand, so this might be our only chance to kill him before he got his hands on one. This led to a follow-up question. Would you really have killed him? Tonks was unrepentant and hardened her stance. For Voldemort to have regained his body, he would have had to murder Parvati Patil. Let's not forget the 4 students who were also fighting for their lives. Voldemort with a new body would have swung the balance of the battle against them. To answer your question, I would have blown his head clean off his shoulders, and gladly lived with the consequences. It was actually Ragnik who broke the awkward silence that followed the Aura's declaration of intent. Auror Tonks, should you ever require alternative employment, Gringotts would be honored to offer someone with your skills, courage and conviction a position. Her time spent in Barchoke's company allowed Amelia to read the mischievous twinkle in the director's eyes. It also allowed her to feel secure that her answer would be accepted in the spirit it was offered. Ambassador Barchoke, could you kindly ask your director to refrain from poaching one of my finest young Auras? Miss Tonks will not require alternative employment as long as I am director of the DMLE. Ragnik acknowledged the gentle rebuke. Accepting it in the friendly manner it was offered, he'd achieved his aim. The young Auror who had the courage to do what was necessary now publicly had the protection of her director. Let the press make of that what they will. When the question was asked about how the diary came to be in a young student's hands, the minister himself stepped in at that point. I have to say that matter is currently under investigation, a joint investigation involving both the ministry and our goblin friends from Gringotts. We suspect that these set of circumstances didn't happen by accident, and you can rest assured we will get to the bottom of this. The prophet led with the headline, Heroes of Hogwarts, and had 6 small pictures of those heroes arranged above one of the now dead Basilisk that commanded the entire width of the front page. The complete story was then laid out in great detail for the readers. There was no need to embellish what was a truly epic struggle against both Voldemort and a Basilisk. This would be the main talking point at every breakfast table in magical Britain. At the Malfoys, they simply bypassed talking and progressed straight to screaming at each other. You sent a Horcrux into Hogwarts while our son was there. Are you completely mad? I didn't know it was a Horcrux until you showed me that blasted book. You think I want our master returning when we have nothing to offer him? Dobby. The little elf appeared with his head bowed. I sent you to Hogwarts to retrieve this book and you failed me. Dobby carried out master's orders exactly. Dobby searched Harry Potter's Patil friend's room, all her belongings and even under her pillow while she slept. Dobby did not talk to anyone, Dobby did not go anywhere else, and Dobby was not seen. Narcissa hit the roof at her husband's incompetence. You couldn't even give the book to the right witch, yet you expect them not to catch you. They're identical twins who had their backs to me on a packed train platform. You should have had Dobby check both of them, or did it never occur to you that the great Lucius Malfoy could make a mistake? This is your scheme, your catastrophe, and neither my son nor I will be embroiled in your mess. You are on your own for this one, Lucius, and don't expect me to play the dutiful wife. I will not be visiting Azkaban for you or my sister. Draco was watching this byplay, but his mind was elsewhere. His father may have given the diary to the wrong Patil witch, but Draco knew he had made a much bigger mistake than that. Granger had almost been killed by that Basilisk, and Crow would be out for revenge. His parents' generation may have had a saying that you never messed with a goblin. Draco's generation were currently refining that phrase. You never mess with a goblin, especially Harry Crow. Lucius Malfoy had actually committed an even worse crime than that. He'd messed with Crow's girlfriend. Azkaban might be scary, but Draco was more concerned his father would face Crow's blades before he could be sent to the island prison. He could only see one outcome from that battle: his father would be dead. The beetle that was currently clinging to the curtain shared none of Draco's fears. Rita was far too busy thinking of ways to spend all the money this morning's revelations would now see coming her way. Gilderoy bypassed the front page and delved deeper into the prophet, finding what he was searching for on page 16. It was difficult to tell if he'd gotten his heroic pose in front of the Basilisk exactly right. The picture wasn't overly large. They'd copied his quickly prepared speech exactly though, which was good. He hated being misquoted. He carefully cut out the picture, making sure to leave the article attached. An article in which the famous Gilderoy Lockhart pointed out exactly where the children had made the mistakes, and why they would be so much better off taking the defense lessons from him. He conveniently ignored the scathing comments underneath the very same article that branded his proposed method of dealing with the Basilisk as not only preposterous but suicidal. Gilderoy also paid no notice of the claims that, after the Hogwarts alarm sounded, he was first out the castle and, still in his baby blue silk pajamas, had ran screaming all the way to Hogsmeade. Gilderoy carefully stuck his latest addition into his scrapbook and began refining his headmaster's acceptance speech. After this incident, who else could they possibly choose? Thanks for reading. The family meets. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, I write purely for my own enjoyment and make no money from my efforts. Apple never picked up on an iPad sponsorship deal either, neither do I claim to own any of the characters who appear in this story. Everyone on the planet must know by now that Harry Potter belongs to a certain Miss Rowling. Chapter 47. Padma arrived with her family into a back garden that was very familiar to the young witch. She fairly shot through the door in search of her friends. Neville was actually waiting on her and there was no awkwardness in his hug of greeting. It was a rather nervous Parvati though who entered the Grangers' home at a much more sedate pace, and with her mother and father close for support. Neville spotted this at once and released Padma before opening his arms to her twin. With a sob, Parvati dived into them and held on as if her life depended upon it. Ever since hugging his gran in the Hogwarts infirmary saw Neville escaping the expected rollicking of his life, the relieved wizard's new mantra was to hug everyone. He thought he'd gotten it wrong here until noticing the other 3 Pattles were smiling at him. I'm so sorry, Neville, for all the trouble I caused. You didn't do anything, Parvati, it was all Tom. I'm sorry too that I never noticed what was really going on. I'm your housemate, your friend, and we had just spent a good part of the summer together. I was so wrapped up in my own world though that I ignored a friend that needed help. I really am sorry, Parvati. Parvati may have controlled her sobbing, but Neville's arms around her were proving too nice to end right away. You came to rescue me, Neville. I couldn't ask for a better friend than that. That's what friends do. Harry and Hermione will tell you the same. Their legs still have them toddling about like babies, but they're waiting on you both in the lounge. Padma took her twin and led her there. Ramrao wanted a quick word with Neville first. Thanks for that, Neville. Parvati was really worried about meeting people again. That was a very mature attitude to take. Sir, to be perfectly honest, I never expected to come out of the chamber. That basilisk was bloody terrifying. Padma pulled me through, and gave me the courage to fight on. I think our time down there will change all of us. My gran certainly treats me different now. Ramrao had his hand supportingly on Neville's shoulder. I saw the beast dead and it terrified me. I'm still not sure how you four managed to pull it off. I also saw my daughter kiss you, and wanted to let you know I approve, assuming you remain a gentleman. Sir, Padma is a scary witch in her own right, but have you met her best friends? Padma and I haven't had time to discuss anything about that day yet. When we do, I can assure you I will be a proper gentleman. Ramrao, stop trying to scare the boy. Smeeta, this boy helped bring down a gigantic basilisk and then stopped Voldemort. I hardly think he'll be scared of Padma's father. The three shared a quiet laugh at that as Neville showed them where to go. Smeeta wasted no time in rushing over to the sofa to hug Harry and Hermione, drawing a wry chuckle from Emma. I find myself doing that all the time too. I think I'm trying to convince myself that they are actually okay and still with us. The Patil mother agreed. I found myself repeatedly getting up and checking the twins' room the last couple of nights, just to ensure they were safely sleeping in their beds. I am so glad I never went down into that chamber. Just the picture in yesterday's prophet scared the life out of me. I would probably never let the girls out of my sight again if I had actually seen the beast for real. Sirius and Dan had been ferrying enough chairs for everyone into the lounge. Now that they were all seated, it was time to start the family meeting. Augusta, Smeeta, Ramrao, you will hear things today that I must ask you not to speak of with anyone who isn't currently in this room. Barchok's gaze then settled on Parvati. I'm afraid that applies doubly so to you, Miss Patil. She nodded her agreement at once. I think what upset me the most was not knowing what was going on. Padma and I never had secrets from each other before. That played a big part in pushing us away from each other. As long as I can talk to Padma about anything I hear today, I'll be happy with that. Smeeta was pleased at any move that would keep her twins close to each other. Are we to assume that Padma and Neville already know these secrets? It was Harry who answered this time. Hermione, Padma and Neville have stood beside me practically since we met. Their friendship means everything to me, and keeping secrets is not a good basis for any friendship. I'm really sorry, Padma. We should have realized what you keeping those same secrets from Parvati would do to your relationship with your twin sister. It's time to trust people and live with the consequences. Did you get confirmation, Father? The goblin seemed to age as he answered his son. Yes, and he was working alone. Then he is a dead man. Harry, no, let the ministry deal with it. Hermione, he attacked my family, he attacked you. The rest of the family didn't exist for the couple at the moment. They were staring into each other's eyes as they fought this battle of wills. Amelia will make sure he sees the inside of Azkaban. We could even ask he gets Siria's old cell. Ask your godfather if that's a soft option. Quote ellipsis. But Hermione, he attacked. Quote ellipsis. And you're not fit to duel anyone over the age of 3 at the moment. Let Amelia have that time to see justice done. If he's not in Azkaban by then, I'll even be your second. Harry was getting lost in those brown eyes. She can have a week. After that, he's mine. Make it 2, love. Give both you and Amelia time to get ready. 2 weeks, for me, please. When Hermione added a tender kiss to her plea, everyone there knew Harry was done for. 2 weeks, not a day longer. This earned Harry another kiss and saw a weight leave Barchok's shoulders. He knew his son would call Malfoy out, just as the goblin knew there was no way he could have talked Harry out of it. Hermione very wisely didn't even try that tack. Instead, she rather cleverly bought some time for Amelia to do her work, and allow Harry to recover properly. The goblin was glad Hermione had extracted that promise before his son heard the next piece of news. Even his mate would have struggled to contain Harry's anger after this. I should now really fill everyone in on exactly what's going on here. During the summer, we received a warning that a great danger would be coming to Hogwarts. That this danger would involve Harry was all the information we had, absolutely nothing specific that we could approach yourselves, Amelia or Minerva with. You would have to be a right fool not to see there was more going on here than they were being told, and Augusta was no fool. Can I ask why Amelia and the girls aren't here today? Barchok directed his answer at those who didn't yet know the full story. There are things you will hear that we wouldn't necessarily want the head of the DMLE to learn. That's in no way a negative reflection on the current holder of that post, rather us trying to offer some protection to Amelia. She will certainly hear that this was a direct attack against my son, and also that the wrong witch ended up with the Horcrux. Padma caught on at once. It was supposed to be me, wasn't it? This was confirmed by Barchok. An attack on Harry would work best if it was targeted at you, Neville or Hermione. Oh, Malfoy is so dead. This sharpened Augusta's attention. Malfoy, Lucius Malfoy. Her indiscretion saw Padma's cheeks blush. Oops, I wasn't supposed to say anything. Okay, let's get everything out in the open. I am Harry Crow, current head of House Potter. My father arranged that so no one could influence my decision on where my future lies. Funnily enough, the ministry solved my problem by awarding me an Order of Merlin. That automatically makes me an adult as far as the ministry are concerned, and allows me to call out Malfoy. His elf actually provided the warning, which is why we got no specific details. We only discovered it was Malfoy's elf when Draco's mother pulled him from Hogwarts, and we only suspected a basilisk was involved when Hermione found that information in the library on Friday night. Her hand slipped into his, knowing what was coming next. Hermione is not merely my girlfriend, we are bloodbound mates, and will officially marry when both of us become of age to do so. Parvati immediately looked to her twin for confirmation. Padma told her what she knew. Truly bonded, with an all-over glow that turned golden. I wish I could have seen it. Our father has a memory of our bonding. I'm sure he could be convinced to let you see it. We put the Malfoys under investigation, using the same method that brought down Dumbledore, and now have confirmation. Father, can we prove it to the ministry though? We certainly have enough evidence to get him arrested and standing trial for this. Letting Amelia and the minister know we're having to hold you back from calling Lucius out might just force them into action. Failing that, do you think Malfoy would accept the pit? No, not again, that can't happen again. Emma, there is not one person in this room who wants that. Just like they did in the chamber though, we have to prepare for every option. I will be putting all the pressure I can on the ministry to deal with this, and I'm confident that Malfoy will receive justice. I also think Harry has a better chance fighting Malfoy in the pit, rather than a formal wizard's duel. Lucius will be able to use whatever curses he wants in the pit, without any repercussions, he'll go for a big play. While Lucius is grandstanding, Harry will be on him. It was Smeeta who asked the obvious question. Hey, what's this pit, and why does Emma look as if she's going to pass out? With difficulty, Harry moved over to Emma. This is just contingency plans, please don't worry about it. Do you have to do this, Harry? I never want to even think about you going into that thing again. Same reason as last time, Emma, he attacked Hermione. If I don't respond, someone else may think it's worth another try. There are families who would literally kill to get the daughters next to the Potter name and fortune. Until I marry Hermione, I need to show what happens to anyone daring to make that attempt. It was left to Hermione to answer Smeeta's original question. The pit is the goblin way of deciding justice. Two go in, only one comes out alive. A goblin made an attempt to kill me at the end of the summer, that is why we blood bonded. Harry then fought in the pit to ensure it would never happen again. He put their champion down in seconds. Padma and Parvati moved either side of Hermione to offer comfort. Emma didn't appear to be letting Harry go anytime soon. Barchoke summed the situation up for everyone. The blood bond makes Hermione my daughter too. I will do everything in my power to keep both of them safe. Malfoy needs to pay for this atrocity though, one way or another he will. The Potter elves then decided refreshments were needed, while Betsy popped in with a hanky for Hermione, and a warning not to overtire herself. As Harry shakily made his way back to Hermione, Dan tried to get everyone back on track. Are there any more questions, or can we move on to the real reason behind this get-together today? Ramrao spoke for the rest of them. If we think of anything later, Padma or Neville will probably know the answer. Happy with that, Dan continued. We watched Tonk's memory right from just before the alarm sounded. While my first instincts were for you to get out the castle as quickly as possible, you took minimal risks to collect information that could prove vital in solving this problem. Discovering Parvati's predicament clearly changed all the rules. Parvati was now sitting between Padma and Neville, and was very grateful for the support they offered. Even then, you sent for help immediately and did nothing more than attempt to open the passage. On achieving that difficult feat, you still hung back until formulating a plan. I tried to put myself in your position and discovered I would have made all the same choices. Every member of the team that went into the chamber played an absolutely vital role in ensuring we are all sitting here today to talk about this. Had you gone down there with even one person less, the outcome could have been oh so different. The four were looking at Dan as if waiting for the hammer to drop. It wasn't going to happen. Had you lot rushed in there all gung-ho, looking for trouble, we would be having a very different conversation right now. Instead, you never lost sight of the fact it was a rescue mission, and only fought when you were left with no other choice. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm so proud of all of you. The Prophet got it right, you were heroes in the truest sense of the word, you risked your lives to save someone else's. The Pattles, Barchoke, Sirius and Augusta heartily endorsed that viewpoint, leaving some very relieved people thinking they got off lightly. It was now Hermione's turn to toddle across the room as she hugged her father. Okay, enough of this mushy stuff. That basilisk obviously affected the beautiful Professor Hobson more than the healers thought. She actually agreed to marry me. Sirius punctuated this announcement with a kiss for a smiling Henrika. This news was greeted with cheers all round. Sirius of course had more to say. There will be an engagement party in Grimmauld on Boxing Day, but I would like to invite our extended family to spend the Christmas holidays with us. I want to turn the entire holiday season into a celebration of our new family, and no, Henrika is not pregnant. The way the couple looked at one another at that remark meant Sirius didn't need to say, yet, they all got the message. Emma had found that she'd been close to tears ever since Saturday, the ones now forming though were of joy, and partly relief. Since he was released from Azkaban, they had spent a lot of time with Sirius. Even when Harry and Hermione were in Hogwarts, he would visit at least once a week to tell them how their kids were doing. Henrika was also liked by everyone in the company, and thought a wonderful match for Sirius, so this news was indeed joyous. Her relief was due to their Christmas problem being so neatly solved. Emma didn't really care where they spent Christmas, just as long as they were all together. With Dan working to control his natural instinct and springing to Hermione's defense without thinking, they were slowly but surely rebuilding relationships that would eventually be stronger than they were before. Dan had sat with a glass of whiskey in his hand, and tears rolling down his cheeks, as he recounted to her the story of what their kids had faced. Emma had let him get it out of his system and then taken Dan to bed, the glass of whiskey left still untouched on the table. She was so proud of her husband for the way he handled the situation today, and now they could look forward to spending Christmas as a family. This jolted Emma out of her thoughts as a potential problem hit. Sirius, Luna Lovegood has been invited to spend Christmas with us. Quote ellipsis. And she's invited to Grimmauld too. Where is she? I thought her father was still on his research trip. His wife-to-be had the answer to that. Padma made sure Luna was with Penny, before we went looking for these two. Penny swore not to let Luna out of her sight, and was even going to take Luna home with her. They're both coming here tomorrow, Penny is bringing her by something called the night bus, and then Luna will be staying until we go back to Hogwarts. Hermione then added a little more information about the quirky friend. She also knows about our bond, apparently she can see it. Cornelius was wishing he couldn't see this as Lucius Malfoy condemned himself with his own words. We can't show that memory in the Wizengamot chamber, they would never accept evidence collected like that. He clearly didn't know someone else was watching, and it was a discussion with his wife, in his own home. If we started admitting evidence like that into a trial, half the Wizengamot would probably end up being interviewed by your department. Having known these facts beforehand, Amelia wasn't perturbed in the slightest. Then we have some serious problems, Cornelius. Barchoke has informed me that only Harry's injuries are currently stopping his son calling the senior Malfoy out. We are talking a duel to the death here. This fairly ruined the minister's day. His public approval rating had never been higher too. Anything happening to the boy who lived would soon put a serious dent in those ratings. Harry wouldn't be doing the actual fighting though, would he? His status as a centurion in his own world sees him regarded as an adult. Being an Order of Merlin, first class, recipient provides the same function in ours. He would fight Lucius Malfoy to the death. Harry was clearly the target, and his friends suffered through it. Luna Lovegood, Mai Susan, Hannah Abbott, Parvati Patil, and then the three of his friends that accompanied him down to the chamber for the rescue mission. His girlfriend, Miss Granger, is still recovering from the injuries she sustained. This drew an audible groan from the minister. We should be discussing how we can reward these heroes, not trying to stop them fighting duels to the death. What can we do about this, Amelia? I think we have more than enough information to arrest Malfoy. A search of his manor to ensure he has nothing else like this would also appear prudent. He obviously did it, and should then be forced to say so under truth serum. How far we want to open the can of worms really has to be decided by you. In the past, this would be the point at which Cornelius would fold, protecting his friends and his own self-interest. It was time to see if this new version really had grown a spine. The minister didn't disappoint. Acting on reliable information the ministry has received, an arrest warrant should be issued against Lucius Malfoy. Since this relates to a deadly artifact that was in his possession, a thorough search of his premises should also take place to ensure there are no more threats lurking in the background. He should be questioned under truth serum regarding this attack, and any other current or planned future attacks he has knowledge of. Will that do? Amelia could see Cornelius practically begging her with his eyes to accept this compromise. Since it was more than Amelia expected, and would see Malfoy take up residence in Azkaban, she decided to cut the minister a break. Amelia also had something up her sleeve she now wouldn't need to use as leverage, she told Cornelius anyway. That would be acceptable. It will also work for the press, since Miss Skeeter is all set to break the story. I'm looking forward to being ahead of the game for once. I'll get a team together and hit Malfoy Manor today. The minister was certainly paler when Amelia left his office than he was when she entered. Cornelius had made the right choices though. Now it was her turn. She could have lost the last member of her family over this. Malfoy was going down hard. Neville was finding his conversation with his grandmother extremely hard. Gran, do we really need to talk about a betrothal? I really like Padma, but we have kissed once. That hardly means we want to spend the rest of our lives together. I know, Neville, but you have to understand that these extraordinary escapades at Hogwarts from both of you are going to attract a lot of attention. Even your mother recognized Padma is a beautiful witch. Now that Padma's also recognized as a hero of Hogwarts, Ramrau and Smeeta expect to be inundated with offers for their daughter. There will also be a lot of offers heading in your direction too. What we're trying to do here is see both of you happy, rather than arranging a betrothal that you don't really want. This drew a groan from Neville. His pact with Padma was supposed to shield them from betrothal offers, but that was before the chamber. Can't I just wait for a few years and see what happens? Neville, you know that's not possible. I was betrothed at your age, so were your mother and father. The Longbottoms have done this for centuries. I know two of your friends are different, but you and Padma have always known what's expected of you. If you're not interested in each other, we have to know now so Padma's parents can find the best possible match for their daughter. They really need to take advantage of all this interest. Mentioning his other two friends sparked something in Neville. As I said, I really like Padma, but neither of us know if we're suitable for a betrothal. There is a way we can find out though. This took Augusta back. Neville, surely you don't mean. Yes, we perform the blood bond ritual. That will tell us if we're a suitable match, then we could happily be betrothed. The blood bond wouldn't finalize until we were married, just like Harry and Hermione. His grandmother was well aware of what act was needed to finalize a blood bond. She spared Neville's blushes and let him off with the marriage comment. What would you do if the blood bond indicated you weren't suitable? Hug Padma and wish her luck in finding someone else. I would also promise we would always be friends. She really is a great friend. Gran, I would hate to see her stuck with me. This way, we would both know if a betrothal would work. It was hard for Augusta to curtail her exasperation and a little slipped out. Neville Longbottom, you are one of the most eligible young wizards in Britain, and that was before the Chamber of Secrets. You are certainly not someone a witch would consider being stuck with, like some kind of booby prize. Both Smeeta and Ramrau think Padma's sweet on you, and I know you really like her. That puts you both in the same position your mum and dad were. This made him happier about the situation, but Neville had made his mind up. I still want to try the blood bond ceremony. Like Harry, I've spent my life listening to stories of how much my parents loved each other. I want the same. This way, Padma and I can know exactly how suitable we would be for each other. Augusta really only had one more question for her grandson. Quote ellipsis. And what do you hope the result of the ritual will be? This time, Neville couldn't contain his blush. He answered as honestly as he could. I hope it shows we have a strong bond, and that leads us to a betrothal. A warm smile spread across Augusta's face. She recognized her grandson's innate shyness, and also the confidence he would gain from a positive reaction to the ritual. He needed proof that he and Padma would be a good match, and his other two friends had provided such a good example of what a couple should be. Blood bond rituals were originally carried out to see if couples were suitable to wed. I've never heard of one being used as part of a pre-betrothal agreement. Any other family might take this as an insult to their daughter, but I think I'll be able to explain the situation to Smeeta and Ramrau, that we all only want the best for Padma. It will need to be kept secret though, whatever the outcome. Neville understood his gran meant secret from everyone except family. He was fine with that. The Granger house once more woke to the whack of practice swords being used in the back garden. Raising his head from the pillow to glance at the window drew a groan from Dan. His groan was directed at the rain he saw running down the glass. Those two are still recovering. I hardly think being out in this weather will be helping. You could see their frustration yesterday because their injuries were physically curtailing them. They're obviously not fit to go for their run yet, but this will let them get some normality back. He couldn't help but tease his wife. Emma, practicing with wooden swords in the pissing rain, mere days after being seriously injured, is anything but normal. It's normal for them. In our world, those two would have been looking at multiple surgical procedures, weeks of lying in a hospital bed and then months of physiotherapy. They would have been lucky if they were able to practice fencing by this time next year. Those swords saved their lives. Let them practice as often as they want. You're still worried about Harry having to fight this Malfoy. Worried doesn't even start to describe it. I'm bloody terrified. He may be a centurion, but I just see my boy having to fight someone to the death. How the hell am I supposed to feel? I honestly don't think it will come to that. Barchoke was confident the ministry would take action. Remember, this thing also harmed Susan. We know how protective Amelia is of her niece. I was also watching Sirius as this was being discussed. I think he would take action before Harry could. We have an extended family now, with Harry right in the center of it. That family won't stand back and let anything happen to him. Emma snuggled into her husband, silently praying he was right, and the thwack-thwack was merely their children practicing their sport hobby. The occupants of Malfoy Manor received a much ruder awakening. Amelia led her team to arrest Lucius, and tear the place apart in their search for other dark objects. She had brought Alastair Moody along for this very purpose. That artificial eye of his would certainly come in handy when looking for hidden rooms or compartments. Lucius' heart sank as he spotted his visitors. Bones must have brought about 20 auras with her. What is the meaning of this? Amelia was in no mood to take any shit from Malfoy today. Lucius Malfoy, I have a warrant here for your arrest. Evidence has been presented that implicates you as instigating the attacks at Hogwarts. You will have your day in front of the Wizengamot as they ascertain your guilt or innocence. We also have a search warrant that includes every part of Malfoy Manor. The ministry has no intention of allowing any more Horcruxes to make their way into the general population. This almost had Lucius reaching for his wand. The gleam of anticipation in Moody's good eye soon changed his mind. The chances of the old Auror hitting him with a stunner were negligible. Moody liked to put his targets down harder than that. While slightly disappointed that Malfoy didn't try something really stupid, Amelia was suddenly thinking she might not need Moody after all. A rather ragged elf had silently appeared behind the Malfoys and was indicating to the floor at her feet. When Barchoke had supplied her with that memory, the goblin had also told her why they had focused their attention on the Malfoys. It was clear this elf wanted Lucius to be caught and was again providing all the help his bond would allow. Alastair, could you scan this room for hidden compartments or trapdoors? Mad Eye had of course spotted the elf and was already concentrating on the floor. There is some kind of ward on the floor, and rather heavy notice me not charms. I think our friend from the Unspeakables should start right here. By the time a cowed Lucius was in the magic inhibiting cuffs, the Unspeakable had the trapdoor open, and Dobby was ready to point them in the direction of the next find. There was enough dark objects in that room alone to ensure Lucius would be residing in Azkaban for a very long time. Draco stood beside his mother, helplessly watching as his smart and oh so powerful father was led out of their home in chains. The chances of him returning to that same home were nil. The family didn't even have enough gold to waste on hiring a lawyer to defend him. Thinking of family saw the realization hit that he was now effectively head of the Malfoys. It was time to make sure the family survived. Mother, I think you need to contact Lord Black over this matter. That won't help, Draco. Your father and Sirius have hated each other since they were your age. I'm not asking for him to help father. We are going to need help to avoid being dragged under with father. Lord Black is our access to the only person who can help us here. A word from Crow could be the difference between us still living at the manor or begging in the streets. I don't think that will do any good either. Sirius has no reason to be merciful. He has us exactly where he wants us. We're exactly where father put us, mother. I'm hoping he'll talk to Crow about it. You're pinning your hopes on mercy from a goblin. I thought we taught you better than that. Draco gestured to their home being torn apart around them. Quote ellipsis. And see where those lessons have led. Things changed the moment Crow walked into Hogwarts. Father couldn't accept that and was led out of here in chains. Dumbledore couldn't accept it and has been chased out of Hogwarts. Crow showed me mercy before when he didn't need to. This time we are actually innocent. The right word from him can protect us from this. Have you got any better ideas? That stopped Narcissa dead in her tracks. She actually had no idea what to do next. All their friends would sit back and wait to see what happened, too fearful of getting dragged into this mess to offer any semblance of support. They were on their own, and probably wouldn't survive the public backlash without some kind of protection. Do you really think Crow would help? He hates Lockhart. The man is a complete idiot, yet Crow cancelled the Tarantallegra spell Slughorn had him under, before taking Sluggy apart and dangling him from the ceiling. His attitude is that of a pure light wizard, but, when he chooses to act, his methods are at best grey. With Granger in danger, he would have jumped in that basilisk's mouth and slashed away with those blades of his to save her. Father's biggest mistake was to put her in danger. I half expected Crow to turn up here and personally hack him to bits. Anyone stupid enough to attack her will be shown no mercy. Luckily we weren't involved with any of it. Crow really is our only chance. She couldn't argue with anything her son just said. Those blades had just taken down the biggest basilisk ever recorded. How could you argue with that? I'll send an owl to Sirius and see if he answers. What about your sister? You might try writing to her too. Draco, I haven't spoken to Andromeda in nearly 20 years. The situation we are in at the moment, we can't afford not to take even the slimmest of chances. I've had to be civil to Crow for over a year now. Not once has he rubbed my nose in it. Things are changing, mother. We need to change too. What alternative do we have? Narcissa couldn't see any alternatives, knowing the Wizengamot had the power to levy heavy fines against Lucius too. These would be taken straight out their vaults, leaving who knows what for Draco to inherit when he came of age. If they took too much, the Parkinsons would cancel the betrothal between Pansy and Draco. They may be forced to do so anyway, to distance themselves from Lucius' disaster. It was beginning to dawn on Narcissa that, if she wanted Draco to have any kind of life, she was going to have to get her nose out of the air and do some groveling. To protect her son's future, Narcissa would do whatever it took. Emma had enjoyed her morning. She was taking a few days off work until Hermione and Harry had fully recovered. That, and she just didn't want to let them out of her sight. After Luna and Penny had arrived, and made sure Hermione and Harry were getting better, Emma had offered to take them into Crawley. When the alarm sounded at Hogwarts, there was no time to grab trunks as the evacuation took place. Luna was currently wearing some of Penny's resized clothes since her trunk was still in her dorm. Just being able to do some normal things, clothes shopping and pizza for lunch, was exactly what Emma needed. Anything really to distract her mind from the thought of Harry fighting a duel to the death. Knowing there were charms on the magical bus that wouldn't even allow her to see it, Emma entered the house as the three friends said goodbye to Penny, and was surprised to find Sirius and Henrika waiting there. By the smile Sirius was wearing, it was going to be a pleasant surprise. Knowing how worried Emma was, Sirius got straight to the point. Lucius Malfoy was arrested this morning. Amelia arrived with a team of Aurors and also tore Malfoy Manor apart. Even his own wife expects him to be changing his address to Azkaban. Emma managed to make it to a chair before she broke down and started crying. These though were tears of relief. Hermione and Harry were alarmed when they first spotted her sitting crying. That was until Sirius told them the reason behind her tears. He also told the pair he needed to speak with them. This would not be a straightforward conversation. This was the first time Narcissa had entered Gringotts in almost a year. She had no reason to go there until now. Sirius had responded to her plea, and set their meeting here. Once the news broke, she probably wouldn't be able to walk down Diagon Alley, and certainly not stroll into Gringotts Bank. She was led through a warren of tunnels until Narcissa was directed into what she considered a very strange room to hold a meeting. There weren't even any chairs. Then she spotted Sirius standing beside an observation wall. I like to come here and spend some time just watching Alice and Frank recover. I always seem to pick up on some little sign of improvement that wasn't there the last time I visited. I've come to think of the Longbottoms as a metaphor for our society. We thought nothing could be done, but, day by day, they are slowly proving us all wrong. She watched in astonishment as Alice carefully brushed what hair her husband had left. And then lovingly kissed him on the cheek. How is this possible? They've spent years in St. Mungo's. It's possible because of who Alice Longbottom is godmother to, the very same person who is my godson too, the same person who your husband intended to see dead. She had no answer for that, and didn't think Sirius was looking for one. He hadn't even looked in her direction yet. My godson has a good heart, but that should never be taken as a sign of weakness. Barchoke has done a wonderful job of raising my godson. The one area he was unable to teach is the workings of blood houses and politics. That is where I come in. Harry knows Draco is innocent, and also that he has been keeping his head down since their confrontation in the Great Hall. Harry feels a child shouldn't be persecuted for the sins of the father. She let out a long and audible sigh of relief, but that proved a mistake. Sirius now turned to face her, or should that be Lord Black? Just to be clear here, Malfoy, I don't agree with my godson on this. You may not have known the specifics of what that husband of yours was up to, but you knew enough to get your own son out of danger, leaving everyone else behind to fucking die. Was your husband so precious to you that you were prepared to stand back and let him unleash mass murder onto children? Then again, his half-blood master met his end trying the same, to murder a baby. I'll bet your blood friends will love you when this gets out, making sure the Malfoy heir was safe while their children were left to the tender mercies of a basilisk. Gone with the funny quips and jokes, Narcissa was faced with a furious Lord Black, a quite terrifying sight. Let me make something plain to you. Should Draco bide his time until his inheritance and then act, plot or conspire against my godson's health, I will make it my business to destroy the very name of Malfoy, and all those who bear it. Amelia actually did your husband a favor. Either Harry or I would have killed him otherwise, and there would have been no saving of Draco from the consequences that. Draco had already told her Crow would come for Lucius. Adding Sirius to that too would have ensured she wore widow's weeds before long. Narcissa had nothing to say because she had nothing to offer. Both she and Draco were completely at Sirius' mercy. Harry will release a statement, condemning your husband's actions but sparing Draco from any blame. For that, we want something in return. This was how Dobby came to find himself inside Gringotts, and being given clothes by his mistress. And thanks for reading, and hope to see you back here next week. And you are mine. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, since I'm not the owner of these characters, I may do things with them that you don't like or agree with. Sorry in advance, but that's the nature of fan fiction. To do otherwise kind of defeats the purpose, and copying JKR word for word would soon result in a lawsuit. I have found the only way to see a story going in exactly the direction you want is to write it yourself. Since this then gives the rest of us something to read, I can highly recommend it. Chapter 48. Rita held today's prophet in her hand and couldn't help but smile. She was beginning to appreciate how the goblins operated. This certainly felt like a revenge worthy of that race. Although the prophet had literally begged her to return, Rita had politely refused, and then wrung what would have been 6 months' worth of her old salary out them for the stories she had in today's paper. With no editor breathing down her neck and no deadline to meet, her byline of Rita Skeeter, independent investigative reporter, sure tasted like sweet revenge to her. All the gold in her bank account certainly helped to sweeten that feeling too. The prophet had of course led with her story on Lucius Malfoy, or, as the headline screamed, the real beast of Hogwarts. Malfoy was clearly the out-and-out villain of the piece, with the poor, innocent Patil witch simply unable to resist the dark and powerful compulsion charms on the Horcrux. The article posed a simple question: what 12-year-old could possibly resist the subtle manipulations of a Dark Lord? That her twin sister and her friends had not only discovered, but then broken into the fabled Chamber of Secrets, slain the gigantic basilisk that had been attacking the school, stopped Tom Riddle from being reborn and then rescued Parvati too meant there would not be one shred of blame heading in the direction of the Patil family, quite the opposite. That Voldemort had come within a whisker of being reborn was the really shocking part of the entire sorry tale, and ensured Malfoy would be joining his fellow Death Eaters in Azkaban. The Ministry also came out of this looking good. They already had Malfoy in a Ministry cell by the time the story broke and had also ransacked his manor to ensure there were no more Horcruxes lying in wait. That auras had been in front of the students they were protecting, and one had fought alongside the students down in the chamber, left the population with the impression that their ministry actually knew what they were doing, a most unusual occurrence. Hogwarts also had effective measures in place to deal with the emergency. The castle's evacuation was swift and efficient. Again, a Hogwarts professor had fought alongside the students, almost losing her life in the process. All in all, Rita was pleased with her articles and really pleased with the direction her life was taking. Being sacked by the prophet and then getting hired by the goblins was proving to be the best thing that had ever happened to her. Minerva was also amazed at the accuracy of the reporting, especially the article on the emergency meeting of the Hogwarts school board. With Albus's non-arrival, the current information Amelia Bones had available pointed to him leaving Britain altogether. He was quickly dismissed as headmaster in his absence. Minerva had then refused the offered headmistress position, citing that she was in the process of introducing an entirely new method of transfiguration and would like to concentrate her efforts on that for the foreseeable future. Augusta had invited Amelia and Barchoke to attend the meeting. It was the goblin though who asked the all-important question. Excuse me, exactly what did Headmaster Dumbledore do inside Hogwarts? All my dealings are with Professor McGonagall, which is why I asked the question. I know he didn't teach and that his deputy handled all the finances. What was his contribution to running the school? All eyes then shifted to Minerva, recognizing that she would be best able to handle this question. She was rather uncomfortable with where the question could lead but still answered truthfully. Albus left the day-to-day running of the school to me. He was more interested in setting Hogwarts policy, dealing with the paperwork involved, and of course hiring new staff. This was greeted with silence before Amelia offered a suggestion. Why not let Minerva continue with what she had been doing and just appoint someone to generally oversee Hogwarts? There exists some old legislation where the ministry can appoint someone into that very position. They would be known as the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts. They would also have the power to remove staff they felt weren't up to Hogwarts standard. A certain defense professor immediately springs to mind. Her idea wasn't exactly greeted enthusiastically, so Amelia set out to solve their obvious problem with this. I wasn't suggesting the ministry actually appoint someone, rather use the existing legislation to ratify whoever the school board chose to fill the role. That was certainly a lot more palatable to the board, and Augusta Longbottom was selected for the part-time position within the hour. Barchoke then explained the reason behind why he was here. Between us, Augusta and I represent 3 of the students who fought the Basilisk. We also have Ramrau Patil's permission to make this offer. They propose to split the profits from the Basilisk carcass into 3 pots. The first would pay for the upgrade of the Hogwarts wards that won't even allow a marked Death Eater to enter the castle, far less something as dark as a Horcrux. The remaining gold would then be split evenly between the final 2 pots, one to be shared amongst the rescuers and the other reserved for those who were injured by this situation. Since they were basically getting the best wards gold could buy for free, the school board unanimously accepted this generous offer at once. Barchoke did explain that Gringotts would be erecting these wards at cost. The Goblin Nation had no intention of making profit from protecting schoolchildren. What he didn't say was that this would be a massive advert and profitable endorsement for their new wards, and that they expected to make a fair bit of gold from protecting homes of the wealthy. To a wizard with enough gold, wards that wouldn't allow Death Eaters even access to your property were certainly worth paying for. It proved to be a very productive meeting, with everyone feeling as if they had gained something positive by the end of the night. Minerva was delighted that she would now be allowed to continue teaching the different form of transfiguration, and also have someone inside Hogwarts that might listen to her when she complained. With Augusta Longbottom in charge of hiring and firing, she didn't see Lockhart lasting much past Christmas. The only reason he might last that long was they would need to find a replacement first. Edmund Parkinson focused more on the short interview Crow had given Rita. He'd heard from Pansy that Crow could easily lord it over Hogwarts but made no attempt to do so, and apparently had no interest in doing so either. The impression given here was of a wizard who had no interest in honors, or any intention of playing a hero over this affair. He stated quite plainly they had gone down there to rescue their friend, nothing more. Crow's comment that he didn't want to see his friend being blamed for this incident, or anyone else other than the person who gave Parvati the Horcrux resonated with Edmund. They had pulled the daughter out of Hogwarts on a mere suspicion. Here was Crow publicly exonerating him, and others, of any blame. Pansy had begged him not to end her betrothal to Draco, citing this would indicate they blamed him and his mother for what happened at Hogwarts, something that could destroy the Malfoys. The smart move would be to end that betrothal now, and offer Pansy to the Longbottom lad. This was something Edmund might still do, depending on the outcome of Lucia's trial. That Lucius was bound for Azkaban seemed beyond doubt. What would happen to the Malfoy money was not. A 17-year-old Draco would still inherit, and, with Lucius out the picture, Edmund was sure he could influence his daughter's then wealthy future husband. Draco would have a reprieve, at least until his father's trial. If the ministry took over half of the Malfoy money, that would be the end of Pansy's betrothal, no matter how many tears his daughter cried. Dolores was attempting to be pragmatic about the situation, and failing miserably. Inside the witch was seething at the injustice of this, even though she understood it was nothing more than a case of very bad timing. The summer after next, she had secured the Quidditch World Cup to be held in England. Dolores had worked her ass off fighting to get the tournament to Britain, only to find the news buried deep inside the prophet. The newspaper was still being dominated by the Basilisk, and Harry Crow. Seeing him once more cast as the hero really made her blood boil, and that was before he stole her deserved front page. It was now the following day before Albus could get his hands on a copy of the prophet. He still thought it was worth the effort though. Now that he'd left Britain, it was vital that he kept himself up to date with just what was happening back home. The most striking thing for him was just who had ended Tom Riddle. Albus had to read it 3 times to ensure he hadn't made a mistake. It actually said Neville Longbottom. This saw Albus questioning just which of the boys was the child of the prophecy. Could he actually have gotten it wrong? This would need careful consideration, but he had time. Neither of the boys would be going anywhere for the next 5 years or so. Plenty of time for Albus Dumbledore to make his triumphant return to Hogwarts, and once more engage in the battle for influence over the prophesied one. That there were again 2 contenders for the position meant he would need to keep a careful eye on what was happening back home, otherwise known as getting the prophet delivered a day later than those living in Britain. The group of friends were spending time together in Crawley that Saturday afternoon for 2 reasons. One was simply that they enjoyed each other's company, and two was to help Parvati recover from her ordeal. Being in the company of Luna, Susan and Hannah, all of whom were petrified yet bore her no ill will, would certainly help Parvati with facing having to climb back on board the Hogwarts Express on Wednesday. Knowing her friends would be there for her too would also help, with even Lavender being invited to spend the day with the group. Hermione was holding Harry's hand as they led their friends around the town centre, her mind though kept wandering back to last night, and the events at Longbottom Manor. Oh, last night, oh. Barchoke didn't need much of an excuse to show the memory of his son and daughter's bonding, and the family had already heard Harry had to fight in the pit. Luna was clutching Harry and Hermione as the fight unfolded, sensing something bad was about to happen. Both Patil twins screamed as the goblin blade bit into Hermione, only for her armor to deflect it away. Still hurt like a bitch though. I had a bruise right down me. No one was surprised at Hermione's revelation, and neither were they shocked at Harry's response to the attack on his girlfriend. That goblin was just fortunate Harry dropped his blade. The girls' screams had soon turned to sighs as the bond formed, with Padma, Parvati and Luna all staring at the couple in awe. It was Neville though who reacted first. Harry, can I borrow your sword for our bonding ceremony? I was going to use the potions knife you gave me, but I want all the help magic can give me. After insisting on the bond, Neville was now dreading a negative result, as was Padma. Hermione had worn her sword specifically in the hope Padma might ask for it. She handed it over to her friend as Neville had the sword of Gryffindor in his grasp. The rest of the world no longer existed for the pair as, with a nod, Padma indicated she was ready. They cut their hands in unison, Neville going deeper than he intended due to the exceedingly sharp blade. That was the least of his troubles though. The next few minutes could decide the course of his life. They clasped their bleeding hands together as Neville offered the incantation. You are mine, and I am yours. Padma's eyes positively sparkled as she provided the necessary response. You are mine, and I am yours. Not one person in the room breathed as they studied the couple's joined hands. Those collective breaths were released as a silver glow began to escape from their linked fingers. As that glow passed their wrists and began traveling up their arms, an air of euphoria amongst the watchers escalated directly in relationship to the expanding glow. As it reached their shoulders, Ramrao let out a loud yell of celebration. His wife and Parvati had already been in floods of tears from the instant the silver glow first made an appearance. It crept into their chests, stopping when it reached their hearts before slowly fading away. Neville's gaze had never left Padma's eyes. Will that do you, Miss Patil? Mr. Longbottom, I was yours the instant our hands healed. She proceeded to prove it by grabbing him for their second kiss, and this time Neville just might have ended up sockless. With the exception of Augusta, all the females present then mobbed the couple. The Longbottom matriarch had a wide smile on her face though as she approached Ramrao. I believe we have some business to discuss. It will give me great pleasure to invite your daughter to join our family. As Padma's father, I can honestly say I couldn't think of a wizard better suited to one day marry my daughter than your grandson. I will be delighted to sign the documents that will formalize what we witnessed here today. Dan found himself standing next to Barchoke, a hint of sadness creeping into what was a happy occasion. This is what it should have been like for our children, and I ruined that. He didn't get to say any more as Hermione had heard, and quickly rounded on him. Dad, everyone today knew exactly why we were here. You had just watched some memories and then were told I was married. How else could you react? You now understand our situation and are happy for us. I can't ask for anything better than that. Barchoke was chuckling as Hermione kissed her father on the cheek. Dan, I have to confess I've rarely known our daughter to be wrong about anything. She is of course right about this. If it makes you feel any better, Dan, we all expected to get a right roasting for the chamber. Let's now call it even and move on. Looking at the boy he was quickly coming to consider as his son, Dan nodded his acceptance of that and held his hand out to shake. Deal. As they clasped hands, Dan had one more question. There is something I wanted to ask though. What is your honest appraisal of what happened down there? Neville and Padma were returning their borrowed swords which gave the four a minute to think of an answer for Dan. I didn't want to take Hermione down there but she was right, we needed her. We also had no plan to deal with Tom Riddle. Neville saved all our asses over that. Henrika was just amazing, otherwise we would have been in really bad trouble. I think we would all agree that we carried an amazing amount of luck, the only time it turned against us being Hermione slipping. Hermione agreed with every word of that. I certainly didn't feel heroic, lying on a wet and bloody floor with a giant snake's head in my lap. Padma and I were too worried about Parvati and Harry to feel much of anything. Our training saved our lives. That same training has also taught us just how lucky we were that day. Dan then embraced the happy new couple. Congratulations you two, I didn't mean to lower the tone of the celebrations. Neville wore a smile that nothing was going to shift, just like nothing was going to shift Padma from his side. That's fine, Dan. Without going down into that chamber, Padma might never have kissed me, and I certainly wouldn't have had the courage to ask her to blood bond. His betrothed now playfully slapped his arm. Listen Longbottom, you were always going to get kissed. That ruddy great snake just moved the timetable up a bit. The celebration was back on track when Augusta and Ramrao returned, the paperwork all dealt with. She handed a small box to her grandson and Neville's smile got even wider. He opened the box and placed the Longbottom betrothal ring on Padma's finger, before offering her the box to do the same for him. There was no need for words, their blood bond was far stronger than any betrothal agreement, something the rings recognized as a spark of magic passed between them. An impromptu party broke out after that, no one had wanted to plan one beforehand in case they jinxed the outcome of the blood bond ceremony. It was during this time that Sirius approached Dan and Emma. I have a little problem you two might be able to help me with. Setting Dobby free has created an unforeseen problem, the little guy apparently likes being free. This left Dan shaking his head. Why does everything in your world have to be so bloody complicated? How could someone wanting to remain free be a problem? House elves love to work, it's when they're at their happiest. This drew a nod of understanding from Emma. Hermione told me the same thing, says she deliberately messes up her room sometimes to keep Betsy happy. That little elf is devoted to her. Dobby still wants to work, but he now wants paid for that work. While that might seem perfectly natural to you both, it's certainly not in our world. All his fellow house elves think Dobby is crazy, a disgrace for wanting payment for doing what he's supposed to do. To put him into a magical household would cause chaos amongst the other elves. I probably could get him into Hogwarts, but the little guy was really hoping for a family. Quote ellipsis. And you just naturally thought of a family that seems to be growing all the time. Emma was smiling in Luna's direction as she said this. Dan though was more business-like. I don't know if we could afford a servant and where would he live? Our house seems to be full now more often than not. He wants a galleon a month and will live in a corner of your loft. Sirius enjoyed watching his two friends' rather predictable reactions to his last statement. Indeed he will not live in a corner of our loft. A galleon a month, that's not even pocket money. He would build himself a little cozy nest, and be very happy with that. The money thing is more about symbolism than economics. Dobby gets paid therefore he's free, the amount he's paid is inconsequential. When I told him I was going to inquire if the family of Harry Potter wanted a house elf, he immediately dropped the price to a canute a month. Both took some convincing they wouldn't being exploiting the little creature and wanted time to speak with Harry and Hermione first, before making a decision. Harry found himself dancing with Hermione, Parvati and Luna. Neville and Padma weren't for being separated tonight. This gave Hermione time to talk with her parents and advise them to give Dobby a job, and a home. Hermione danced in Harry's arms, delighted they were regaining their mobility and fitness. She was also delighted for her two friends, with not a hint of jealousy at the rings they wore. Hermione already knew there would be an engagement ring on her finger, a present for her 17th birthday. That it would be joined by a wedding ring the following summer made her happier than she had the words to express. As a couple they would still disagree, argue and might even resort to the occasional fight. What their bond did though was ensure they knew how they felt about one another. Yes, each had faults that the other could find irritating, but they loved each other, faults and all. Oh present oh. Hermione was drawn out of her musings by someone calling her name. She felt Harry tense beside her as Padma and Neville casually took up supporting position behind them. Harry and Padma had personal experience of Hermione meeting people she knew before heading off to Hogwarts. This might be four girls rushing toward them, but they were taking no chances. Both intended to make certain Hermione wouldn't be needing to see a healer after this meeting. Hermione Granger, is that really you? No, Melissa, I'm the Wicked Witch of the West. What can I do for you? You can tell us who your stylist and personal trainer are. You look fantastic. She studied Joanne, finding none of the sarcasm or smirks she expected to accompany a comment like that. Hermione looked to Harry for help. Hey, I always think you look fantastic. Hermione had no way of knowing just how much she changed in the year and a half since these girls had last laid eyes on her. The frizzy hair that was the source of so many jibes was now soft brown curls, and those two front teeth perfectly matched their lovely pearly white neighbors. All her exercising had also had a very desirable effect on her body, as did the confident way she walked down the street holding Harry's hand. Hey, I don't have a stylist and I exercise with Harry every day. You four almost got hit by a bus, running across the road in front of it to ask me that. Melissa silenced Joanne with a look before answering. No, we came over to thank you, and say hi. Things are so much better now in school since you stomped on Dudley's gang. Tony came back on crutches and then his family finally moved away altogether. Joanne and the others nodded their agreement. We searched for you all last summer to thank you, but you were nowhere to be seen. Oh, we spent the full summer traveling. I was only in Crawley at the end of August. Padma had certainly picked up on Hermione's wariness as these girls approached. She also noticed the envious glances they were stealing at Hermione and Harry. She had learned from Hermione that Muggle school had been a lonely place for her friend. Padma didn't need to be a genius to deduct that these four played a part in that loneliness. It was time for some retrospective payback, and provide these four with a real focus for that jealousy. Starting off in Florida was brilliant. Are we doing that again next summer? Susan was also no slouch, spotting the tension before figuring out what Padma was doing. Oh, I would love to go back to Japan. That was just amazing and Auntie talks about it all the time. Sorry Susan, and I hate to disagree with my girlfriend, but Rome was the highlight of the whole summer. Lavender hadn't cottoned onto what was happening here. That made her outburst so much more believable though. She had been listening to stories of that holiday since Parvati returned from it. Lavender certainly knew which part sounded best to her. Neville, Rome was better than Harry's private tropical island. Are you nuts? Harry settled the matter. This summer our holidays will have to be built around a wedding. We won't be able to do much planning until that's arranged. The four girls were left looking at each other in disbelief. They'd heard the wild rumors, but here was the proof. Hermione Granger, the girl who they wouldn't give the time of day to, had somehow fallen on her feet and had every girl's dream in the palm of her hand. Certainly these four girls' dream. A gorgeous, rich and actually titled boyfriend. Sometimes life just wasn't fair. They had been searching all summer to see if the rumors were true, and, if they were, to begin the process of working their way into Granger's good graces. Here she stood though, surrounded by friends and hand in hand with the aforementioned gorgeous boyfriend. Melissa was left clutching at straws. Will you be coming home for Christmas? Hermione's shake of her head shattered any hopes they had of ingratiating themselves into her clearly wealthy company. It was always going to be a hard task, but the girl never being in Crawley just made that mission impossible. Sorry but no, Harry's godfather, Lord Black, is getting engaged at Christmas. We will be spending the entire holiday with him in London. It was nice meeting you again, but we need to go. This is the first time some of my friends have been in Crawley. We're showing him around. None of the four were quite brazen enough to invite themselves along. It was a close run thing though. As the friends walked away, Padma of course had a comment. Well, that certainly went better than the last time we met the natives of Crawley. Her sister couldn't contain her curiosity. Why, what happened? Oh, 5 guys tried to beat us up. One of them was even stupid enough to punch Hermione in the mouth. Let me guess, his name was Tony and he ended up on crutches. Why Susan, your aunt would be proud of you. That is certainly deduction worthy of an auror. Padma couldn't hold her giggle though. She was in a very good mood. Lavender was only paying partial attention. The shocks were distracting her, but she wanted to ask Parvati something. I thought Ravenclaws were supposed to be bookworms. This lot are more Gryffindor than we are. Hermione had explained to her parents that, as Betsy was her personal elf, there would be no conflict with Dobby in Crawley. The elves already considered her Lady Potter, and Dobby would be the Granger's elf. Emma couldn't get her head around having Dobby living in the loft. There was also no way he was going to walk around wearing a pillowcase. Dan and Emma were currently in negotiations with the elf. It was hard though, as Dobby was currently in floods of tears. If this isn't big enough, Dobby, we could. Oh no, Mrs. Granger, this is far too big for Dobby. This is a room. Dobby, it's a storage cupboard under the stairs. We emptied it and put that little cot in there. We thought you'd be more comfortable here than in the loft. We bought you some outfits. Do you like them? Both Emma and Dan had been coached not to say clothes. Dobby may be a free elf now, but that just wasn't a word you used around house elves. There were 3 children's outfits on hangers in the walk-in cupboard. Dobby's eyes were drawn to the little tracksuit. It was brightly colored, had zips and pockets, and Dobby had never seen anything so fine in all his life. Dobby loves them, and Dobby already thinks he's going to really like working here. With a shake of hands, the deal was done. The Grangers had just hired a very dedicated house elf. They had spent Tuesday night staying in Grimmauld to make accessing King's Cross easier. Breakfast was already a lively affair before the pair of Gringotts owls arrived. Both Henrika and Luna were stunned into silence at what they contained. Harry, I have a Gringotts bank draft here for 90,000 galleons. Would you care to explain why? It's your first installment from the Basilisk carcass, Henrika. It will be a few months yet before the final figure is known. As a victim of the creature, Luna should have about half of that. That's simply because there were more victims than rescuers. This received a nod of agreement from Luna. Mine is for 45,000. That's an awful lot of gold, Harry. Everyone who was a victim gets the same. Luna, you, Hannah, Susan and Parvati will all get that today. Padma and Neville will receive the same as Henrika. It was a puzzled Sirius who asked the obvious question. Where are the owls with your bank drafts? Hermione was almost blushing as she answered. We sorted that out yesterday when we were at Gringotts. It was getting embarrassing. Everywhere I went there would be goblins bowing to me. I hope it dies down soon. Emma could put 2 and 2 together quicker than most, and was sure she had the right answer here. So, Parvati is terrified of facing everyone on the express later today, and those checks just happened to be delivered this morning. His ruse might have been easily read, but Harry was unrepentant. This was an attack on me and my family. I'll do everything I can to protect them. Sirius's loud laughter cut through anything else Harry was going to say. This is genius. Instead of Parvati being picked on, you'll have a train full of people wishing they had been petrified. Luna was out for about a week and the rest of them were fed the potion the same day. The news also pleased Henrika. I didn't say anything before, but I'm traveling to Hogwarts on the express with you lot. There will be a few auras on the train too. We were worried in case there might be trouble, but this will make the entire journey a party. Someone better tell the trolley lady to stock up well. I've a feeling she's going to be busy. There was a party atmosphere taking over the breakfast table, but Hermione noticed Luna's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Is there something wrong, Luna? I thought you were looking forward to going back to Hogwarts. Oh, I am. It's just all this talk of family. There's only me and my father. Luna, when we found out you'd been petrified, Harry was ready to take the castle apart stone by stone to find out what did that to you. When he says family, you, Miss Luna Lovegood, are certainly considered part of that family. Really? Really, really? Luna's eyes now sparkled to match the wide smile she was wearing. Since her mother died, Luna had longed to be a family again. It would seem she was now part of this one too, something she was very happy with. It was no coincidence that the trial of Lucius Malfoy was held on the same day the children returned to Hogwarts. Like Amelia, a lot of the Wizengamot members would have just waved the young loved ones off on the express, and then left for the ministry to try the bastard who attempted to murder every single one of those very same children. Malfoy was guilty, of that there was no doubt. In the past though, that wouldn't necessarily mean Lucius would be punished. A new wing at St. Mungo's wouldn't get him out of this one though, not that he had access to funds to even attempt a deal like that. Today was all about showing the British wizarding public they could trust their ministry to make the hard choices and protect them. Since a lot of the parents were in London anyway to see their children off, the public galleries were packed to capacity. They were currently watching a Lucius Malfoy who had certainly lost his sneer of superiority. To be fair, sitting chained to a chair inside an iron cage while awaiting trial for the attempted massacre of the nation's schoolchildren would have that effect on most people. Sirius, Ramrau and Barchoke sat together at the trial, listening while Lucius under truth serum congratulated himself for slipping the diary to the wog witch that was a close friend of Crow's. It was only after returning home and reading the Dumbledore expose that he realized the diary was a Horcrux. His house elf was then sent to infiltrate Hogwarts and retrieve the Horcrux, only to return empty-handed. It wasn't until after reading about the chamber incident in The Prophet, Lucius realized he'd slipped the diary to the wrong Patil witch. He confirmed that no one else knew what he had done, and it was purely concern for their son that saw his wife withdraw Draco from Hogwarts. Lucius then condemned himself to the entire magical population of Britain, including any Death Eaters still at large, by confirming it was pure self-preservation that sent his elf off to Hogwarts. While the Malfoys were denied access to their funds, the Dark Lord's return would be an utter disaster for them. It was also noticed that Lucius was the only Malfoy in the Wizengamot chamber, not even his wife was here to offer any support. With Malfoy's goose well and truly cooked by his own confession, Amelia then showed Aurortonk's memory to all the people crammed inside the chamber. The ministry wanted everyone to see what the outcome of Malfoy's ministrations could have been. To those intently watching the events unfold, Tom Riddle's appearance was every bit as terrifying as the Basilisk. The vote on his guilt was a mere formality, a unanimous answer quickly being returned from the Wizengamot members. It was then left to Amos to pass sentence. Lucius Malfoy, you have been found guilty of unleashing a terrible horror into Hogwarts, with callous disregard for the welfare of the children being taught there, your own son included. It is nothing short of miraculous that there were no fatalities, otherwise I wouldn't have hesitated in using the death penalty for this case. This drew gasps from around the Wizengamot chamber as people realized this was not Albus Dumbledore they were now dealing with. Amos Diggory appeared not to be the forgiving sort, even the Lestranges had escaped the death penalty. The attack on the Hufflepuff students though had badly shaken the chief warlock. His own son had been mere yards from the point of the Basilisk attack. You will spend the rest of your life in the high-security wing of Azkaban. It was also my intention to find the Malfoy family rather heavily, and use that gold installing wards at Hogwarts to ensure nothing like this could ever be repeated. Thanks to our friends from the Goblin Nation, and those 4 brave and generous students who destroyed the Basilisk, our children today return to a much safer Hogwarts. I still intend to impose a financial penalty though. 20% of the Malfoy fortune will be awarded to the Ministry. This will be allocated to the DMLE, its purpose to help equip and train more brave Aurors like the ones who protected our children at Hogwarts. This proved a very popular decision. The profile of the DMLE had never been higher. Edmund watched with everyone else as a sobbing and broken Lucius Malfoy sank into the floor. Personally, he thought the death penalty might have been kinder than spending the rest of your life in Azkaban. The 20% fine meant he would leave his daughter's betrothal to Draco intact for the moment. The news flashing around platform 9 3/4 that the Longbottom lad had just gotten betrothed also affected this decision. He would call in on Narcissa before going home, give her the expected news about Lucius and then see what future concessions he could wring out of the Malfoys. If Edmund even suspected Draco was as stupid as his father, his betrothal to Pansy would be over before the blonde ponce could spit. Lucius may have wormed his way into high society, but the Malfoy name could become poison for many years to come. Edmund would have to give serious consideration to whether he wanted his grandchildren lumbered with such a disadvantage. Thankfully he had a few years yet before finalizing any arrangements. Narcissa would know all this, and also that should Draco's match to Pansy be dissolved, she would certainly struggle to find another suitable betrothal for her son. Edmund should be able to squeeze more Parkinson control over the Malfoy fortune. Narcissa wasn't really in any position to refuse. Thanks for reading. Just one thing. Harry Crow. Disclaimer, JKR still owns Harry Potter. I write purely for fun and post it here so you can read it for free. Anyone wishing professional standards of writing should go and buy one of her books. Poa is my favorite. Chapter 49. Parvati had been pleasantly surprised at the positive reactions she'd received on the express. Then again, she'd never ventured outside the 2 compartments they had occupied, and Professor Hobson had stayed close. Now, the professor was at the staff table, Susan and Hannah at Hufflepuff, while Padma, Hermione, Luna and Harry were all heading to sit at their own house table. She still wasn't alone though. Neville had offered his arm and Lavender was by her side. Ginny and Colin were leading the way to a space at Gryffindor that would accommodate the 5 of them. Unfortunately, this free space was closer to Ronald Weasley than they would usually sit. Hey Longbottom, looks like Lucius Malfoy isn't the only one who can't tell the petals apart. You do know your girlfriend is sitting at the Ravenclaw table, right? Or did they come as a pair? Ron was laughing at his own joke. That was until he realized he was the only one laughing. The way Neville was glaring at Ron was certainly enough to deter any sensible person from laughing at the redhead's supposed joke. After all, Neville Longbottom had just fought a Basilisk and killed Voldemort. This was not someone you wanted to upset. Since Padma is wearing the Longbottom betrothal ring, and Parvati clearly isn't, that should tell even someone as thick as you who this is on my arm. That same ring also makes Parvati my sister. Would you stand back and let anyone say horrible things about your sister? This had a red-faced Ron on his feet. Don't you dare say anything about my sister. She wasn't the one stupid enough to write in a cursed diary. Oh, I think the whole school knows who the stupid one is in the Weasley family. You prove it every time you open your mouth. Talk about my sister like that again and I'll call you out. This is the only warning you're getting, Weasley. Before Ron could say any more, Percy intervened. Ron, sit down and shut up. Oh, take his side again, why don't you? He's sticking up for someone who isn't even his sister, yet my own brother stabs me in the back. Must be nice to have a supportive family. Perhaps if you weren't such a jerk, we just might. Parvati's been through a horrible experience. Ginny found herself being interrupted by a now snarling Ron. Quote ellipsis. An experience she caused, and then got paid a bloody fortune for it too. That doesn't sound too horrible to me. Neville was just about to launch himself at Ron when his head of house made her presence known. Ronald Weasley, go to my office at once. What, and miss dinner? I shall have the elves prepare a sandwich for you. Quote ellipsis. A sandwich. You have just gained an extra week's worth of detentions for your disrespectful attitude toward me. That's on top of the week I was originally going to give you. If you are not in my office inside the next 5 minutes, our new High Inquisitor can start her first day on the job by taking you home, and then explaining to your parents the reason why you are no longer welcome inside Hogwarts. It had been reported in the Prophet that the new High Inquisitor was Neville's grandmother. Ron rightly thought that he would receive no sympathy from that quarter. With his head down, he began making his way out the hall. McGonagall though made sure he still heard her address to the rest of Gryffindor. When you all arrived at Hogwarts for the very first time, I told you then that your house would be your family. One of our family was hurt by Lord Voldemort. That another member of our family made him pay for that hurt makes me prouder than I can say. Parvati needs the support of her family and friends at this time. Her Gryffindor family will provide that support, or I'll know the reason why. As McGonagall headed back to the staff table, Parvati found herself sitting between Neville and Lavender with the rest of the house rallying around. It appeared as if Ronald Weasley's was the only disconcerting voice in Gryffindor. Harry felt it was now safe to release his grip on Hermione and Padma. Both had wanted to rush to Parvati's aid. The confrontation had been heard by the entire Great Hall. Ronald Weasley and Subtlety weren't exactly close friends. Harry had no intention of letting 2 angry witches now focus their ire on him, though so quickly offered his reasoning. Neville always had the situation under control, and I saw McGonagall keeping a close eye on him. She was moving the minute the mouth without a brain started speaking, or should that be shouting? We know what would have happened if Ron had been foolish enough to reach for his wand. Neville would have wiped the floor with him. By us not interfering, McGonagall was able to deal with it as a Gryffindor house matter. Can I borrow your sword, Hermione? I want to go and cut Ron's sandwich into bite-sized pieces, then ram them down his throat with my fist. You touch the mouth. Hermione, I'm a betrothed witch, and I wouldn't be able to eat my dinner if I even thought about shoving sandwiches in any of his other orifices. Girls, you're frightening our friends, well, at least spoiling their appetites. Relax everyone, they're only joking. We're still the same people we were before all this happened. Oh Harry, does that mean I can stop bowing every time I meet you now? Luna's sing-song voice stopped all conversation as everyone stared at her. She couldn't hold her pretense though and burst out laughing. You should see your faces. I told you we shouldn't have let her eat all the chocolate on the train. Ladies curtsy, Luna, not bow, don't get it wrong again. Harry couldn't hold his laughter either, soon being joined by most of the table as they figured out they'd been had by the little blonde first year. The Ravenclaws had gotten used to seeing Harry or Hermione on the front page of the Prophet. It wasn't exactly a gigantic leap to add Padma to that group too, especially when the three of them just acted as they normally would. At the Slytherin table, the overwhelming emotion was that of relief. Crow's notion that only the person responsible should be blamed seemed to be prevalent amongst their fellow students. Longbottom jumping on Weasley for haranguing the main victim of these attacks suited him down to the ground. It deflected attention away from those who had fled the castle while reinforcing the belief that only the guilty should be punished. Draco was trying to blend in so hard, he was in danger of disappearing. He of course knew his father's trial was today, and no sane person questioned what the verdict of that trial would be. His concern was purely the sentence. Would his father live through this? Would the ministry punish what was left of the Malfoy family with severe financial penalties? Pansy was glued to Draco's side, understanding exactly what he was going through. Their betrothal may be hanging by a thread, but she would be here to support Draco, no matter what happened to his father, or what her father said. Lucius could have used support like that. Lucius would currently accept support from anywhere. The guards had flung him into this dark, dank cell, and the reality that he was never getting out of here completely destroyed any fortitude Lucius had left. He was crying like a baby, but his torture was just beginning. The Dementors were undoubtedly horrors, but having his mental sister-in-law in the next cell was taking things a step too far. The imprisoned Death Eaters were starved of news and had just been presented with a feast. Lucius was constantly bombarded with questions from all sides. Bellatrix though just wouldn't give up. Since neither he or Bella were going anywhere for the foreseeable future, Lucius decided that answering her was the only way to gain some respite. In his state of emotional turmoil, it never occurred to him that the crazy bitch might not like the answers Lucius had to give. She could be heard screaming at him by everyone in the high security wing. Our master entrusted you with one of his greatest treasures and you gave it away, all for a bit of revenge on a boy. Why didn't you just kill the little bastard? At least then you would have ended up in here for doing something constructive and worthwhile. Our master also entrusted me with one of his treasures. I would gladly die before letting anything happen to it. The family squabble continued unabated, and in the same vein, Bella was verbally tearing strips off Lucius, and promising more if she ever got her hands on him. This was as near as the residents of the high security wing got to entertainment, and all were discovering secrets at the same time. Lucia's revelation that their master had a muggle father though was a revelation too far for Bella. She was yelling that he was a liar while pounding the stone wall between their cells in an effort to get at Lucius and rip his tongue out for even suggesting something as vile as that about her beloved master. Augustus Rookwood lay on his thin mattress and absorbed all the information being shouted about like a sponge. He was very good at that. Augustus had entered the ranks of the Death Eaters with his eyes wide open, and his own personal goals. After suffering dragon pox as a child, Augustus had survived, but the disease left its mark, not all of them visible. While his face had enough pockmarks to make people wonder if his parents had allowed him to be used as a chew toy for their pet dog, the after effects of the potentially fatal disease ran much deeper. While Augustus' intellect was approaching the genius level, his magical power struggled to scrape average on a good day. Combine that handicap with a complexion that resembled Swiss cheese that was going slightly off, and you could perhaps understand why his time at Hogwarts was not a happy one. The ministry was also disappointing. Yes, he got to work in the Department of Mysteries, but his lack of power meant the goal of being an unspeakable was denied him. With no family name worth speaking of, and certainly no fortune, he had grasped the opportunity to don the Death Eater regalia with both hands. Wearing that uniform and mask, Augustus was just as handsome and powerful as anyone else. What a time he'd had, actually losing his virginity during his first raid on a mudblood's home. Augustus soon fell in love with the double life he was leading. He'd spy for his new master during the day, then at night receive his rewards as the Death Eaters rampaged throughout Britain, wherever they wanted, unopposed. His master was smarter than he was, and certainly more powerful. Augustus didn't give two hoots if the Dark Lord's father was a muggle or a baboon. He himself held no pure blood superiority beliefs. Augustus was honest enough to admit that he became a Death Eater simply to access what was denied him otherwise, sex and power. What Augustus heard here today provided his first spark of hope for over a decade, hope that those days of power and plenty might return once more. He of course knew what a Horcrux was, though didn't think it was possible for an individual to make more than one. Here again was proof of his master's supreme intellect and unbelievable magical power. If Bella had access to one of their master's Horcruxes, Augustus was certain he could bring their master back from the dead. With Dumbledore apparently having fled the country, and the Potter brat living as a goblin, Britain stood wide open for the Dark Lord's return. Over the years, Augustus had of course speculated on ways and means to escape from this hellhole. The stumbling block had always been a pressing enough reason to risk his life attempting to escape Azkaban, only to then spend what was left of that life trying to hide from the ministry. He'd been raised with nothing, so didn't find the physical conditions in here too severe. A Dementor really had to be parked right outside his door for their debilitating effects to penetrate his occlumency, leaving him free to reflect on those stored memories that were by far and away the happiest days of his life. If he somehow got out of here and then returned his master to life, Augustus was sure his master would reward him by allowing his most loyal Death Eater to make many more of those wonderful memories. The one memory he was really looking forward to creating was the slow, painful death of that traitorous bastard, Igor Karkaroff. Even if he didn't get to torture and kill the bastard responsible for him being in Azkaban personally, Augustus was certain a grateful Dark Lord would at least let him watch as their master carried out his own brand of retribution on the traitor. He could easily console himself in the knowledge that their master would certainly inflict a lot more pain on Karkaroff before allowing the traitor to die than Augustus ever could. With that sweet thought, it was time to plan. Augustus almost felt alive again. Harry and Hermione felt alive again as they practiced in the room of requirements with their swords. Since their bodies were now fully healed, their morning training made them feel as if things were back to normal for them that is. Bill and Sirius would both be putting in the usual appearance at the weekend, with Sirius promising to consider animagus training for the four. He was trying to gather together some reading material beforehand, with their actual training probably not beginning until the new year. It was a sweaty but happy couple who were making their way back to Ravenclaw, only to find Draco and Pansy in their path. After waiting on the couple, Draco approached, ensuring that both his empty hands were clearly visible. Centurion Crow, it would seem I owe you my thanks more than once. I was already in your debt for speaking out about only punishing the guilty. A note from my mother has seen that debt increase. Your generosity in providing new wards for Hogwarts saved the Malfoy fortune, and probably my betrothal to Pansy. My father has been sentenced to life in Azkaban, a punishment I think he deserves. Had you not stopped his plans, the name of Malfoy would have been cursed in Britain for centuries. Harry could detect no deceit or malice coming from the Slytherin, and the concern radiating from Pansy was certainly genuine. Draco had effectively lost his father, his wealth was locked down, and it would seem Pansy's parents were questioning if the daughter should remain with the Malfoy heir. That was a lot of hits to take for anyone, far less someone who had been taught the world should bow at his feet simply because of his last name. Mr. Malfoy, I did what I needed to do in the hope of protecting Parvati. That you too benefited from this requires no thanks. As to Hogwarts, I am her champion and had to help our friend who was trapped down there. Those wards would have already been in place if Dumbledore had been kicked out before the summer, so again no thanks is necessary. I see no debt between us, so please don't consider there to be one. With the formal part over, Harry tried a different tack. Draco, we both got off on the wrong foot. I would also like to think we are both different people since that first meeting. I would say we are a way off being friends, but I hope have moved past the point of being considered enemies. Your father is paying for his crimes and I bear you and your mother no ill will. Goblins preach live and let live. I think we could do with some of that here. Harry offered his hand for shaking, and Draco hesitantly took it. The world shifted for the Slytherin at this point in time. Had that been a pureblood he'd just made the same offer to, Draco would have been beholden to them for the rest of his life. Crow had treated him with honor and integrity, yet logically dismissed any claim of debt between them. Hermione knew she couldn't interfere between Harry and Draco, but had also picked up on Pansy's concern. This was somewhere she could offer advice. Pansy, I know Draco has been cast from the Black family. I also know Lord Black wouldn't sit back and watch you two parted, if you really wanted to be together. Betrothal is not an option available for Harry and me. That doesn't mean we won't fight like hell to stay together. If that is something you would consider, Sirius is in the castle every weekend. I'm certain he would at least speak to you both. Like Draco, Pansy didn't know how to handle this approach. She was as certain as she could possibly be that this offer was genuine, as was the thought behind it. As she'd been taught, Pansy was looking for the ulterior motive for making this offer, and coming up empty. This girl had everything: fame, power, smarts, looks, the heir to one of the biggest fortunes in Britain as her serious boyfriend. Hermione Granger didn't need to waste her time playing Pansy Parkinson for a fool. Thank you, Hermione, that is certainly something Draco and I will talk about. Neither couple thought this brief meeting could have gone much better. Just having two purebloods considering different opinions counted as a victory to Harry and Hermione. Draco and Pansy were left reeling. He expected to find himself beholden to Crow. Instead they'd shaken hands and a tentative offer of help with the betrothal troubles, namely Pansy's father. Neither knew how Edmund Parkinson would take an approach by Lord Black on the matter. That left them thinking they would use that option only as a last resort. Hogwarts students once more adapted to their new normal, and life proceeded as usual. Classes still had to be taught and there were exams to be passed. Helena was keeping Harry informed on the progress of her fellow ghosts. The current prognosis that they would be back amongst the living for Christmas was still on track. Dumbledore's absence was barely noticed. The former headmaster wasn't exactly missed. Augusta was trying to make some sense of his former office, getting the elves to place a lot of the more outlandish knickknacks into storage. Someone at her door halted the redecorating, only for something even more outlandish to walk into the room. Her defense professor was wearing a set of robes so bright, Henrika Hobson would have struggled to look good in them. On Gilderoy, the overall effect landed somewhere between hideous and ridiculous. What can I do for you, Professor? It's these new wards, Madam Longbottom. I don't think they're working properly. In fact, I'm sure I've uncovered a serious flaw in them. The thought that this Ponce could in any way possibly be right never entered Augusta's head. All she was thinking about was a means to get him out of here as quickly as possible. That applied to both her office and Hogwarts. You are the first person I've heard complaining about the new wards. Can you tell me specifically what you think is wrong with them? Oh, I know they are there to prevent all sorts of nastiness passing into the school, but I fear they may be set too severe. Since we returned to the castle almost 2 weeks ago, I haven't had one piece of fan mail. Betty Crocker has never gone this long without writing before. The wards must be filtering my fan mail out. I hardly think that letters from my fans would count as dark or evil. Augusta was going to take great delight in explaining the facts of life to this ass. Professor Lockhart, 4 young students, my grandson amongst them, went down into that chamber and fought not only a basilisk but Lord Voldemort himself. Meanwhile, it was widely reported that the castle's defense against the dark arts professor was the first person from Hogwarts to arrive at Hogsmeade Village. I ran all the way there to raise the alarm. Quote ellipsis. A job that had already been done by Minerva and 2 of the Aurors using the flu system. Instead of assisting with the evacuation, you ran for your life. I would say that was the reason for your lack of fan mail, not what literally are some of the best protective wards in the entire world. You would have thought Gilderoy had been slapped by the way he reacted to that analysis. Don't be preposterous, madam. I am Gilderoy Lockhart. My fans would never desert me. I'm 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. Does that sound like someone who wouldn't get any fan mail? You need to see about having these wards repaired, otherwise, I might be forced to leave Hogwarts. Augusta was delighted the new wards protected the students. If they also got rid of this useless Ponce too, she would probably kiss Barchoke the next time they met. I shall ask Assistant Ambassador Weasley about them when he comes to the castle on Saturday. After all, before his latest promotion, he was a Gringotts curse breaker. Mentioning Bill Weasley was perhaps rubbing Gilderoy's nose in it more than a little bit. The red-headed wizard was everything Lockhart pretended to be. He flounced out of her office in a swirl of robes and ringlets, not a happy wizard. Crow's marauders now looked upon their tutors with something akin to awe. Dumbledore at the height of his powers would have struggled to gain this level of attention from his students. The only exception to this was a heartbroken Colin. The long-bottom ring on Padma's finger was taking some getting used to for the young wizard. Padma was his first crush. Seeing her now betrothed to Neville almost had him in tears every time he saw that ring. Ginny and Luna were certainly helping him understand the Indian beauty simply didn't feel that way about him, and how could he hate Neville when his fellow Gryffindor was going out of his way to ensure the rest of the house didn't make fun of him over the situation. Fun was certainly back on the agenda as they practiced shields, stinging hex exercises. Since they now all knew exactly what getting hit with a stinging hex felt like, they were allowed to wear dragon hide tunics as they dueled. Face shields had been made mandatory. Harry had supplied sets of face shields and tunics purely for this purpose, allowing enough that they could be swapped over while the current duel was taking place. Their aim was now to help their students increase the power of their shields. The only real way to do that was to have someone firing spells at them until it collapsed. There was no reason not to let the dragon hide absorb most of the spell that would eventually get through though. Their plans were to have them dodging and shielding after Christmas, building up experience to help with the difficult decision of when to do one or the other. They were firing 2 stinging hexes at their opponent's shield before then having to receive a couple in return. Anyone whose shield protected them from 5 or over got cheered, and a chocolate frog. The 4 fourth years were now a big part of this class too, so much so that Gryffindor, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw Quidditch practices were now arranged around it. The Slytherins had unopposed use of the pitch every Tuesday evening. Augusta stood with Henrika, there purely to observe but brimming with pride at the same time. As usual, the 4 second years were concentrating on what they were doing and had totally forgotten the adults were present. The noise being generated from the dueling meant the 2 witches didn't need to worry about their conversation being overheard. This is what defense lessons are supposed to be like, not students swinging from the chandelier because the professor ran away terrified. Even the older boys are hanging on their every word, and working seamlessly together as a team to make everything run smoothly. If every class was taught this well, there wouldn't be a need for me inside Hogwarts. This drew a wry chuckle from Henrika. Minerva said pretty much the same when she observed them. She was every bit as impressed. Can I assume you're having no luck in finding someone suitable to take over from Lockhart? Oh, I have the very person in mind. I just need the all-clear from the ministry to offer him the job. Let's be honest here, Padma, Hermione, Harry or my Neville can all teach defense better than the person Dumbledore appointed. The proof of that is currently right in front of us. There was certainly never going to be an argument from Henrika on that subject. Augusta was on a rant though, her anger directed at the former headmaster. Dumbledore seemed to be building his own little empire here, rather forgetting the people he employed were supposed to be teaching students. Snape was horrible at teaching, yet the board could do nothing because Albus protected him. Harry has managed to force through some exceedingly positive changes. I would certainly include you in that list, but it's now up to me to finish the job he started. Henrika had always gotten the impression Augusta Longbottom was a formidable witch. Seeing her impassioned about her new job just confirmed that. In the best British bulldog tradition, she was going to take Hogwarts by the scruff of the neck and shake all those not doing their jobs properly right out of the castle. I could never be classed as an expert on muggles, though I'm very proud to say I have 2 very good friends who are of that persuasion. That's something our muggle studies professor certainly couldn't claim. I doubt if she's actually met any. Even with the time I've spent in the company of the Grangers, I can recognize that most of what she's teaching is wrong. I've sent a copy of the coursework to Dan and Emma for their opinion. I'm not expecting good news. The new High Inquisitor was left shaking her head at her next revelation. Minerva refused to comment on the divination teacher, saying her own opinion was this subject should not be part of the Hogwarts curriculum. After visiting the class, I'm inclined to agree. The students are being taught the methods of divination, but, unless they have the gift, they are wasting their time. You might as well hand a stick to a muggle and tell them how to make something float. They could learn the wand movements and enunciate Wingardium Leviosa until they're blue in the face, they still won't be able to make anything float. Is this a bigger job than you expected? Henrika, I honestly can't believe the mess Dumbledore has left behind. Apart from those I've mentioned, when Neville arrived at Hogwarts there was a bigoted ghost teaching his own version of history, a Death Eater teaching potions and a Voldemort-possessed wizard instructing the students on defense. We've had trolls and a basilisk, what's next? Dementors. When it was all put together like that, it really was a damning indictment of the previous headmaster. Dumbledore always gave me the impression that he wasn't used to people saying no to him. He'd gotten his own way for so long that he began to believe he could do no wrong. More than once I had to remind him that he was not my employer, and that the course I am teaching has already been agreed upon, purposely to bring Hogwarts up to the same standard as the rest of Europe. The lesson was now finishing and all the first years sat on the floor as hot chocolate appeared in front of each student. The relaxed way they all accepted this, and the critique of tonight's lesson that followed astonished Augusta. They had started tonight's lesson by explaining exactly what they hoped to achieve, now they were all sitting and discussing whether they had achieved the goals. Questions and answers flowed easily in both directions, it appeared an informal arrangement yet respect was there from all sides. Harry then gave them a general outline of what they would be doing next week before calling it a night. The 4 fourth years then led the first years back to the dorms, Fred Weasley happily leading the Slytherins down to the dungeons. When they had left, Augusta pulled Neville and Padma into an embrace. I am so proud of you, all 4 of you. I have spent my time here observing professors teaching their subject, what I just witnessed was up there with the best of them. That was simply brilliant, and restored an old witch's faith that Hogwarts can once more be the premier magical school in the world. Neville was beaming at the praise, they all worked hard preparing for this class but really enjoyed passing on what they had learned. Thanks, Gran. We were hoping to hold a Christmas party for them the last week of term, who do we need to ask for permission? You certainly have mine, and I can't see Minerva objecting. If they work like that every week then a party is certainly well deserved. First year students casting shields, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it for myself. Padma was also beaming at the praise, and basking in the acceptance she was being shown as Neville's betrothed. Professor Weasley taught it to us in first year, we didn't see any reason for not teaching it to them. This saw a sigh of frustration emitted from Augusta. Have you any idea how difficult my job becomes when 3 of the best teachers in the school don't work for Hogwarts? It was a totally serious Neville who faced his grandmother. Quote ellipsis. But Gran, there's 4 of us. This saw Hermione theatrically palming her face. Oh great, just what we need, Neville channeling Padma. This saw a tickling hex heading in Hermione's direction, only for Padma's hex to be deflected by her bracelet shield, straight to Augusta. Neville and Harry had the countercast in seconds, only for Augusta to burst out laughing anyway. The fact that her once painfully shy grandson now felt confident enough to joke with her was certainly an occasion worthy of laughter. There wasn't much laughter amongst the 3 people in the minister's office. Cornelius couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Amelia spelled it out very simply. Cornelius, I know these people. You try to give them different levels of award, they will throw them back in your face, and all the gains you've made in the last year will be for nothing. The minister was a political animal and knew what this group publicly refusing ministerial awards would do to his popularity ratings. He also explained the other side of the equation to his head of DMLE. You may be right, Amelia, but think of the alternative. Can you really see me surviving trying to award a Swedish Vila, an Indian witch and a Muggle-born an Order of Merlin, first class? The Wizengamot would have me out on my ear. Amelia knew this would be a tough sell. The head of the DMLE also knew she was right though. You're looking at this all wrong, Cornelius. Where you see a Vila, I see one of Hogwarts' most popular professors, a professor who will become engaged to Lord Black on Boxing Day. I already have my invitation. Where you see a witch of Indian origin, I see a brilliant young lady of ancient magical lineage that just became betrothed to Neville Longbottom. They fought bravely together. Can you honestly see him accepting a higher award than his wife-to-be? This news had Cornelius floundering since none of it had appeared in the Prophet. With the public perception and level of adulation of this group, the last thing the Prophet wanted to do was alienate any of them by forging ahead and making any announcements. They were waiting on official notification from those involved. Amelia then went in for the kill. She was well aware which award would cause the biggest outcry in the Wizengamot chamber. Hermione Granger is certainly a Muggle-born. She is also academically head of her year group. Need I remind you who else is in that year group? This witch is also a friend of the Goblin Nation, and you weren't in the Chamber of Secrets to see what happened just after the beast had been killed. A 12-year-old girl took on the biggest bloody basilisk the world has ever seen, with a goblin sword. Every goblin down there was treating Hermione like some kind of warrior princess. I have it on very good authority that Ragnik is strutting around Gringotts as pleased as Punch that his gamble to make that award to her has paid off far more handsomely than he could ever have imagined. Do you really want to insult them too? Like any good Auror, Amelia had been trained to use her big spells when they counted most. She released them here. So, you have a brilliant young witch whose boyfriend, Centurion Crow, is totally besotted with her. Only goblin culture stands between that couple becoming betrothed too. She will be welcomed into Gringotts with open arms, and don't forget, that same boyfriend has a massive choice to make before he's 17. Surely you can see how the ministry publicly insulting Hermione must affect Harry's decision. Cornelius now had his head in his hands. Of course I can see that. How is that any worse though than trying to push it through the Wizengamot, and failing? Amos, what do you think? Amos Diggory was still getting used to being the chief warlock. What was important to him though was that he did the job properly. He had a wife and son that he loved more than life itself. Those were the 2 most important opinions to Amos. He already knew what Cedric would say. They fight as a team, Cornelius, whatever the battle and whoever the opponent. I had some long chats with my son over this matter. He's very friendly with all 4 of them. Had they asked, he would have been down there with them. He and 3 other 4th years take part in their training every Sunday, and every Sunday they get their asses kicked. After seeing what they did in the Chamber of Secrets, Cedric now thinks getting his ass kicked is a badge of honor. No one else can get near them. Again, this was something Fudge had not heard before. Cedric had only told his father after the Hogwarts evacuation sent him homeward. Did you know that once a week, those 4 teach the entire first year defense against the dark arts? They have first years producing Protego shields. What? Preposterous. That's exactly what I said, Cornelius, until Cedric told me he helps with their lessons, and saw it with his own eyes. The first year call themselves Crow's Marauders, have an official club badge and everything. Oh, the club is also staff sponsored by Professor Hobson, the same Vila who probably saved all their lives down in the Chamber of Secrets. They were all in equal danger, they all played their part in the victory, so therefore should all be treated the same. With a groan, Cornelius' head slumped onto his desktop. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. Has either of you got any other options for me? This was what Amelia was waiting for. Cornelius, I thought the stroke you pulled with the Goblin Ambassador was masterful, so why rest on your laurels? Let's keep pushing reforms, and, if we go down fighting for what we believe in, for what is right. If it's all the same to you, Amelia, I'd rather not go down at all. I'm all out of brilliant ideas at the moment, so anything you have will certainly be listened to. Amelia just had a flash of how Cornelius must have felt trying to sell her the idea of a Goblin Ambassador. This one though was even more out there. In all this, we haven't mentioned the one name at the center of everything we've discussed. Were you just going to hand Harry another Order of Merlin? This got another groan from the minister. What happened to keeping them all the same? They will be the same. Harry's already got one. What he doesn't have is a title. Amelia held her hand up to stop the expected interruptions. Harry Potter is heir to a title. Harry Crow is not. Harry is also Hogwarts champion, a title he will hold for life. I propose we grant him a piece of land, near Hogwarts, with a house and a title. Harry Crow, Baron of King Usi. Amos had to interrupt. Amelia had clearly overlooked something. Quote ellipsis. Except that Harry Crow is a goblin, and goblins can't live anywhere but Gringotts. The words dried up in his throat as Amos realized Amelia had overlooked nothing. Quote ellipsis. Are you crazy? Crazy as a fox. Who's going to give a shit about a Muggle-born witch being awarded an Order of Merlin, first class, when compared to that? The minister totally agreed with that assessment. Yes, they'll be far too busy chasing us out of our offices with pitchforks and burning torches. Ah, but then we release our secret weapon. That led to a pause in the discussion, a pause that was eventually broken by the minister. Are you going to tell us what this secret weapon is? With a canny smile, Amelia revealed her idea. How about some extremely positive goblin publicity? Publicity so positive, we will all want a goblin neighbor. Don't underestimate the popularity of another summer awards ball either, especially when that ball is for the heroes of Hogwarts, and we'll have the new Baron of Kingusy in attendance. Cornelius was now very interested. Positive publicity always had his attention. For over a decade, two prominent pure blood auras have resided in Ward 49 of St. Mungo's. They were alive but took no part in the world around them. They are not there anymore. A few weeks ago I visited them. I sat and had a conversation with Alice Longbottom. Amelia was renowned for her stoicism, but both men could see the emotion clearly etched on her face as she talked about this. They are currently in a goblin medical facility and have even visited a muggle hospital. The point is, our best healers could do nothing for them yet. In our arrogance, we ignored all other options. Frank and Alice will never be the people they were before, but they are already far beyond what the remaining Longbottom family had hoped for. The politician in Cornelius was very weary of this. Just what is the goblin's angle on this? Cornelius, the answer is exceedingly simple, and nothing to do with politics. Not only is Neville one of Harry's best friends, Alice Longbottom is his godmother. Apart from you and Amos here, I have discussed this idea with no one else. There has been no goblin input or scheme. I'm simply offering an alternative to the shocking embarrassment that Miss Granger being denied her award would bring. Are you saying the goblins have no plans to publish this, rubbing our noses in the fact we couldn't heal our own people? Amelia could understand the minister's view. They really knew so little about the goblin nation. When holidaying with Harry over the summer, I got to know Barchoke a lot better. Susan considers him a kind of honorary uncle now. He told me that one of the dreams his nation had was that his son's wedding would see witches, wizards, muggles and goblins all in attendance. I don't see anything wrong with that dream and hope to be one of the witches invited. You better believe everyone will be treated equally by the bride and groom. Amos tried to be the voice of reason here. Amelia, I don't see anything wrong with that dream either. Dreams are good, but we have to face reality here. I think changing another law that affects the goblins is too much, too soon. Amos, I agree with you except for one glaring problem. The boy who lived deciding to remain a goblin would make our government the laughingstock of Europe, if not the world. No one present could dispute what a disaster that outcome would be, so Amelia spelled out some more facts. A wizard killed both his parents, and tried to do the same to him while he was still a babe. It was witches and wizards that placed his godfather in Azkaban and his godmother in St. Mungo's. It was also a wizard that abandoned him on a muggle doorstep as a baby. Are you seeing the pattern here? Both Cornelius and Amos were rather green about the gills at just how badly their society had failed their savior. Amelia, though, was by no means finished. Now, the other side of the coin has the goblins raising Harry to be a fine young man. They were instrumental in freeing his godfather, are totally responsible for bringing back his godmother and treat his chosen girl as a princess. Knowing all that, we need to look at our problem again. Harry thinks of himself as a goblin, and that is the side of him we need to appeal to if we want any chance of that decision ever going in our favor. He won't give a shit about being Baron of Kingusy, but he will proudly accept it, knowing the impact it will have on his nation. Is it too much, too soon? Yes. Can we afford not to do this? That is what we need to decide here. Cornelius was between a rock and a hard place. His choices appeared to be get squashed or try and blast his way out. Do you really think the goblins announcing they managed to heal people we couldn't will have such a positive impact? Absolutely not. But Augusta Longbottom announcing it would. Both she and Neville feel they owe the goblins a debt that can never be repaid. This would be her opportunity to do so. When Augusta Longbottom speaks, witches and wizards the length and breadth of Britain will listen. There are those we will never convince, just like there are those we won't have to, Harry's involvement being enough to guarantee their votes. It's the moderates in the center we need to convince. It will be hard, it will be close, but I think we can pull this off. Cornelius couldn't think of any other alternatives with another old idiom popping into his mind. He might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb. Failing to gain approval for Miss Granger's award would just as surely end his political career as Harry's supposed title would, probably not so swiftly though. He was thinking of something that might just tilt the scales more in their favor. Do you think we could get the goblins to open a Gringotts branch in Hogsmeade? That would certainly help the local businesses and might even see the village grow. Amelia privately thought she could get a lot more than that from the goblins if they could change this law. She nodded her agreement before cautiously proceeding. If we are really going to go ahead with this, can I suggest I privately approach Harry, Augusta and Barchoke on this matter? I would like to gain their opinions before we pass this over to Arthur. Cornelius looked to Amos. I've got nothing better, Minister. While I still think we're proceeding too fast, the proposal will certainly have my personal and public support. Okay, Amelia, proceed with caution and then we'll have another meeting to decide if this is definitely going ahead. At that point, we'll bring Arthur into the mix. Do we have anything else that needs to be dealt with tonight? Just one thing. Augusta wants to know if she can have ministerial backing for offering the defense against the dark arts position to a werewolf. With that, Cornelia's head was once more back on his desk. Thanks for reading.